Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.
Page 1. Hogwarts, oh no, I've become Voldemort. Author, I'm really not Chow Chow. Summary. Cyrus travels to the world of Harry Potter, expecting to be greeted by dazzling magic, but instead he replaces Voldemort's soul in the diary and becomes Tom Riddle. Cyrus, oh no, I've become Voldemort. Voldemort, oh no, I've become a stand-in. During her time in the diary, Cyrus diligently absorbed Riddle's knowledge, awaiting the opportunity for her resurrection. Then, in the summer of 1992, Ginny Weasley wrote her first words in the diary. Internal investment application has been approved. Investors are welcome. Sigrun has taught at the Iceland University of the Arts as a part-time lecturer since and was Dean of the Department of Fine Art from Dash. She held a research position at Reykjavik Art Museum focusing on the role of women in Icelandic art. She studied fine art at the Icelandic College of Arts and Crafts and at Pratt Institute, New York, and holds BA and MA degrees in art history and philosophy from the University of Iceland. Sigrun lives and works in Iceland. Having learned from the mistake of writing the previous book poorly, this time I have prepared a detailed outline, strengthened the main character's storyline, and vowed not to have a bad ending. Keywords: Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Harry Potter. Chapter 1: Cyrus and Ginny. Silver-gray memories flowed through the dark space, like pale moonlight spilling into the morning mist, emitting a faint glow. Cyrus gazed quietly at the unchanging scenery before him. Even though he had no idea how much time had passed, his heart remained restless because he had transmigrated into a soul, no, not even a complete soul, but merely a fragment with a few memories. The owner of this fragment of soul was none other than the infamous Dark Lord Voldemort. Moreover, it was a remnant of the soul from one of the Horcruxes he created during his student days, the 16-year-old Tom Riddle. However, due to his transmigration, Xiao Tang's consciousness no longer exists, and this remnant soul has been restored. To be honest, becoming a Horcrux is incredibly shocking, even in the entire transmigration genre. I've seen plenty of male protagonists in web novels who start out suffering all sorts of humiliation and even life-or-death crises in their previous lives, but it's quite rare to see one who has to find a way to be resurrected immediately after transmigrating. What's even more frustrating is that, trapped in the diary, he can only passively wait for the plot to begin. If it weren't for the fact that he could still recall the magical knowledge that Tom Riddle learned during his school days, he probably would have gone crazy from boredom in this lonely space long ago. As Cyrus slowly flipped through his memories, he couldn't help but admire Tom Riddle's genius. No wonder he became the Dark Lord by 5th grade. He had mastered almost all the magical knowledge in the Hogwarts curriculum, and even had a considerable amount of dark magic from the Forbidden Library. At this age, ordinary students are probably still restless and yearning for adventure during puberty. In fact, most wizards who truly leave a significant mark on history are like this. Dumbledore and Grindelwald wanted to change the world even in their student days, and later put that ambition into action. Under their jointly formulated program, Grindelwald almost revolutionized the entire wizarding world. In comparison, Voldemort's vision was indeed much smaller, but his talent was no less. Cyrus absorbed Tom Riddle's magical knowledge. He had experienced countless days like this before, but today seemed slightly different. The silvery mist was stirred, and the black ink drifted down like a wisp of smoke, falling into the silent memories and slowly spreading. August 19th, sunny. The writing ends here. Cyrus jumped up in a flash. At her worn-out desk, Ginny Weasley, who had been about to write in her diary, stared in astonishment at the blank page. The words she had just written had vanished. On the yellowed diary, apart from the printed words on the cover and the blurry name T.M. Riddle on the back, there was no other word. Riddle. Ginny had never actually heard of this name before, which wasn't surprising, since she always used second-hand textbooks. Unsurprisingly, this person named Riddle was the first owner of this diary. But no one has ever told me that this is a magic book. This natural Gryffindor couldn't help but feel a great curiosity. This summer, she experienced some truly exciting things. First, her idol Harry Potter moved into her house. Then she received an owl letter from Hogwarts, and now, a magical diary was hidden inside her previously annoying second-hand textbooks. So she picked up a quill, dipped it in ink, and continued to try writing. Today is a special day. The short half-sentence was written on it, but the ink was absorbed as if it were written on a sponge, leaving not even a scratch. Ginny turned the page in surprise, but the back of the paper was also clean. Where did all the ink go? Little Ginny stared with bright eyes, her face full of confusion. Just then, a line of writing, or rather, a greeting, slowly appeared on the blank paper. "Hello, did anything good happen to you today? Ginny was startled and hurriedly dropped the quill in her hand, jumping aside and looking at the diary with a face full of fear. Every child raised in a magical family inevitably hears the warning, "Ever trust anything that can think for itself unless you see where it hides its mind." This is similar to how Muggle parents tell their children never to trust any stranger who tries to approach you with fruit. A magical artifact capable of thought is highly likely to be evil. Maybe I should talk to my mom about this. Ginny couldn't help but think. This thought almost occupied her mind, but she hesitated to act on it. Instead, another thought began to slowly grow. My mother picked out the diary herself at Flourish and Blott's bookstore, along with all the textbooks. If it were truly dangerous, she wouldn't have given it to me. Perhaps I can keep it, or see what tricks it has up its sleeve. If anything goes wrong, I can tell Mom later. As a typical little lioness, Ginny was by no means lacking in courage and curiosity. She bent down to pick up the old quill pen and slowly walked back to her desk. The greeting line had not disappeared and seemed to be waiting for her response. "Who are you?" These 3 words, along with the greeting above, flashed simultaneously and then disappeared from Ginny's sight, followed by another line of text. "My name is Tom Riddle, and I am a small fragment of memory left behind by the owner of this diary. Where did you get it?" Upon seeing this sentence, Ginny did not reply immediately. Instead, she opened her mouth and whispered, "Harry Potter." Only after realizing that what she said was a normal sentence, rather than a boring doggerel, did she breathe a sigh of relief and continue writing. "My mother bought it in the used book section of Flourish and Blott's." Flourish and Blott's used book section. "So, you're a Hogwarts student too." The being in the diary seemed very surprised and delighted, as if it had met a stranger who was not known to it but was closely connected to it. Moreover, the word also gave Ginny a great sense of familiarity. "I'm about to start 1st grade this year. Are you also a student at Hogwarts?" "I used to be, but I graduated later. I never imagined that my diary would end up in the hands of a young wizard at Hogwarts. Maybe it's fate. By the way, I haven't asked your name yet." Ginny hesitated for a moment before writing down her name. "Ginny Molly Weasley, you can call me Ginny." Just then, another line of text appeared in the diary, but before she could read it, a knock on the door startled her so much that she slammed the diary shut. "Ginny, dinner's ready. Are you asleep? I've called you several times." It was Molly Weasley's voice from outside the door. "No, Mom, I'm coming right now. My new book is launching. Internal submissions have been accepted, so invest with confidence. I'd really appreciate a few favorites, and reading it means a lot to me as a new author. Oh. Chapter 2: Cyrus's Resurrection Plan. Cyrus couldn't see or hear anything outside, but he could feel the diary being slammed shut, which made him somewhat anxious. Won't Ginny have been found out? He didn't know when Tom Riddle in the original story began communicating with Ginny Weasley. However, he believed that as long as Ginny started writing every single word in her diary, Tom Riddle would never give up the opportunity to communicate with her. Therefore, since Tom Riddle in the original story wasn't discovered, he shouldn't be exposed so quickly either. As for why the other party suddenly closed the book and disappeared, there might be other reasons, and he can only wait and see. Ever since Cyrus transmigrated into the diary, he had been waiting for this opportunity. He was willing to be more patient in order to be resurrected. In fact, he had initially devised 2 plans, depending on who opened the diary. If Lucius Malfoy had opened the diary, he would have directly asked him to find some dark wizards and use their life force to resurrect them. However, it now seems that when Voldemort gave the diary to Malfoy, he only told him that the diary could open the Chamber of Secrets, but did not mention the Horcruxes. Now, Cyrus can only continue with Tom Riddle's original resurrection plan, absorbing the life of the young wizard, and then using that to influence reality, ultimately achieving resurrection. Of course, he wasn't Tom Riddle, so the duel with Harry in the Chamber of Secrets could be completely omitted. Instead, he could use this opportunity to slip away before Dumbledore was summoned back to school by the Board of Governors. Overall, it was a pretty good plan. Importantly, no one died in the process, not even Filch's cat, Mrs. Lorry's, survived. Except, of course, for the roosters Ginny strangled. In response, Cyrus could only say, "I'm sorry, Kun." Of course, this plan was indeed dangerous, the greatest danger being Dumbledore himself. But Cyrus had no better option. He didn't have legs, and if Ginny didn't take him into Hogwarts, he had nowhere else to go. Besides, how could those adult wizards outside be as easily fooled as the simpletons inside Hogwarts? Once he has a physical form, leaving Hogwarts with the powerful basilisk won't be difficult, and his safety will be greatly enhanced after leaving Hogwarts. Even if Dumbledore finds out he's behind it all, he probably won't be able to find him. As for the idea of being honest with Dumbledore, Cyrus rejected it as soon as he thought about it. Dumbledore would probably never trust someone who wore Tom Riddle's face. He would only think that Voldemort was trying to play tricks on him, especially after failing to steal the Philosopher's Stone in the previous school year, and perhaps plotting some other scheme. Ginny hurried down the stairs and saw Harry chatting and laughing with Ron at the dining table. She immediately blushed, lowered her head, and sat quietly in her chair, behaving like a lady. The other members of the Weasley family were used to it. Ginny had been like this ever since Fred and George secretly drove off in the magical car to pick up Harry. Harry wasn't familiar with Ginny, he just thought Ron's little sister was a bit eccentric and didn't talk much. Harry gave her a brief greeting and immediately focused on the food on the table. At the Burrow, his meals were far better than at the Dursleys. He ate his fill at almost every meal, making him worry that he'd gained several pounds before school started. Perhaps the Quidditch team would refuse to let him continue as Seeker because of his increased size. However, these days he has been playing home Quidditch with the other members of the Weasley family from time to time, and his skills have obviously not deteriorated, which has made Harry feel much more relaxed. After dinner, Ginny hurried back to her room, locking the door from the inside to make sure no one could enter. Then she went to her desk and carefully placed her hand on the diary. She hadn't noticed before, but now she realized the book was indeed quite old. The black cover was slightly faded, but very smooth. Despite its age, it wasn't torn at all. The cover had the date and some other name printed on it, making it look a bit like a publishing house or something. Page 2. Is this a diary from 50 years ago? 50 years is a very long time, especially considering that the book's owner lived through such a terrifying era. Perhaps Mr. Tom Riddle is already dead? Ginny couldn't help but think. She continued to open the book, but the sentence she hadn't had time to read before had disappeared. She waited for a moment, but no new letter appeared on the page. He may not know what's happening outside the book. Thinking this way lessened Ginny's worries about the diary. At least for now, it didn't seem to pose any threat. So she picked up the quill pen again, dipped it in ink, and began to write. Inside the diary, Cyrus anxiously awaited Ginny's response. He was unable to do anything. His heart felt like it was being gently scratched by a fluffy kitten. The mysterious spells, profound potions, and spectacular transformations of the past could no longer hold his attention. It's as if he's a husband and father anxiously waiting for his wife and child in the corridor of the delivery room. Now, the child he had been waiting for has finally been born. Hello Mr. Riddle, are you still there? My mother just came by, and am not sure if I should talk to her about you. Cyrus's excited heart instantly calmed down. Clearly, this was the most crucial moment. Would he gain Ginny's trust and allow his plan to continue, or would his scheme be exposed, leading to his destruction? Saying no directly might arouse suspicion, and that would only backfire. He didn't dare to think for too long, and responded after a moment. Of course you can, in fact you should. Any wizard should be wary of magical items unless you are really sure they are trustworthy. To be honest, I thought you had already checked them before talking to me. Luckily you got my diary. If it had been the wizard's sonnets, you would probably be in danger. You're right, Mr. Riddle. I don't want to be limited to reciting doggerel from now on. Of course, I believe Mr. Riddle is trustworthy. Upon seeing this response, Ginny immediately giggled. She remembered that she had specifically recited Harry Potter's name to test whether she was under a curse. However, this very fact made the diary seem less like an evil magical artifact. It cares about me. Ginny's eyes were sparkling. Of course I wouldn't do anything as cruel as those dark wizards. In fact, I was one of the best students at Hogwarts. I was a prefect, then president of the student council, and I even received a special award for my contributions to the school. I think that medal is still in the trophy room to this day. Cyrus said, trying to imply to Ginny that he was trustworthy while changing the subject. Really? You sound just like Percy, Ginny replied in surprise. But he hasn't become student council president yet, and he hasn't received any special awards. Who is Percy? He's my brother. He was the Gryffindor prefect last year. And he got 12 OWL certificates, but he's a bit boring. By this time, Ginny was almost convinced that the diary was harmless. I don't think I need to tell Mom about your situation. What do you think? Just this once Cyrus suppressed his inner joy and said earnestly, sometimes having a little secret of your own is an interesting thing. My new book is launching. Internal submissions have been accepted, so invest with confidence. I'd really appreciate a few favorites, and reading it means a lot to me as a new author. Oh. Chapter 3 Impure Bloodline. Summer vacation passed quickly. Over the past 10 days, Cyrus had almost gained Ginny's trust. Now, the two were as close as old friends who had known each other for years. To be honest, it wasn't difficult at all. Although Ginny was the most beloved child in the family, as a girl, she always had secrets that she couldn't confide in her family. This was where Cyrus came in handy. Sometimes Cyrus felt guilty for seducing young girls, but for the sake of resurrection, he couldn't care less. After all, Ginny wouldn't die in the end, and everyone petrified by the basilisk would eventually be saved. Everyone else in the Burrow noticed that Ginny was behaving strangely, because she hadn't been shouting or yelling since August and had been going back to her room early every day. Everyone assumed it was Harry's doing, and Fred and George would exchange glances and chuckle to themselves each time. Mr. Riddle, Hogwarts starts tomorrow. Cyrus could sense the anticipation and excitement in Ginny's words. For every young wizard, going to school was an exciting thing, because it meant that they were not a squib. At the same time, he was even more excited than Ginny. The path to resurrection was almost within reach. If the plan went smoothly, he would have a physical form before the end of the next semester. So he replied with extreme enthusiasm. Congratulations, Ginny. I'm sure Hogwarts won't let you down. Thanks. A hesitant thank you slipped out, and Cyrus guessed she must have more to say. To be honest, I'm a little worried about my sorting ceremony. Fred and George won't tell me what happened. But I overheard them talking to Ron last year, and I might be facing a troll, she said anxiously. And I know they did deal with a troll last year. In addition, I am also worried about being bullied at school. Upon seeing Ginny's words, Cyrus couldn't help but smile. Keeping the sorting ceremony a secret from every first-year wizard has been an annual tradition, leading to many outlandish claims. However, when it comes to the sorting ceremony, Cyrus can't help but regret missing last year's ceremony. He probably won't be able to utter the phrase pure-blooded again. Of course, he's Voldemort now, a half-blood. That was a lie, Ginny. The school wouldn't send a first-year wizard to deal with a troll. Keeping the sorting ceremony a secret is a Hogwarts tradition. Actually, the sorting ceremony isn't that dangerous, so you don't need to worry at all. As for being bullied, have you forgotten all the evil spells I taught you? If anyone dares to speak ill of you, just pick up your wand and give them a good wand. Let them know you're not someone to mess with, Cyrus said without hesitation. Okay, I will fight back. But what do you mean by not too dangerous? Ginny countered. Cyrus couldn't help but tease. Of course, it's to ensure the young wizards don't die, otherwise the parents won't be happy, don't you think? Thank you for your comfort. Ginny slammed her diary shut in annoyance. She hadn't expected Tom Riddle to refuse to tell her the details of the sorting house. In fact, his explanation only made her more worried. That wretched Tom, I never want to talk to you again. She angrily slammed the diary onto the bed and sat there muttering. But after a while, she couldn't resist opening the diary again. Are you sure we don't need to fight the trolls? Of course I'm sure. Besides, even if we really have to fight trolls, I don't think you need to worry. Don't forget the spells I taught you. If you need, I can also tell you how to deal with trolls. Their brains are small. You just need to use the levitation charm to lift a heavy object and then smash it hard on the back of their heads to knock them unconscious, Cyrus reassured him. Perhaps to make up for deceiving Ginny, he reluctantly took on the role of a tutor, teaching her almost all the spells in Standard Spells I. Now, Ginny might be even more powerful than Ron. Seeing this, Ginny felt relieved. I'll trust you this once. Good night, Mr. Riddle. Good night, Ginny. Have a good day tomorrow. Just as Cyrus had wished, Ginny did indeed have a smooth second day. The problem was that things weren't going well for Harry and her brother Ron. The two of them missed the Hogwarts Express, and worse, no one knew about it before Hermione came looking for her. Hi Ginny, have you seen Harry and Ron? I couldn't find them anywhere in the train. Hermione saw Ginny as if she had seen a savior. Fred and George said they were following you. No, my parents took me to the platform first. Ginny shook her head. Next to her sat Luna, who had white hair. Ginny thought Luna was a bit strange. But they should be on the train. We came together, Ginny said strangely. I can't find them anywhere. Hermione plopped down opposite Ginny, huffing and puffing, and she had a bad feeling about it. The child is so quiet that he must be acting like a monster. God knows what those two troublemakers will do. I just hope those two stop losing points for Gryffindor, Hermione said. At that moment, an ethereal voice rang in Hermione's ears, as soft as a ghost floating in the air. I'm not sure. Luna's eyes widened. What? I'm not sure if he'll get points deducted for sitting in a box flying in the sky, but I think it's cool and I want to try it. She looked out the window. What? Hermione and Ginny raised their voices at the same time and turned to look out the window. Ron and Harry waved to them happily, like two highly regarded generals. That's Dad's car. They don't think they're so great, do they? Hermione said with a ridiculous expression, clearly furious. Great, they'll definitely deduct a lot of points from Gryffindor, and they might even be expelled. Get fired. Ginny's face turned pale, and she screamed in panic. She was still dreaming of spending 6 happy years of her student life with Harry Potter. But if Hermione was telling the truth, then it was all over. Don't worry, I just said it's possible. Hermione, thinking Ginny was worried about Ron, immediately reassured her, we did something much crazier last year, but nothing happened. As long as they don't get seen by muggles, I don't think there will be any major problems. But this kind of behavior is really... She looked out the window, hesitant to speak, when the magical car finally shot into the clouds once more and disappeared. Never mind, I'll go find Neville. Hermione stood up and walked to the door alone, leaving Ginny and her classmates alone. Have a good time, Ginny. Thank you. My new book is launching. Internal submissions have been accepted, so invest with confidence. I'm really asking for your support and reading. It means so much to me, a new author like myself. Oh. Please, everyone, don't let your book die while you're trying to support it. Sometimes it just dies. Sob sob sob. Chapter 4. Night outing on the first day of school. Tom, you're lying to me. Ginny sat angrily at her desk, her quill pen practically stabbing into the paper. It was clear she was really angry. Normally, she would address Cyrus as Mr. Riddle with more respect. Page 3. Be gentle, don't hurt me. And when did I ever lie to you? Cyrus replied immediately. Humph. You said the sorting ceremony would be dangerous. And what happened? It was just a tattered hat. Did you think it would bite my head off? Ginny said angrily. What angered her most was that before the sorting ceremony, she had confidently boasted to the other students about her first-hand information, and then, you've made me lose face. However, she stopped poking at the book and carefully examined it, only to find that she hadn't left any marks on the diary, at which point she breathed a sigh of relief. In reality, it's almost impossible to destroy a Horcrux using physical means. I never said the sorting ceremony would be dangerous. I told you not to worry, that there wouldn't be much danger. And look what happened, just as I said, you're perfectly fine. Congratulations, Cyrus said mischievously. Having endured a long period of solitude, his interactions with Ginny were a great comfort to him. Sills was not Voldemort after all. Yes, but what you said gave me the feeling that you might lose an arm or a leg. It seems that one of us has a slightly different understanding of the word not too dangerous. Thank you, that means it's not dangerous at all. Did you expect that hat to suffocate me? Ginny retorted. Not entire lie. If you're inherently evil, it will assign you to Azkaban, and that's where the danger lies, Cyrus rambled on. However, Ginny clearly believed it. Her eyes widened. Are you serious? Of course it is. Doesn't it talk to you in your head? The sorting hat can see into people's hearts. Those who are inherently evil should be placed in Azkaban. That is actually the fifth house of Hogwarts, and the magical creatures it represents are Dementors. I've never heard of these. There are many secrets about Hogwarts that you don't know. Even Dumbledore couldn't possibly know all the secrets here. Exploring the castle is a very interesting thing. I remember that Gryffindor's tradition is to go on night tours, Cyrus tempted. This is against school rules, and I don't think Percy and Hermione will be happy. Really? But I think your other two twin brothers might be willing to support you. Ginny had already told him some details about the Weasley family over the past few days, so Cyrus could speak of these things without any reservations. They really do thrive on chaos. Let's not talk about that. Did anything interesting happen on the first day of school? Did you make any friends? Cyrus asked with concern. Of course. It was hilarious. Ginny scribbled heavily on the paper, clearly being sarcastic. Harry and Ron were late. They rode in their dad's car all the way down from the sky and were witnessed by several muggles. They ended up crashing into a whomping willow or something. Many people thought they were going to get expelled. Thank goodness they didn't. This was truly a fascinating experience. I just feel terrible. What if Harry gets expelled? Ron must have been the one who encouraged this, and Dad will probably be in trouble too, Ginny said angrily. You care a lot about that Harry Potter? Cyrus asked sharply. This made the furious Ginny panic, her face turning red as if her secret thoughts had been exposed. No, I just think Harry he seems quiet, not like a reckless person. Ginny covered her burning face and wrote this sentence in her diary with one hand. She was just glad that Mr. Riddle couldn't see her face, otherwise it would have been too embarrassing. So, you don't care about him? Of course not. Ginny quickly denied, then hesitated before writing, at most, I admire him a little. You know, he defeated the mystic, and I grew up hearing his stories. He is indeed remarkable, so I think you don't need to worry about him. Harry Potter defeated the Man of Void, which can be said to have saved the wizarding world. If Dumbledore were to fire him, he would surely receive thousands of howling letters the next day, don't you think? You're right. Ginny's mood improved considerably, though her cheeks were still flushed. I need to sleep, Mr. Riddle. I have class tomorrow. Sleep? No, I suggest you go for a night stroll. Cyrus immediately tempted. But, don't you want to explore inside the castle? But there's no difference if you go during the day. Of course it's different. If you always follow the rules, you'll never see Hogwarts under the silvery moonlight at night. Not to mention, playing hide-and-seek with the warden is a lot of fun. Aren't you tempted at all? Of course not. Which way should I go? Ginny asked as she walked, quickly writing in her diary. Even the strong-willed Ginny succumbed to her curiosity. She was flustered and furtive, looking up and glancing around every few seconds. But what troubled her most was that she had absolutely no idea about the castle's layout. Even if she wanted to go somewhere, it was all in complete darkness. Why don't you go check the fourth-floor corridor? Didn't your brother say he and Harry Potter fought the Void Man over there last year? Let's pay homage to the place where the great Harry Potter once fought. Ginny's eyes lit up. She thought it was a great idea. Which way is the corridor on the fourth floor? If you were in the Gryffindor Tower right now, then. A map slowly emerged in the diary. This is a map Cyrus drew based on Voldemort's memories. It contains almost no secret passages, since Voldemort wasn't interested in such trivial matters. And there's no need for Ginny to know about some of the secret rooms. Ginny glanced at it quickly and immediately closed the diary. She had heard that teachers sometimes patrolled at night, and they might bump into other students who were out at night. She didn't want anyone to know that she was talking to a book. The corridor on the fourth floor, it's this way. Ginny, who wasn't very experienced with nighttime outings, quickly headed out after confirming her direction. She couldn't wait to see where Harry had fought last year. However, she was completely unaware of the dark figure that appeared behind her. The new book has been launched, internal investment has been completed, so invest with confidence. Please add this to your favorites and recommend it. It means a lot to me as a new author. Love you all. Chapter 5, The Fourth Floor Corridor and Metal Display Room. Ginny tiptoed through the dark castle. It was almost midnight, and there wasn't a single light in the corridors. The wind howled through the darkness, and the tall trees outside the castle swayed their branches in the wind, looking like twisted, bird-like man-eating monsters. All of this made Ginny a little scared. She was suspicious and easily frightened. Even the slightest noise would terrify her. Ginny is now regretting putting the diary away. What if a three-headed monster with a heartless nature were to emerge around the next corner? Ron had told her that a friend of theirs had kept a three-headed dog the size of a house in the castle last semester. Even with the diary in hand, Mr. Riddle couldn't help her. Mr. Riddle. She could only clutch her diary tightly to her chest, trying to draw a little bit of courage from it, as if that way she wouldn't be alone, but would have someone with her. Perhaps this diary truly possessed such magic. Ginny gradually felt at ease, and she discovered that this enormous castle, which seemed only terrifying in appearance, was actually incredibly spacious and remarkably ancient and magnificent. It was far more interesting than her cramped little home. She now fully realized the joy of strolling through the castle at night, doing whatever she wanted, ignoring school rules, running freely down the corridors, even recklessly unleashing fire with her wand. At most, she might be warned by the portraits on the walls or passing ghosts. For example, right now, Ginny has encountered the Gryffindor ghost. It's not good for a little girl to wander around the castle alone so late at night. Ah, Gryffindor, obvious. Let me think, Ginny Weasley, right? The Weasley family hair is really easy to spot. But you're out at night on your very first day of school. You're even more impressive than your two brothers, Sir Nicholas said happily. Hello, almost headless Nick. Ginny certainly recognized Nick, because he was performing his split head operation at the Gryffindor dinner table, just like every year, but unfortunately, there was still a little bit of skin connecting his head and neck. How rude of you. You won't even call me a knight, Sir Nicholas said, feigning anger. It was indeed a pity that he almost lost his head. According to him, he was also unhappy that the axe had chopped at his neck dozens of times. Yes, Sir Nicholas, Ginny immediately replied. Good boy, have a pleasant night out. Also, don't go to the 5th floor, Peeves is over there. And don't use your wand, or you'll attract Filch. Sir Nicholas, in a great mood, gave a couple of reminders, then passed through the wall with his head hanging around his neck. So Ginny put away her wand and continued walking in the dark. Before long, she reached the edge of the 4th floor corridor and found a wooden door. This is it. Locked. No problem for Milo Homura. She drew her wand, and the lock on the wooden door clicked open, falling to the ground with a clatter. Ginny couldn't help but feel smug. Luckily, Mr. Riddle taught me all the spells from the first year. She happily pushed open the door and went inside. The room was pitch black. Fluorescence. The tip of the wand immediately lit up, illuminating the room. To Ginny's disappointment, the house was incredibly boring. There was nothing there. There was no terrifying Cerberus, but one that would fall asleep at the sound of singing, nor a trapdoor leading to the underground. There's nothing here. She laid the diary flat on the ground, holding up her glowing wand in one hand, and wrote crookedly. Perhaps Dumbledore restored all of these, Cyrus replied. But there are many interesting things in the castle. Do you know how many secret passages and chambers there are? Or if you get hungry at night and want something to eat, just go down to the Great Hall. There's a painting of fruit there. Scratch the pear in the painting, and it will turn into a doorknob. Never mind, I'm not very hungry. I ate enough at the dinner party, Ginny refused. She was a little disappointed at not finding anything related to Harry, but she quickly thought of something else. By the way, Mr. Riddle. You mentioned before that you received a special contribution award. May I go see it? Of course, Cyrus said immediately. I'm glad you remember. The metal display room is on the 4th floor. Just turn a few corners from here and you'll get there. So Ginny closed her diary again, extinguished the light of her wand, and quietly walked out. A few minutes later, another dark figure appeared here. Hurry, Mrs. Loriskatch, those brats who broke the rules. I heard them. Filch's voice was hoarse and unpleasant, like that of an evil wizard who had drunk too much magic potion. But if that were the case, he might actually be happier. He wasn't very good at walking, and he awkwardly trotted over, carrying an oil lamp in one hand. Ah, found it, a lock. Careless fellow. He excitedly picked up the chain that had fallen to the ground. He really wanted to tie the chain to those little wizards and hang them from the roof for days. Page 4. Quick, it must be those two Weasley boys. Don't let them get away. He urged. Mrs. Lorry sniffed the lingering scent on the ground and slowly followed Ginny's departing steps. Ginny wandered around the metal display room, which must have been enchanted with a seamless stretching spell, because the room was much larger than it appeared from the outside. Many medals were displayed in rows, including Quidditch trophies, other competition trophies, and the names of prefects and class presidents, all of which were placed behind a huge glass panel. By the dim light, Ginny saw that Percy's name was left on it. At the same time, she naturally saw Tom Riddle's name. In fact, this name had appeared many times in the metal display room, and Ginny could easily imagine how outstanding the recipient must be. The Special Contribution Award was completely different from the other awards. The medal was very large, highlighting its special status. However, it didn't specify the exact reason for Tom Riddle's receipt of the award. Ginny was immediately filled with curiosity and couldn't wait to know the answer, so she opened her diary again. This had almost become her signature move. However, this time the diary was interrupted before it could even be opened. A hand reached out from the darkness and grabbed Ginny's wrist. Ginny's eyes widened in horror. Please recommend and bookmark this. My lovely little ones, please don't keep books as pets. Love you all. Chapter 6 Secrets and Guardian Charms. Fred, George. Ginny screamed in panic, but Fred quickly covered her mouth. Keep your voice down, Ginny, Filch is not far away. George said quickly. What are you doing here? Ginny asked in a low, flustered voice. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to jump out of her small chest. When did they appear next to me? Did they see me talking to my diary? These two questions kept echoing in her mind. Ginny felt like a prisoner being led to the execution platform, just waiting for the executioners George and Fred to speak before they would swing their axe to separate her from the diary. However, neither of them mentioned the diary. Sorry I startled you. Fred slowly released her and said with a smile, I'll explain later. Now come with us. Without another word, the two of them grabbed Ginny and rushed out of the metal display room, heading in one direction. As they walked, Ginny heard a sharp sound getting closer and closer. It's Filch's Hogwarts caretaker, probably the most hated person in the whole school, Fred whispered in her ear. Oh, and Snape too. If he catches us, that would be terrible. Professor McGonagall will deduct points from our grades, which isn't so bad, to be honest. But it would be so boring to put us in detention and make us write apologies, George said. Luckily, he hasn't caught us since freshman year, right, Fred? That's right. Fred proudly led Ginny to a witch statue. At that moment, she could hear that the caretaker named Filch seemed to be very close, and perhaps he would catch them around the corner. What should we do? Ginny wasn't as panicked as before. Fred and George had indeed frightened her, but she thought they had discovered her communication with the diary. Of course we have a secret weapon. Fred triumphantly drew his wand and tapped the one-eyed witch twice on the head. Separate left and right. The next moment, to Ginny's astonishment, the stone statue split in the middle, revealing a dark secret passage. Get in quickly. The three people immediately crawled inside, and then the stone statue slowly closed up. Lumos. Let's wait here for a while. Neither Fred nor George suggested continuing along the secret passage. Where does this secret passage lead? We can't go anywhere because the road ahead is blocked, Fred lied, trying to sound casual. Although he was glad that his sister wasn't as boring as Percy, and was even better than Ron, it wasn't a good idea to tell her about the secret passage out of the school in first grade. Fortunately, Ginny was thinking about something else and didn't suspect them at all. How did you find me? In the end, she still asked the question that mattered most to her. To be honest, we saw you as soon as you came out of the tower, George said. You've been following me the whole time. Ginny's eyes widened. If that's the case, wouldn't they find out that I'm communicating with Mr. Riddle in my diary from time to time? Of course not. We're not that bored. Fred immediately denied it. Actually, we were planning to go check out the Forbidden Forest, but we only got halfway there when we found you were almost caught by Filch, so we came to rescue you, right, George? That's right. George nodded with a smile. But how did you know that Filch and I were here? This is our secret. Fred and George exchanged a knowing glance and laughed simultaneously. For now, we don't plan to reveal this secret to the public. Not even you, Ginny. A secret. Ginny looked at them with a scrutinizing gaze, but neither of the twins yielded. Fine, I'm used to it anyway. Besides, who doesn't have secrets? As she spoke, she subconsciously hugged the diary she was holding even tighter. Fred and George, oblivious to her subtle actions, laughed instead. Come on, Ginny, that's no secret. Almost everyone in the family knows you like Harry. Except for Ronnie. George added. You're right, except for little Ronnie, he really is a child who never grows up. Fred said, shaking his head with a laugh. Upon hearing this, Ginny immediately blushed. Surprisingly, she wasn't angry at all. Instead, she felt fortunate and proud. I'm afraid you'll never know what my real secret is. After a while, Fred took out the Marauder's map when Ginny wasn't paying attention to him, quickly glanced at it, and then put it away. Alright, let's go. Filch has gone to the 6th floor now. Pee-Pee is hanging out with him and might be causing him trouble, he said gloatingly. What? But how did you know? I already told you, it's a secret. A secret Aijia can't tell anyone. George opened the door to the secret passage, and sure enough, there was no one outside. By the way, this secret passage is also a secret. Don't tell anyone. I don't want to turn this place into Gryffindor's common room. You two won't tell me your secrets, but you expect me to keep them for you. Don't forget why we're here, to save you. Otherwise, you'd be done for. He'll definitely be expelled. Okay, I don't want to be ungrateful, Ginny said helplessly. Then, the three of them returned to the tower together. The plump lady wasn't surprised at all when she saw them. Password, child. Honey-eating bird. Back in her dorm, Ginny tiptoed into bed so as not to wake her roommate. She had wanted to talk to Mr. Riddle about the special contribution award and other things that had happened that evening, but before she could even pick up a pen, drowsiness overwhelmed her, making her head spin. In the end, she could only hurriedly write down "good night" and then fell asleep. Good night, sweet dreams, Ginny. After giving a reply, Cyrus resumed his study of the spell. Although Voldemort was very talented in his youth, he was ultimately too inexperienced and lacked knowledge, and there were also some spells that he did not know. Guardian spell. To successfully use this spell, the caster must concentrate on recalling the happiest memory they can think of. Tragically, Voldemort, who didn't understand love, naturally wouldn't understand happiness. Of course, given Voldemort's abilities, it wouldn't make any difference whether he knew the spell or not. But Cyrus still hoped to learn the spell. The Patronus charm is useful for defending against dark magic and resisting dark creatures. Driving away Dementors is only a small part of its uses. Please recommend and favorite this post. Shower me with your votes, my darlings. Chapter 7 After School Tutoring. The incantation for the guardian angel is not difficult, and Cyrus understands the principle behind it very well. Tom Riddle had tried to master this spell before, but ultimately failed. Cyrus, on the other hand, understood the theory, but having never held a wand before, he didn't know if he could actually cast the spell. Cyrus didn't receive another message from Ginny until the evening of the following day. Good evening, Mr. Riddle. I almost missed my class this morning, but thankfully my roommate woke me up. Cyrus sensed a complaint in Ginny's words and immediately replied, almost. That means no. I think last night's outing was quite fun, wasn't it? Even if we were really late, it was worth it. Anyway, I can teach you most of the knowledge, maybe even better than the professors, because I'm more patient and it's one-on-one tutoring. But I'll lose points, and I don't want to become a Gryffindor sinner, Ginny wrote, blushing. Then, as if remembering something, she eagerly continued writing, Mr. Riddle, would you like to know what happened after I went to the medal room? She paused after writing the sentence, keeping everyone in suspense, waiting for her Mr. Riddle's response. Appreciate further details. Ginny wasn't entirely satisfied with the answer, but she still pouted and started writing. I almost got caught by the caretaker, but Fred and George helped me hide. They have a secret. They can know where someone is even if they're blind. And they also know some secret passages. It's near the one-eyed witch statue in the 4th floor corridor. They told me to keep it a secret, but I think it should be alright to tell you. By the way, Mr. Riddle, this isn't on the map you gave me. Marauder's map? Cyrus immediately knew what the twins' secret was. The Marauder's map, created by Harry's father and the 4 Marauders, was so meticulously crafted that even Dumbledore's location was marked wherever he was in the school. As a magical artifact, the Marauder's map was truly ingenious. Cyrus was also interested in the existence of the Marauder's map, but after thinking about it, he realized that the map was not of any use to his plans. Moreover, many places in Hogwarts could not be shown even on a map, such as the Room of Requirement and the Chamber of Secrets. Page 5. As for the secret passages to leave Hogwarts, having read the original books, he knew of 3, one through the Willow of Men, one through the one-eyed witch statue on the 4th floor, and one behind the mirror on the 5th floor. These 3 roads are enough for him. That's normal, Ginny. At Hogwarts, there are countless secrets. But I doubt they would know the secrets I know. For example? Ginny asked provocatively. For example, some secret rooms. Cyrus' words seemed to have a magical pull on Ginny. A secret room? That's right. Cyrus replied slowly. He didn't intend to reveal Slytherin's secret room right now. In fact, there were quite a few other secret rooms in the castle besides Slytherin's. Tom Riddle had discovered many when he was searching for Slytherin's secret room before, but most of them were empty or only contained some broken pieces. As a magical castle with a history of over 1,000 years, Hogwarts actually has many secret rooms. Although most of them are empty, they are sometimes enough to serve as a temporary sanctuary. He revealed the locations of several secret rooms in a row, much to Ginny's surprise. Why didn't you say so before? I think it's more surprising and delightful to discover these things yourself, don't you think? Ginny nodded and wrote down what happened in class that day in her diary. Because she had studied the material beforehand, she received a lot of praise and earned several extra points for Gryffindor, almost like a mini Hermione. However, her personality was not as sensitive and sharp as Hermione's, so she was not disliked by others, but instead made many friends. Oh, right, Ron got a yelling letter from Mom this morning. It seems Dad's in trouble because of them too. Ron's always getting into trouble. Fred and George were right, he's like a little kid who never grows up. Ginny couldn't find anyone to share this with during the day, so she confided in Cyrus. And, actually, I feel a little embarrassed too. Because in class, people often ask me, is that the guy who got the yelling letter this morning your brother? She said sadly, clearly feeling that Ron had embarrassed her. However, Ron still cared about Ginny. After narrowly escaping death from the Whomping Willow last night, he still wanted to see Ginny during the sorting ceremony, despite his injuries. Unfortunately, the sorting ceremony had already ended by then. You don't understand, Ginny. Boys are all like that. They're childish and immature. No, you're not like that, Ginny retorted. I'm not a child. Cyrus ended the conversation. Alright, let's begin tonight's tutoring. You shouldn't have to worry about charms and transfiguration this semester, but you still need to pay attention and practice a lot. What do you want to learn next? Defense against the dark arts. I borrowed the textbook from Ron, but he also gave me Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Last year's Defense Against the Dark Arts textbook was called Dark Magic, A Guide to Self-Defense, but Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them was also a supplementary book. The Defense Against the Dark Arts textbooks for grades 1 through 3 were almost entirely about dealing with dark creatures, which are also part of the magical beasts. Ginny had originally planned to use Lockhart's second-hand books, which she had bought at a high price this year, for her classes. However, Cyrus told her that those books were no different from waste paper. Even when reading them as novels, one had to endure Lockhart's omnipresent narcissism in his writing. Ginny opened Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. After the foreword by Dumbledore and Newt, the first part of the book posed the question, what is an animal? She saw Ron's notes after the question, a creature with many, many legs and covered in hair, which immediately made her laugh. This was obviously not the correct answer, but she easily connected it to Ron's fear of spiders. Then, she quickly discovered other enjoyment left in the book. For example, according to the Ministry of Magic's classification system, the most dangerous creatures are marked as XXXXX, followed by Ron adding, or whatever Hagrid likes. Ginny was overjoyed. She knew Hagrid was the enormous man who had taken the new students onto the ferry, and the one who had brought Harry out of Knockturn Alley when he wandered there during the summer holidays. During the holidays, Ginny had heard Ron talk about the three-headed dog and the dragon more than once. These ferocious creatures were all kept by Mr. Hagrid. She then discovered that Ron had added 4 more XS after the 5 XS on the giant spider's back, turning it into an unprecedented 9-X level magical creature. This shows just how terrified Ron was of spiders. Another book, Black Magic, A Guide to Self-Defense, mentions many spells, such as the Repulsion spell, the Snot spell, and Red and Green Fire, which are not taught in Charms class. There are also spells similar to the Illumination spell and the Extinguishing spell, which are also mentioned in the standard spells. Cyrus told Ginny to read the book on her own and to feel free to ask him questions if she encountered anything she didn't understand. He is now a true master of defense against the dark arts, and probably few professors of the course throughout history have surpassed him in theoretical knowledge. Of course, Dumbledore is definitely not among them. New books need nurturing. If you think it's well written, feel free to add it to your favorites. Chapter 8 First Possession. Time passed peacefully, and during this time almost nothing major happened at Hogwarts except for the trouble Lockhart caused in class. Now Ginny almost understands why Mr. Riddle so disdains Lockhart's works. He's a complete incompetent fool. Ron had said this more than once during meals, but each time it drew Hermione's ire. Hermione was practically a die-hard Lockhart fan. Even after witnessing him cause trouble several times, she remained convinced of the fabricated Lockhart in the books. During this time, Ginny grew increasingly dependent on and trusting of Mr. Riddle, sharing almost everything with Cyrus, her joys, worries, anxieties, and fears. She practically opened her entire soul to Cyrus, who greedily devoured her secrets and fears. Now, Ginny raised her eyes, her expression completely different from usual. Or perhaps it would be more appropriate to call her Cyrus now. This was Cyrus's first attempt to take control of Ginny's body since the start of the semester, and he was extremely cautious, ready to give up at the slightest sign of trouble. But in reality, it went much more smoothly than he had imagined. Cyrus stuffed the meat pie into his mouth and then took a big gulp of pumpkin juice. Although it wasn't his own body, he could feel everything this body could feel. The long-awaited food made him very happy, and he planned to go for a walk after breakfast. Colin Creevey? He turned his head and looked at a very thin boy with grey hair sitting at the table. What's wrong, Miss Weasley? Colin Creevey turned around in surprise. He hadn't spoken to this very cute classmate since the start of the semester. Please ask me for leave, I'm not feeling well. But you look pretty good, all right. Colin Creevey stared blankly at Cyrus' retreating figure, because Cyrus had already strode away before he could finish speaking. Cyrus first wandered around the school grounds for a while, then headed towards the Forbidden Forest. He needed to find out where the school's roosters were kept, and then prepare an opportunity to kill them all. Crossing the path beside the playground, Cyrus gradually moved away from the castle and onto a small path. Along the path, he could see a vast forest in the distance. The Forbidden Forest covered at least several hilltops, and at its edge sat a small wooden cabin. Cyrus approached step by step and saw Hagrid bent over in the field, where the pumpkins were almost taller than Ginny. Hey! Hagrid noticed him and immediately straightened up, shouting, "Little wizard, get back here. The Forbidden Forest is no place for you." "Hello, Hagrid. I'm not going in, just taking a walk." Cyrus didn't stop, but slowly walked to Hagrid's pumpkin patch. "Such big pumpkins, did you use an inflating charm?" "Ah, it's you, the Weasley girl." Hagrid recognized Ginny now, and his attitude immediately softened, though he also became more wary. Because of Fred and George, those two troublemakers, Hagrid now had a psychological aversion to the Weasleys. "It's just a little help, they'll be much bigger by Halloween. Would you like to come in and have a seat?" "No, they'll just wander around." Cyrus had no intention of eating Hagrid's culinary creations and immediately declined. "Don't worry, I won't go into the Forbidden Forest. I know it's dangerous there." "That's good. You're much more obedient than your two older brothers." Hagrid was glad that there wasn't another troublemaker he had to deal with. Cyrus walked along the edge of the Forbidden Forest and soon found the rooster that was kept in a pen. At the same time, he could feel Hagrid's gaze occasionally glancing over, as if afraid that he would suddenly dive into the Forbidden Forest. Having no chance to make a move, Cyrus could only slowly walk back. "The air here is really nice. I'm going back now, Hagrid." I'll come visit you again next time. Of course you can. Hagrid said, somewhat reluctantly. He always extended his affection to Ginny, and he got along well with the Weasley boys, who were also very friendly towards Harry. Therefore, he was also very kind to Ginny. This little house on the edge of the Forbidden Forest usually felt somewhat lonely. Even Harry and his friends don't come here often. When Cyrus returned to the castle, classes had probably already begun, and there wasn't a soul in the corridors. But just in case, he picked up Ginny's wand and cast an illusion charm on himself. Ginny's wand, like Voldemort's, was made of yew wood, and Cyrus was surprised to find that it actually suited him quite well. Yew wood symbolizes death and rebirth, which was indeed very fitting for him in his current state. The only pity was that Ginny's magic was a bit too weak, so the disillusionment spell she cast wasn't as good as he had imagined. When she was still, nothing was noticeable, but as soon as she moved, a faint outline could be seen around her body, like a layer of raised glass. However, it should be enough if you're careful. Cyrus cautiously made his way to the girls' restroom on the 3rd floor. At that moment, he heard Filch's shrill voice. What's wrong? What did you find? Filch shouted excitedly. A student skipping class. Cyrus saw Filch hobbling after the skinny cat, his face beaming with excitement. Lady Lauries, having likely caught Cyrus's scent, lowered her head and walked towards where Cyrus had been. As she drew closer, her pace slowed, perhaps because the scent was becoming more intense. Mrs. Lauries raised her head, her gaze filled with confusion, and looked towards the corner of the wall. Filch looked over immediately as well. There's nothing there. He muttered under his breath, then said viciously, they must be hiding. Casting a spell, that's an even bigger crime. Having patrolled Hogwarts for so many years, he certainly knew that there were spells that could conceal a person's appearance, and this had happened more than once. At first, Filch thought it was a mistake by Madame Norris, until a student's half-baked disillusionment charm suddenly failed, and he realized what was going on. So he immediately reached out and began to grope around, looking like a blind person with normal vision. The move, though comical, was undeniably effective, especially since Cyrus's spell wasn't perfect, leaving a flaw whenever he moved. This continued. Seeing this, Cyrus had no choice but to take the risk, raising his wand with minimal movement and pointing the tip at Lady Lauries. Misleading the public. Mrs. Laurie screamed, her hair standing on end, which startled Filch. Before Filch could even speak, it rushed off as if it had discovered some other clue. Filch immediately followed, limping. Cyrus breathed a sigh of relief and continued walking towards the 3rd floor. Please, my darlings, don't let the book grow on its own. Even just skipping to the last page is fine. Following along is really important. Thank you, my darlings. Chapter 9 The Secret Chamber and the Basilisk. Ever since Myrtle was killed by the basilisk 50 years ago, this washroom has been practically abandoned. Nobody wants to use the toilet here. It wasn't that they thought it was unlucky, but nobody wanted a head suddenly popping out of the toilet while they were using it, chattering and crying incessantly. Myrtle was extremely unpopular even among ghosts, second only to the wicked PP ghost. Over time, no one wanted to use the toilets here anymore. When Cyrus entered the bathroom, he did not see Myrtle. She was probably flushing herself into the Black Lake again. Page 6. This is a good thing. Cyrus walked to the sink, where the mirror reflected Ginny's lovely face. Ginny's appearance wasn't entirely unrelated to her character in the movie. In fact, she was far more adorable. He praised it and, following Riddle's memory, found the non-flowing brass faucet with an inconspicuous snake engraved on its side. Open. Cyrus opened his mouth and let out a terrifying hiss. He had inherited all of Riddle's talents, including Parcelion. Suddenly, the dragon head emitted a dazzling white light and began to spin rapidly. Then, the pool also began to move, slowly sinking and disappearing from his sight, revealing a very thick water pipe, large enough for a person to crawl into. Cyrus jumped down without hesitation, and of course, he didn't forget to close the door to the secret chamber to prevent any accidents. It was like rushing down a dark, sticky, endless slide. He could see many pipes branching out in all directions, but none were as thick as this one. Before long, the slide was almost at the bottom, a black rock tunnel. Cyrus cast a flight spell to lift himself up so as not to fall to the ground. The rock tunnel was very damp and full of mud, but he was quite clean. Sunlight shimmering. A tremendous beam of light shot out from the wand, hanging above Cyrus's head like a sun, illuminating almost the entire tunnel. The tunnel leading to the secret chamber was dark and damp, probably because it was built below the Black Lake. The stalactites overhead would drip water from time to time, making the cave path very muddy. Cyrus was glad Voldemort had invented a flying charm, because the thought that the water dripping from above connected to the Black Lake, which was where so many toilets at Hogwarts were piled up, made him feel uneasy. However, in reality, not to mention that the huge Black Lake itself has enough self-purification ability to deal with the filth, the process of water droplets seeping down from the soil has already filtered out the impurities. Continuing further in, a gigantic monster with a mouth large enough to swallow an adult whole came into view. Its terrifying silhouette was vividly depicted in the darkness. This was the Snake King's shed skin, a layer of snake skin that was valuable from head to toe. Voldemort looked down on this thing, but Cyrus found it rather unusual. After all, basilisks hadn't appeared in Britain for many years. Even if there are basilisks in other places, they may not grow to such a size or have such a long lifespan. We can figure out a way to take it with us then. The basilisk skin has strong magic resistance, making it extremely valuable whether used for armor, for making medicinal wine, or as an ingredient in potions. Taking it away isn't difficult either. All you need to do is create a large suitcase using the seamless stretch charm, and then find an opportunity to smuggle it out of Hogwarts. The Christmas holidays would be a good time. Walking around the giant snakeskin and into the tunnel, which twisted and turned, we finally found a solid wall in front of us, with 2 intertwined snakes carved on it, their eyes inlaid with large, sparkling emeralds. Open! Cyrus hissed, sounding like an evil incantation, as if he were the serpent sovereign, commanding everything here. The 2 snakes parted, the stone wall split in the middle, and slowly slid to both sides, disappearing from sight. Behind the door was a long, dimly lit room. Many stone pillars, carved with coiled and intertwined snakes, towered high, supporting the ceiling that dissolved into the darkness above, casting long, eerie shadows into the entire room, which was filled with a mysterious, verdant mist. Cyrus, holding Ginny's wand, strode forward among the stone pillars coiled with giant snakes. He knew this place so well, as if he were back in his own home, and his footsteps echoed hollowly and loudly among the ghostly shadows on the walls. When he walked to a position parallel to the last pair of stone pillars, a statue as tall as the room itself suddenly appeared before him, pressed against the dark wall behind it. It was an old, monkey-like face, with a long sparse beard that almost reached the hem of the wizard's robe carved out of stone, and 2 large grey feet standing on the smooth floor of the room. Is this Slytherin herself? Cyrus looked up. The statue was ugly, but it didn't matter, he was handsome, after all. And compared to Slytherin's power, his appearance was no longer that important. Speak to me, Slytherin, the greatest of the Hogwarts 4. Slytherin's enormous stone face began to move, its mouth opened wider and wider until it formed a huge black hole. Cyrus closed his eyes to avoid being harmed by the basilisk's magic. Then he heard something moving inside the statue's mouth, rustling and sliding upwards from its depths. A moment later, something heavy crashed to the ground, and the entire chamber shook. He could hear its heavy body slowly gliding across the dusty ground. Not long after, Cyrus opened his eyes again and saw the basilisk's appearance with his own eyes. Its scales were green, but they reflected a colorful luster. Its huge body swam across the floor of the secret chamber, forming a huge circle around Cyrus. Finally, its upper body stood up from behind Cyrus, and its eyes, bigger than light bulbs, hovered above Cyrus's head. This is proof of its obedience. The innate parsnip language has the power to subdue snakes, but the parsnip language learned later is merely a language. Having slept for 50 years, which is but a fleeting moment in the basilisk's life, it now seems to have been given a chance to be reborn, unleashing terrifying magic with abandon. Quiet! Cyrus commanded. The basilisk immediately bowed its head. Don't worry, you'll be free to move around soon. Until then, we need to be patient. Cyrus smiled slightly. He had only come to check on the basilisk's condition. The attack would have to wait until Halloween Eve. Hogwarts' Halloween celebration would feel incomplete without some unexpected events. After all, who can say that this festival of ghosts doesn't have some kind of magic? Please vote for this book and read it further. If you like this book, please add it to your bookshelf so you don't get lost. Chapter 10 Ginny's Suspicion. The next morning, Ginny got out of bed, clutching her head. She felt a little dizzy, as if she hadn't rested well. But she knew she couldn't lie there any longer. If she slept any longer, the class would probably start soon. So she quickly sat up, started getting dressed, combing her hair, and then went to wash up. But when she came back to get her textbooks after washing up, she found that her roommates were still lying on their beds, fast asleep. Hey, get up quickly, or you'll be late for class, she called out. However, a head poked out from behind the curtains of the bed next door. Ginny, are you still half asleep? It's the weekend. The weekend. Ginny's eyes widened. How could it be the weekend? She clearly remembers that she went to bed on Thursday. Did I sleep all day? They even say that this world is actually a world of science fiction. Of course it's the weekend. Wasn't yesterday Friday? You said you weren't feeling well and even asked Colin to call in sick for you. Are you still not feeling better? Should you go to the school clinic? Several roommates immediately asked with concern. It's nothing. I might have misremembered. Ginny scratched her head, slowly sat back on the edge of the bed, and turned her gaze to her small desk. There was nothing on the desk, but the diary was hidden in the drawer. Is that you, Mr. Riddle? Despite having some doubts, Ginny kept them to herself. Now that things have come to this, if she were to tell her parents about the diary, she would definitely get a scolding. She didn't want to receive a yelling letter while she was eating. If that happened, she'd rather die. On the other hand, Ginny was unwilling to believe that Mr. Riddle would hurt her. Just like now, although I have lost a small part of my memory, I don't seem to have been harmed. Perhaps Mr. Riddle has other reasons. She wanted to immediately open the diary and find out everything, but when her hand touched the drawer, she hesitated. She was afraid it was all a lie, that from head to toe, Mr. Riddle was just trying to gain her trust. She considered Mr. Riddle a friend and told him all her secrets. What should she do if she was truly betrayed? Thinking about this, Ginny suddenly realized that she knew absolutely nothing about Mr. Riddle. She had only seen the honors the other person had received in the medal display room, but what about everything else? What kind of person is Tom Riddle? He seems so outstanding, perhaps as good as Percy. No, he's much more interesting than Percy, and not so rigid at all. Ginny thought about how Mr. Riddle had been encouraging her to break some trivial school rules these past few days, which was quite amusing. He'd also taught her many little curses that weren't in textbooks, saying to use them on anyone she got into a fight with. He's nothing like Percy, more like Bill, Ginny thought, growing happier and happier, increasingly convinced that Mr. Riddle couldn't possibly harm her. But this brought the question back to square one. Was Mr. Riddle really behind this, and if so, why would he do it? Should I continue communicating with Mr. Riddle? Ginny was troubled by a series of problems, which made her a little irritable. She wanted to go back to sleep, but she couldn't fall asleep at all, so she simply got up and quietly walked to the common lounge. "Hey, Ginny," Ron called out to her, still half asleep. "Could you go and call Hermione for me? Harry went to Quidditch practice this morning, and we're planning to go check it out. You can come with us too." "Oh, okay, but I'm not in the mood right now." Ginny simply nodded and turned to look for Hermione's bedroom. A few minutes later, Ginny and Hermione came downstairs in a hurry. "Aren't you really coming with us, Ginny?" Ron seemed much more awake now. He was a little puzzled. His sister usually idolized Harry, wanting to be glued to him all the time, but now she didn't seem so interested in him anymore. This isn't surprising, though. Leaving aside the legends, Harry is just an ordinary wizard. Ron himself realized this through their interactions. Of course, stripped of the legends, Harry is still a great friend, much better than that good-for-nothing Lockhart. Ginny hesitated for a moment. She hadn't really been in the mood, but remembering how Mr. Riddle sometimes cheered her up, she suddenly thought it wouldn't hurt to go see him. Besides, she had nothing else to do at the moment, because she discovered that Mr. Riddle had thoughtfully finished all her weekend homework. Okay. The three of them first went to the hall to get some food, and then went to the playground together. The Quidditch stands were empty, almost no one was there, and there was not a single person in the arena either. However, she did see Colin frantically taking pictures everywhere with his camera. The three of them sat in a row, the morning mist on the playground not yet completely dissipated. A moment later, Harry and the other team members, dressed in their Quidditch uniforms, emerged. It looked like they were about to begin training again. Ron was surprised by the intensity of Quidditch training, as Harry had set off before dawn. "You're not finished practicing yet." "Not finished practicing yet?" "No, it hasn't even started." Harry shook his head and said, "Wood has been explaining tactics for hours, and I'm starving. Want something to eat?" Ginny handed over the bread in her hand. She didn't have much of an appetite. Page 7. He was somewhat tempted, but Wood wasn't going to give him time to eat. Harry pushed off with both feet and soared into the sky on his Nimbus 2000. However, the training was interrupted almost before it even began. Wood was very unhappy because Colin was taking pictures of them like a madman. He suspected the kid was a Slytherin spy sent to gather intelligence on their new tactics. "Slytherin doesn't need spies," George said helplessly. "How do you know?" "Because they came on their own." Several men dressed in green robes entered the field, each carrying a flying broomstick. It was their old rivals, Slytherin's team. Wood angrily flew down, and the two teams immediately erupted into a tense standoff. "How is this going?" Hermione's slightly worried voice brought Ginny back from her reverie. "What happened?" "They're arguing. Let's go check it out." Ron jumped down immediately. He figured he couldn't just stand by and watch if a real conflict broke out. When they rushed downstairs, Ron and Hermione were surprised to see the platinum blonde-haired man in the Slytherin group. Draco Malfoy. Ginny knew him too. Of course it was his father who got into a fight with her father at Flourish and Blotts during the summer vacation. Please continue to add this to your favorites. Have a great weekend, everyone. Ha ha ha. Chapter 11. The Temperamental Ginny. "What's wrong? What's he doing here?" Ron asked quickly. "I'm Weasley, the new seeker for Slytherin," Malfoy said smugly. "Everyone was just admiring the flying broomstick my dad bought for our team." Ron stared in disbelief at the 7 high-end brooms in front of him. The Nimbus 2001, which was even better than Harry's Nimbus 2000. "Very good, isn't it?" Malfoy said with a smile. "However, perhaps the Gryffindor team can also get some gold to buy a few new brooms. You can sell those sweeping stars as prizes. I think the museum will offer to buy them." The Slytherin members burst into loud laughter. "At least none of the Gryffindor players had to pay to get in," Hermione said sharply. "They got in entirely on merit." Malfoy's smug expression darkened clearly. These words had thoroughly stung him. "Nobody's asking you, you stinking little mudbrat," he said harshly. This statement immediately triggered an explosive reaction. Flint had to rush in front of Draco to prevent Fred and George from pounce on him. Arya screamed, "How dare you!" Ron reached into his robes and pulled his wand, shouting, "You'll pay for it, Malfoy." He angrily pointed it at Malfoy's face from under Flint's arm. Slug. A huge explosion resounded throughout the stadium, and a beam of green light shot out from the back of the wand, striking Ron in the abdomen and causing him to stumble and fall onto the grass. Ron. Are you all right? Hermione screamed. Ron opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. Instead, he let out a loud burp, and several slugs fell from his mouth onto his thigh. The Gryffindors surrounded Ron, who kept spitting out shiny slugs, and no one seemed willing to touch him. The Slytherins were doubled over with laughter. Flint was doubled over with laughter, using his new broom for support. Malfoy was on all fours, his fists pounding the ground. Ginny seemed to only come to her senses at this moment. Filthy and obscene words flooded her mind, and Ron's miserable state also made her very angry. She was already a bit irritable, and seeing how despicable Malfoy and his men were, she immediately used them as an outlet for her anger. Furnunculus. A curse immediately flew from her wand charm, but it missed Malfoy and instead struck Marcus Flint, who was standing in front of him. The big guy immediately screamed in agony. His skin was burning hot under the spell and covered in bumps, making it look incredibly ugly, as if a layer of chili oil had been poured on a festering wound. Flint immediately glared at Ginny, raising his wand with hatred in his eyes. "You little brat, how dare you attack me?" Fred and George immediately pounced on him, reaching for his wand. Wood and the others realized what was happening and immediately started fighting with the Slytherin members. "Harry, take Ginny and Ron with you." Someone shouted something, and Harry snapped out of his daze, quickly helping the dirty Ron to his feet. "To Hagrid, that's the closest." The four of them pushed through the crowd and rushed out. Colin, unaware of what was happening, ran over without any sense of propriety to take a picture of Ron, who was spitting out a snot. "Get out of the way, Creevy." Ginny shoved him away angrily. Colin stared blankly as they left, completely bewildered. Wasn't Ginny Weasley quite polite yesterday? They arrived at Hagrid's hut quickly, but Lockhart was the one who came out to greet them. To avoid trouble, Harry had no choice but to hide. This was a very wise decision. If Lockhart had been allowed to treat Ron, he probably would have been in serious trouble. They waited until Lockhart was out of sight before knocking on Hagrid's door. "It's you guys. I thought Lockhart was back again. What's wrong with Ron?" Hagrid asked quickly. Ron was hit by his own spell. Hagrid wasn't too worried. He found a large copper basin and placed it in front of Ron. "It's better to spit it out than swallow it. Spit it all out, Ron." "I don't think there's any other way but to wait for it to stop on its own," Hermione said worriedly, watching Ron lean over the copper basin. "Even under the best conditions, it's a very difficult spell to cast, and you're using a broken wand." "Wait, maybe I have a way to stop it." Ginny suddenly remembered something. "Breaking the curse he taught me." With that, she picked up her wand and pointed it at Ron. This made the others a little worried. After all, being pointed at by a magic wand is not a pleasant feeling. "Will this work?" "Ugh," Ron said, vomiting as he spoke. "It's always better to try than to do nothing," Ginny thought confidently. Her bump spell had also been taught to her by Mr. Riddle, and it proved to be very effective. Her wand glowed once more, and after the spell struck Ron shuddered. Although he was still vomiting, no more slugs were coming out of his mouth. "It worked. How did you do that?" Hermione's eyes widened. She couldn't believe that Ginny, who had just started school this year, could break the curse that she herself couldn't break. I read it in a book." Ginny was pleased to see her spell work. This proved that Mr. Riddle hadn't lied to her. "What book?" Hermione's eyes lit up, pressing for details. "I'll go check it out myself. I can't believe I missed such an important book. Maybe I'm mistaken. It's not from a book. It might be Billy's. Bill taught it," Ginny quickly said. Hermione was a little suspicious. "Really?" Fortunately, Hagrid interrupted her and asked what had happened. She had no choice but to recount the whole story with Harry. "Malfoy said something really mean to Hermione, because everyone was furious," Harry said. "Very vicious," Ron said hoarsely, nearly recovered, pale and sweating. "Malfoy called her a mudblood, Hagrid." Hagrid appeared indignant and shouted, "Is it true?" "Yes," she said, "but I don't know what that means." "Of course, I can tell it's very rude. Mudblood is a derogatory term for people born into Muggle families, that is, people whose parents don't have magic. Some wizards, like the Malfoys, always feel that they are superior to others because they are so-called purebloods," Ron explained. "In fact, the rest of us know that it has nothing to do with it. Look at Neville Longbottom, he's pureblood, but he can't even put the cauldron right." "That's right, they haven't invented any spells that Hermione can't use," Hagrid said proudly, while Hermione blushed with embarrassment. "But I didn't expect you to be so brave, Ginny." "It's a pity we didn't hit that jerk Malfoy," Ginny said, looking at Ron with a hint of displeasure. "It's not that bad. If it actually hits, it could be a bit troublesome. Malfoy's father is a Hogwarts board member," Hagrid said. Then they stayed with Hagrid for a while, and Ginny's mood improved as she found everything Mr. Riddle had taught her to be useful. Even being put in solitary confinement by McGonagall upon returning to the castle did not affect her mood at all. Chapter 12. I just have a good teacher. "You're back, Potter and the two Weasleys," Professor McGonagall said sternly as she approached them. "The three of you will stay in solitary confinement for the night." As she spoke, McGonagall turned to Ginny and said in an incredulous and extremely troubled tone, "I can't believe that a first-year student would dare to cast a spell on a sixth-year student. I've already informed your parents about this." Ginny's face turned pale instantly. The thought of receiving a red, roaring letter the next morning was truly awful. You go and polish the silverware in Mr. Filch's trophy room. No magic allowed, Weasley polish it all by hand. And you, Miss Ginny, I think you're quite good with spells, so why don't you go and find Professor Flitwick? As for you, Potter, go and help Professor Lockhart reply to his admirer. Upon hearing this, Harry immediately felt a tightness in his chest. The people who had given him the biggest headaches this semester were the first-year student Colin and this narcissistic and incompetent defense against the dark arts professor. In comparison, he would much rather face Filch. How about I go and wipe the medals too? He pleaded. This made McGonagall raise an eyebrow. She was clearly pleased that her student didn't like Lockhart. But, of course not, Professor Lockhart specifically asked for you. All three of you remember, it's 8 p.m. sharp. If it were that easy, it wouldn't be a punishment. Please wait a moment, Professor. Is there anything else, Miss Weasley? I want to ask, what about the Slytherin students? Don't they get punished for verbally abusing their classmates? Ginny mustered her courage and looked directly at McGonagall, which made Harry, Ron, and even Hermione widen their eyes in admiration. Before this, no Weasley cub had ever dared to speak to Professor McGonagall like that. Even the twins looked at her like mice before a cat. Now, the Weasley family had truly surpassed them. Page 8. They will certainly be punished. Professor Snape will punish them himself. After saying that, McGonagall turned and left. Did I hear that right? Ron exclaimed dramatically. Snape will punish them? Doesn't she know that's no different from letting them go? The four men looked grim. Clearly, they believed Snape would definitely protect those guys. However, they were actually wrong this time. After Ginny unleashed that curse on Marcus, the two teams practically escalated into a chaotic brawl, which was only resolved by McGonagall and Snape personally intervening. Under these circumstances, Snape naturally knew what had happened and unhesitatingly took on the task of punishing Malfoy. Now, all of Slytherin's toilets were occupied by Malfoy. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Ginny went to the 8th floor alone. The Ravenclaw headmaster's office was near the west tower. Ginny counted 13 windows to the right and then knocked on the door. Please come in. Professor Flitwick's shrill voice came from inside the room. Professor, excuse me. Ah, Miss Weasley, you've finally arrived. Flitwick's face lit up with a happy smile the moment he saw Ginny. He was unremarkable in appearance, standing only about 1.2 meters tall, almost shorter than Ginny now. His features were also quite different from those of a normal person. However, in reality, of the four headmasters, he was the most caring towards his students, always punctual. I'm sorry, perhaps I should have come a little earlier, Ginny asked in a low voice. It was her first time being put in solitary confinement, so she was a little nervous. Ron was polishing the trophies, and Harry was helping Lockhart reply to his fans' letters, both unpleasant tasks. And what about herself? Professor McGonagall hadn't said anything about Professor Flitwick expecting her to do anything. Flitwick immediately noticed her worry and quickly said, "Don't worry, child. I don't have any of those nasty physical labors here. Compared to those, I actually prefer to continue teaching you spells. You've done very well in class, so perhaps my expectations for you are a little higher." Flitwick waved his wand, and his drawer opened automatically, revealing a multitude of small cakes that were placed in front of Ginny. "Want some?" "Thank you, Professor." Ginny felt relieved and happily picked up the cake. "This is much better than the toffee she had at Hagrid's this morning. I heard you cast a curse on a 6th grade student." Flitwick began to speak to Ginny as if they were having a heart-to-heart talk. Ginny nodded. "I already know what happened. Although it doesn't quite fit the image of a professor, I still want to say that he completely deserved what he got." Flitwick himself was a wizard with goblin blood, so he was very sensitive about this. Sometimes, these half-bloods were considered to be of lower status than wizards who came from Muggle origins. Of course, casting spells on classmates is still discouraged. Flitwick casually brushed the matter aside. "Moreover, since you already know such a difficult curse, I'm afraid the other spells you'll be learning in the first year won't be too difficult for you, right?" Flitwick looked at her expectantly. Ginny immediately demonstrated her skills to Flitwick, first with a levitation charm, then a softening charm and a locking charm, and finally, she used a cutting charm to split a hole in the tabletop, then used a repair charm to restore it to its original state. This feat truly enraged Flitwick. Keep in mind that it's not Halloween yet, and his lessons for the first-year wizards are still at the theoretical stage. But judging from Ginny's appearance, she has probably already learned almost all the spells in Standard Spells I. "Fantastic, Ginny, fantastic." Flitwick almost jumped for joy. "I'm already considering whether to let you join my spells club. To be honest, you've done even better than Miss Granger." Such lavish praise made Ginny blush. She believed that it was all thanks to Mr. Riddle's teachings. Without him, her spellcasting skills wouldn't be so high. "I just have a good teacher," she said timidly. This clearly led Flitwick to misunderstand. However, it was precisely because of this misunderstanding that Flitwick, in a great mood, immediately exempted Ginny from confinement. "Alright, you can go back now. If you encounter any problems with spells, or if there are any books you'd like to read in the library, feel free to come find me. I hope you can maintain this level so that when you reach 5th grade, I'll definitely invite you to join the spells club. Of course, if you're interested in these things now, you're welcome to come and audit classes." He reluctantly sent Ginny away after leaving the time and place for the spell club meeting. Chapter 13 Green Tea Master Cyrus. Ginny was back in the Gryffindor common room in less than 5 minutes. The Gryffindor and Ravenclaw common rooms are both in the tower, but not on the same side, and the tower is connected to the 8th floor of the castle. Hogwarts has 5 towers. The tallest central tower is used as a classroom for astronomy classes. The other 4 towers are located in the 4 cardinal directions. The North Tower is the divination classroom, while the West Tower is the owl house. The southeast sides were used as common rooms and dormitories for Gryffindor and Ravenclaw, respectively. Several students were somewhat surprised when Ginny crawled under the statue of the fat lady. "Ginny, weren't you put in solitary confinement with Ron and the others?" Percy asked, frowning. He wasn't in a good mood because everyone in the Weasley family except himself had been put in solitary confinement. In fact, the entire Gryffindor team was not spared. "That's right, but Professor Flitwick thinks my spell was very well executed, and he feels I shouldn't waste my time in solitary confinement," Ginny said immediately. This pleased Percy greatly. "Well done. I told you, a good student never makes a mistake. Look, Hermione wasn't punished this time either. If you ask me, protecting the Weasley family is probably up to you and me," Percy said as he walked out. "Where are you going so late?" "It's nothing," Percy explained vaguely. Ginny didn't ask any more questions. She was in a hurry to find Mr. Riddle. Ginny hurried back to her dorm room, used a spell to unlock the drawer, and laid the black-covered diary open on the table. The ink-dipped quill pen hovered above the diary for a long time before finally taking a deep breath and slowly putting pen to paper. "Mr. Riddle, there's something I'd like to ask you." After writing one sentence, Ginny didn't wait for the diary to respond before quickly writing the next one. When she first started writing, she thought it was so difficult to ask this question, but now it seemed like she couldn't stop, and she wrote all the way to the bottom in one go. "I'm missing a day's memory. I clearly remember going to bed on Thursday, but when I woke up the next day, it was Saturday. My classmates all said I took Friday off, but I don't actually remember it at all. What do you think is wrong with me?" Her words were tactful, trying not to sound like she was suspecting Mr. Riddle, but perhaps this also reflected a small hope in Ginny's heart. She didn't want this matter to be related to Mr. Riddle. At least, there is no clear evidence to prove it at present. Then, she watched nervously as the ink disappeared on the yellowed paper. She felt as if a tiny person was pounding on her chest with a huge hammer, making it hard for her to breathe. "Could it be you, Mr. Riddle?" discovered. In his memory space, Cyrus looked at the long passage of sentences that appeared before him and began to think about how to answer it. "Judging from her expression, she doesn't seem sure I did it. Should we go along with what she's saying? Or should we find another reason?" Judging from the current situation, Ginny Weasley still has a lot of faith in herself. If she were to claim ignorance or attribute the matter to other reasons, Ginny would likely be willing to believe her. But after thinking about it, Cyrus decided to tell Ginny the truth. Sometimes telling the truth is a more sophisticated form of deception than lying. "You found out, huh? I was planning to keep it a secret." "I'm sorry, Ginny." Cyrus tried to make his tone sound more sincere and remorseful. "Actually, I was the one who controlled your body. An evil magical artifact like me, you should just destroy me." "It really is you," Ginny said in disbelief. Although she had suspected it beforehand, Ginny was still somewhat unwilling to believe it when Cyrus told her the truth himself. "But why?" Ginny asked urgently. However, rather than needing an explanation, she desperately needed to find an excuse for Mr. Riddle to prove that Mr. Riddle was not dangerous. "What?" Cyrus immediately feigned a serious tone. "Ginny, no matter the reason, my actions are unforgivable. A magical artifact actually controlled a wizard's body. If this happened to me, I would destroy it immediately. You should do the same." "Destroy me, Ginny, it's just a diary." "No," Ginny scribbled. "I don't think you're an evil tool. I mean, I think if you really were evil, why don't you do anything? Helping me finish my weekend homework isn't evil. You have some unspeakable reason, don't you?" Seeing that Ginny had already prepared an excuse for him before he could even say anything, Cyrus couldn't help but sigh, realizing how easily children are deceived. Or rather, people are always willing to believe what they want to believe. This time, he deliberately remained silent for a long time before answering. "You're right." His words had a magical quality that made Ginny feel sad and downcast. "I should have told you, I'm just a tiny bit of Tom Riddle's memory left in his diary." "Ah. Have you ever wondered where the real Tom Riddle is now?" "The real Tom Riddle," Ginny murmured, though she already had a guess in her heart. In the medal display room, Tom Riddle had won his medal 50 years ago. "Could it be that, Mr. Riddle, you have already?" "That's right, I've actually been dead for many years." Cyrus began to try and move Ginny with his tragic past. "The Gryffindor lion cubs are always more driven by emotion than reason. My death is actually related to the mystic. He was very powerful back then." "So, you were killed by the mysterious man?" Ginny asked rhetorically, but she clearly believed the answer without a doubt. "That's all in the past." Cyrus didn't answer, but just said to himself, "I was made into a diary when I was a student. So many years have passed, and I really miss this world. To breathe fresh air again while still alive has always been my wish." "Mr. Riddle." Ginny's tears streamed down her face. Although she had thought that Mr. Riddle was probably dead, she never expected that he would be so cruelly killed by a mysterious person during his student days. It was really too pitiful. She didn't notice the contradiction in Cyrus's words during the summer vacation. Cyrus had said he had graduated from school. No matter what, my behavior is unforgivable. Cyrus kept berating himself like a manipulative woman, making Ginny even more upset. How could Ginny, only a first-year student, possibly recognize a manipulative woman? She was completely overwhelmed by Cyrus's scathing remarks, leaving even the karaoke room feeling utterly devastated. Ginny, you can destroy me, or hand me over to the professors at the school. But before that, I want to see you. Thank you for talking to me all this time. Being trapped in a diary for decades has been a painful and agonizing experience. Chapter 14. A man's 3 parts drunkenness, enough to make you cry. Meeting with Mr. Riddle. Ginny was stunned. A voice in her subconscious told her, don't do that. Believing in a magical item is foolish and dangerous. Page 9. But her curiosity was aroused, just like a cat's. What kind of person would the real Mr. Riddle be? I've never really understood Mr. Riddle, and now, such an opportunity is right in front of me. But what should I do? Ginny's inner desire overwhelmed all her vigilance, partly because Cyrus had already earned the girl's trust. She almost never thought that Mr. Riddle could harm her. Cyrus was very happy to see that Ginny had agreed. If Voldemort had anything to boast about besides his magical talent, it would probably only be his handsome appearance, which Rowling himself deemed the most striking in the entire book. Before Tom Riddle underwent any dark magic transformations, he used it to seduce countless women. Even today, the soul of one of his victims still lingers in Ravenclaw's towers. Despite being the most intelligent descendant of Ravenclaw among the 4 giants, he turns out to be a foolish, love-struck individual. You just need to bury your face in the book, and I will bring you into my memories. The diary seemed to be blown by a strong wind, the pages flipping over with a rustling sound, finally stopping on a certain page. Ginny stared in disbelief at the pages of the diary, which seemed to have transformed into a miniature television screen. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the book up, pressing her eyes against the small window before she could even process what was happening. She was thrown forward, the window was expanding, and Ginny felt herself leave the chair, her head plunging into the gap in the page, into a swirling, dancing display of colors and light. This is a hazy, gray space, with flowing silver mist all around, like drifting morning fog, looking both light and heavy. She nervously looked around, searching for any figure that might be Mr. Riddle. Cyrus wasn't playing hide-and-seek with her. He stood not far away, holding a phantom of a wand that didn't belong to anyone, tilting his head and chuckling as he looked at her. Mr. Riddle. Ginny tentatively called out to him. Hello, Ginny. Cyrus' reply immediately turned her nervousness into excitement. She trotted up to Cyrus and looked him over in surprise. This little girl probably never imagined that Mr. Riddle, with whom she had been communicating, was so handsome. Are you really Mr. Riddle? To be precise, it's just his memory, Cyrus said subtly, trying to make his words sound like a lie, yet they were indistinguishable from one. I bet you're quite surprised now. You probably never imagined I was a Slytherin student, did you? He pointed to the robe he was wearing. I really didn't think about it. It's all because you, Mr. Riddle, always encouraged me to break the rules, Ginny muttered. It seemed she didn't think much of Slytherin. From the moment she entered, her gaze never left Cyrus's face. What happened? I think you look a bit like Harry, Mr. Riddle, Ginny said hesitantly, then quickly added, of course, only a little bit. Such coincidences aren't entirely impossible, Cyrus said with a smile. He certainly knew why. In fact, the blood relationship between Riddle and Harry could be traced back to the time of the Death Brothers. Compared to that, Ginny, you're much cuter than I imagined, Cyrus said without hesitation. Ginny was immediately too embarrassed to speak and quickly looked away. Dealing with an 11-year-old girl was a piece of cake for Cyrus. Has Mr. Riddle been living in a place like this for the past 50 years? Ginny asked, her expression immediately turning sad as she looked at the space. There was nothing here, pitch black, like a desolate, empty jungle in winter. The silvery mist was icy cold, suffocating just to look at. She couldn't imagine how someone could spend 50 years here. If it were her, she probably couldn't stay a day longer. Poor Mr. Riddle. He just wanted to see the real world. What did he do wrong? He even took the time to help me with my homework. Ginny wanted to hug Mr. Riddle, but when she reached out to Cyrus, her tiny hand slipped right through his body. Useless Ginny, I'm just a memory, Cyrus said. I can only see and hear, but I can't touch or feel you. The day I shamelessly took control of your body, I felt like I was really alive. Blue sky, wind, warm sun on my body, it was incredible to be alive, don't you think? Of course, I didn't forget to have a nice meal at the cafeteria. His increasingly satisfied expression made Ginny feel even worse, and she almost cried. All right. Cyrus's tone suddenly turned stern. That's enough, Ginny. The voice startled Ginny, making her tremble for a moment. Then, Cyrus said gently, you should go back. But, go quickly. It's not a good thing to stay with someone like me who's already dead, not even a ghost. When you get back, destroy the diary. If you don't have enough magic, give it to someone else. We should say goodbye. It was nice to meet you, Ginny. Cyrus said this insincerely, and his figure slowly became transparent and ethereal, disappearing into the silver memories. No, Ginny bit her lip, tears streaming down her face in a straight line, and shook her head frantically. Listen to me, Ginny. Perhaps destruction is the final destination for a memory like mine. No. Ginny shook her head resolutely. Mr. Riddle is my friend, and I would never kill him. You will make new friends, real friends, Cyrus emphasized. This is different. But, does Mr. Riddle intend to hurt me? Are you planning to kill me? Ginny quickly retorted. Of course not, Cyrus vehemently denied. This sentence is quite true. If that's the case, then why should I kill Mr. Riddle? Ginny had made up her mind and became exceptionally brave at this moment. She wiped away her tears and said forcefully, Mr. Riddle longs to experience the real world, and I can help him. I think it's not a big deal to lend my body to Mr. Riddle occasionally, is it? The cute little girl said earnestly. At one point, Cyrus felt he deserved to die, but he still wanted to live. Thank you, Ginny. Chapter 15 Spell Practice, The Unsuccessful Guardian Spell. The next morning, Ginny arrived at the lobby feeling groggy. Thinking about what had happened the night before, Ginny was still a little incredulous. She had actually agreed to lend her body to Mr. Riddle. And that very night, she lent it out again. Now it seemed that, just as she had thought, although she was somewhat tired, nothing unexpected had happened. Mr. Riddle would never harm her. Ginny, still half asleep, spread jam on the bread and mechanically stuffed it into her mouth. Then, a huge and piercing sound exploded in the auditorium, instantly waking her up. Ron, how dare you cast a spell on your classmate? And you corrupted your sister too. It's not even been a month since school started. You dare to do this, and you, Fred, George. Ginny saw a red letter turn into a mouth, hovering over the Gryffindor table and cursing loudly. It had practically cursed Ron and the twins, but now it had turned its attention to itself. This made her turn deathly pale. Yesterday I was so focused on Mr. Riddle that I completely forgot Professor McGonagall told my mother about her casting spells on the older students. Upon seeing the letter approaching, Ginny wished she could run away immediately. Being scolded in front of everyone would be too humiliating. In fact, the two classmates who had been sitting next to her, sensing the danger, had already jumped away, afraid of being caught in the crossfire of the shouting letter. But to Ginny's surprise, when the howling letter hovered in front of her, Molly's voice suddenly softened. I've heard about it, Ginny. I must say, you did a good job. Don't worry, no one's bothering your father. If Percy got cursed by a first-year student, we wouldn't have anything to say. Of course, don't be so impulsive next time. If you run into trouble, it's best to tell the professors, okay? See you during the Christmas holidays. As soon as he finished speaking, the roaring letter burst into flames. Ron and the twins are a bit unbalanced. If we're talking about who's truly wicked, Ginny is the wicked one. In reality, only her spell succeeded, but they were the ones who got the blame. Do you think this is fair? Ron said angrily. Alright, she's your sister, after all. Fred and George were quite easygoing, and Ginny was really cool yesterday. Since yesterday's event spread throughout Gryffindor, Ginny has practically become a hero there, while Ron seems rather pathetic in comparison. Ron was still angry, as if nothing good ever happened to him. Thinking of this, Ron glanced sadly at the broken wand covered in tape. If it weren't for that thing, his spell might have worked. Take it easy, don't be jealous of Ginny. If it weren't for her, you might still be spitting out snot right now, Hermione comforted her. I'm not jealous of her, she's my sister. I just feel it's a little unfair, like I'm the only one who's having bad luck. Ron had no choice but to sit down and sullenly gnaw on his chicken leg. I just hope Marcus Flint doesn't get discharged before the official match, Harry said with a smile, then quietly repeated what he had heard the night before to Ron and Hermione. He had actually already told Ron the night before, but neither of them had any clue. In the days that followed, Cyrus would occasionally use Ginny's body at night. He wasn't trying to control the basilisk to kill. In fact, the plan hadn't even truly begun yet. He spent most of his time practicing spells in the room of requirement. Although Cyrus had absorbed Riddle's memories and theoretical knowledge, knowing the theory and being proficient in using spells were two completely different things. Considering the potential difficulties he might face after his resurrection, Cyrus needed to make his magical power sufficiently strong. He slowly eroded Ginny's life force, but he was careful to keep it within limits. These days, Ginny looked like she had a cold. Halloween was fast approaching, and the temperature at Hogwarts was starting to drop. This was the peak season for the flu, and most of the young wizards in the school were listless. Percy was worried about her and kept forcing Ginny to drink energy potions. As a result, steam was constantly rising from her head, and her fiery red hair looked like it was on fire. In the spacious classroom, several wooden puppets rushed quickly toward Ginny. Cyrus had a cold look in his eyes, holding his wand in his hand, and remained completely calm in the face of the attack. Only when the puppet at the very front was close did Cyrus raise his wand with lightning speed and unleash a spell. Struck by the curse, the doll didn't even last a second before exploding into dust that flew everywhere. Then, without pausing, Cyrus rolled on the ground to dodge the attacks of the other two puppets, but he didn't look embarrassed at all. He crouched down, turned around, and cleaved the two puppets into 16 pieces. Under his control, fragments of the puppet floated up and crashed down on the other puppets like meteors, knocking them over. Page 10. Then, the hard ground rose up, and several huge hands reached out, grasping them and immobilizing them. In the blink of an eye, he dealt with more than a dozen puppets, and during this time, he did not utter a single incantation. Cyrus was fairly satisfied with his performance. After all, his body now belonged to Ginny, and a 1-year-old novice wizard's magical power wasn't strong. Achieving this was already quite incredible. Keep in mind that the puppets were protected by magic. Let's try the guardian charm. Cyrus thought for a moment, then closed his eyes and began to recall what he could call happy memories. He easily began to recall his past life. Although he seemed to have become emotionally numb in life as an adult, his childhood memories were still pleasant. The tip of the wand spewed forth dense threads, like white velvet or silken threads from a silkworm's cocoon. That won't work. However, perhaps the memory was too distant, making it unclear, and these threads, though intertwined in the air, never took shape. Could it be that my emotions are too calm? Cyrus pondered, then after a moment, he decided to recite the incantation and try again. This time, he tried hard to recall his childhood memories, a time when he had no worries, was carefree, and longed for fairy tales. It seemed the whole world was clean and beautiful. Call the gods to protect you. The magic emanating from the tip of the wand was even stronger. The dense silver threads formed large clumps, but still did not take shape, instead resembling a white, half-bright, half-dark cloud. Soon, the magic within him, or rather Ginny, was drained. Cyrus had to stop practicing, put away his wand, and leave the room of requirement. But just as he turned the corner, a sharp shout rang in his ears. Stop. It's Monday again, going to work is so painful. My darlings, please give me some votes to cheer me up. Chapter 16 The Halloween Eve Attack. It's Filch again. Cyrus's patience with the annoying administrator was almost at its limit. However, what truly gave him a headache was the cat. It probably had some kind of cat-like bloodline or something. Besides having an extremely keen sense of smell, it seemed to be able to see through a little bit of magic. Cyrus had almost been exposed because of it several times. Otherwise, a mere squib wouldn't have been able to do anything to him. It's especially dangerous when you not only run into Filch, but also happen to run into Snape, who's up all night. No wonder Tom targeted this cat in the original story. Stop, don't move, I've spotted you. Filch yelled menacingly at the air. But in reality, Cyrus was standing right behind him. Mrs. Lorry's had followed his scent all the way to the room of requirement, but found nothing. After confirming that his illusion spell had not failed, Cyrus left without hesitation. Just then, he heard the mocking voice of the Pikachu behind him. Poor Felger, he's been completely fooled. As a result, the two guys started fighting like dogs. As Halloween drew closer, Cyrus felt it was about time. On Halloween Eve, Hogwarts was completely different from usual. The pumpkins that were once as tall as Ginny in Hagrid's field had now grown to the size of a shed. The pumpkins were hollowed out, some were made into spooky jack-o'-lanterns, while the rest were turned into pumpkin juice and served on the table. The castle was decorated with bat motifs everywhere. Usually, the ghosts were most active at this time, but this time, even Peeves was nowhere to be seen. We should thank Sir Nicholas for this, since today marks his 500th death anniversary. At the dinner party, Percy frowned and looked around. The twins and Lee Jordan were sitting together, almost causing a huge scene. Fred, where's Ron? And Harry and Hermione are missing too. Percy grabbed one of the twins at random and immediately asked, I'm George, you call yourself my brother? George exclaimed, his eyes wide with anger. This time, it wasn't a prank. Percy had genuinely mistaken him for someone else. Feel sorry. Okay, you want to know where little Ronnie went? That's so cool. The two immediately adopted expressions of surprise and glee, though perhaps a bit more of a schadenfreude. They went to a ghost party. Can you imagine? A ghost party. I bet they ate nothing but rotten chunks of flesh. A gathering of ghosts. You don't know. It's the 500th anniversary of the death of Nico, who almost died. If you ask me, he really had a unique idea commemorating his own death date. Fred laughed and shook his head, probably already considering Nico, who almost died, a genius. Harry overheard Ron and Hermione talking about it. At first, they considered getting involved, but after hearing some information, Fred and George gave up the idea. Wouldn't it be nice to eat a hot meal and drink warm pumpkin juice in the lobby? Why don't you care about your sister? Ginny isn't here either. George glanced at the younger students and didn't see any conspicuous red hair among the little lions. Ginny isn't feeling well and will be a little late. You should be the ones paying more attention to her. She's had a cold for weeks, Percy said sternly. At this moment, all the teachers and students of Hogwarts gathered in the Great Hall, including Filch. Only his cat continued to perform its unpleasant duty, wandering the castle corridors. Now, it has detected a familiar scent. During this time, the owner of this scent had fled from her far too many times, which had ignited Lady Loris's competitive spirit. This animal with cat-like blood possessed extraordinary intelligence and had already come to regard Cyrus as a thorn in her side. Following the scent, it moved towards the third-floor corridor. Cyrus controlled Ginny's body and sat on the back of the giant basilisk. He'd been keeping the basilisk inside the pipes all this time. It was time to take it out for a walk. Perfect timing, that annoying Myrtle had gone to her death anniversary party. There was nobody here, except a cat. Mrs. Lorry's lowered her head and sniffed the scent as she slowly approached the door of the washroom. The ground was covered in water, probably from a leaky pipe, which annoyed Mrs. Loris. However, her competitive spirit prevailed, and she slowly waded through the sticky water around the corner. The next moment, 2 dim yellow lights were reflected in the water. Lady Lorry's didn't even have time to react before she was instantly petrified by the basilisk's eyes. The annoying creature is finally free. Cyrus jumped down from the basilisk's head, picked up the petrified, immobile cat, and said it felt harder than iron. He hung Mrs. Lorry's on the wall, leaving behind a line of blood-red writing. Cyrus used to quite like cats, but obviously, Lady Loris doesn't count. Any little thing hindering his resurrection, no matter how cute, must be eliminated. At least temporarily clear it. Then Cyrus sent the basilisk back to the secret chamber to await his summons, while he himself leisurely returned to the banquet and gave his body back to Ginny. Slightly dazed, Ginny wasn't too surprised to find herself at the Gryffindor dining table when she opened her eyes. She had clearly already guessed that Mr. Riddle had been controlling her body. It's been 50 years since Mr. Riddle celebrated Halloween, hasn't it? Thinking this way, she felt it was normal for Cyrus to miss the Halloween party at Hogwarts. Of course, she herself was also looking forward to this holiday. Looking at the delicious food on the table, she couldn't resist any longer and immediately started eating heartily. Colin, standing to the side, opened his mouth and looked at her, seemingly surprised that Ginny's complexion wasn't good, but her appetite hadn't changed. However, this is actually a good thing. The dinner party ended quickly, and Ginny returned to the Gryffindor common room with the group. Strangely, even though the Slytherin and Hufflepuff common rooms were in the dungeon and basement respectively, Malfoy somehow sneaked up behind them as well. They walked happily to the 3rd floor, and then immediately fell silent. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on the 3 helpless little figures in the empty corridor, and the secret chamber has been opened. Beware of those who oppose the heir. Upon discovering that Harry was standing in front of him, Malfoy immediately rushed out and loudly read aloud the blood-red words on the wall, a look of smug satisfaction on his face. He stared at the still, stiff cat hanging there, his cold eyes suddenly came alive, his usually bloodless face flushed red, and a sinister grin spread across his face. "You're next, mudbloods. Although Halloween is tomorrow, we're launching our attack today. He, my friends, if you don't give me votes, I'll stop updating. This is a lie." Chapter 17. To be or not to be, that is the question. Let's go back to the time of the dinner party. Although the Slytherin dinner table was also lively, it was far less cheerful than the Gryffindor table due to the snakes' personalities. Bored, Malfoy ate his food while thinking about whether he should use Halloween as an excuse to scare Harry Potter and the lion cubs who had caused him to be punished by Headmaster Snape. However, when he subtly glanced towards the Gryffindor dining table, he didn't see any of those annoying kids. Of course, Malfoy hadn't suspected anything yet. After all, Gryffindor was different from Slytherin, where seating arrangements were strictly observed. Those ill-mannered students would always squeeze into any available seat. Besides, he didn't dare stare directly at the Gryffindors, lest the other Slytherins notice and think he was about to defect from the house. Once a person has an idea in their mind, it will quickly turn into action. Even before the banquet was over, Malfoy had already made up his mind to show them what he was capable of tonight. Even if he got caught, he could just say it was a Halloween tradition and he was unlikely to be punished. Therefore, when the dinner ended, he simply didn't follow the Slytherin group, but secretly mingled with the Ravenclaw group. Then, the scene from before unfolded. Page 11. Although he didn't know whose prank it was, Malfoy thought the other person was a genius. That's right, Malfoy still thinks it's a prank. Slytherin suffered a huge loss on the pitch last time, so of course someone wants revenge. Especially Mask of Flint, who was hit by a curse of the bump. He's practically lost all face. He had certainly heard of the Chamber of Secrets, but would a half-blood, a disgrace to purebloods, and a mudblood allow a Chamber of Secrets left behind by Slytherin, one of the 4 Lords of the Order of the Storm, to be opened? Therefore, Malfoy naturally assumed it was a prank. Of course, this didn't stop him from adding fuel to the fire. Therefore, he immediately read the words on the wall aloud, causing a commotion, hoping to make others think that the murderer was Harry Potter and his henchmen. Under the gaze of hundreds of eyes, Harry and his companions could hardly conceal their panic. He already regretted not listening to Ron and leaving this awful place, but it was clearly too late. Malfoy's voice first attracted Filch, the poor, hateful old man who was now clinging to his cat like a madman. Harry had no doubt that, if possible, Filch would make him pay for his cat's life. You killed my cat. You killed it. I'm going to kill you all. I'm going to. Argus. Dumbledore arrived at the scene, followed by many other teachers. In the blink of an eye, he passed Harry, Ron, and Hermione and took Mrs. Norris off the torch stand. "Come with me, Argus," he said to Filch, "and you, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, and Miss Granger." Lockhart hurried forward. "My office is closest to here, the principal. It's upstairs, you can dash." "Thank you, Gilderoy," Dumbledore said. The silent crowd parted to let them pass. Lockhart, very excited and looking quite pleased with himself, hurried after Dumbledore. Professor McGonagall and Snape followed. Hundreds of Gryffindor and Ravenclaw students were left bewildered, staring at each other in confusion. That's incredible. Why didn't we think of getting rid of this cat? Fred said. Perhaps it's because we have a secret weapon. What secret weapon? Lee Jordan leaned closer. Of course it's a dung bomb. The twins answered in unison. That stuff definitely interferes with Mrs. Laura's sense of smell. Lee nodded in agreement, then added, I wonder what Harry and Ron will do. They shouldn't have stayed at the crime scene after doing that. What do you think, Ginny? That Ron is your brother, right? Colin turned to Ginny in the crowd and asked, I don't think the murderer could be Harry. He couldn't have done something like that. It would be so sad if Harry Potter got expelled. I wrote to my brother he wants to meet Harry Potter too. He spoke quickly. Now, Ginny is a little distracted because she is worried about Ron, Harry and Hermione's situation. Do you believe the locked room mystery is real? I've never heard of such a thing. The bloodstains don't seem completely dry yet the cat must have died recently. You're a bit late today. Did you find any traces of the murderer? What? Ginny's eyes widened. What does it mean that I'm a little late? She wanted to ask more questions, but Percy and the Ravenclaw prefects had already snapped out of their commotion and started to organize discipline. Ginny had no choice but to keep her doubts to herself. All right, everyone, be quiet. Line up. Percy yelled. And you should go back to Slytherin, or I'll deduct points from your record. After driving Malfoy away, the hundreds of steps continued forward, but the discussions in the crowd were something Percy couldn't stop no matter how hard he shouted. All right, Percy, let them be, Peacock Rivat couldn't help but say. Back in the common room, Ginny was still thinking about Colin's words. But the room was too crowded, and everyone was talking about what had just happened. Rumors about the locked room quickly spread. Mr. Riddle seems to say he knows the locations of many secret chambers. Could one of them be Slytherin's? She hasn't yet suspected that Cyrus was behind all of this. Ginny was desperate to know if Cyrus had seen the real killer or found any clues while he was controlling her body. It would be even better if he knew where the Chamber of Secrets in Slytherin was. So she returned to her dormitory alone, laid her diary out on her bed, and drew the curtains. Mr. Riddle, do you know about Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets? The Chamber of Secrets in Slytherin? Why are you suddenly asking about that? Cyrus asked back. Ginny slowly wrote down what happened after the dinner party. I'd like to know, Mr. Riddle, if you've discovered any clues, or know anything about the Chamber of Secrets in Slytherin. The Chamber of Secrets in Slytherin. Tell the truth, or hide it. Cyrus is now in a dilemma. He doesn't know if Tom in the original story ever told Ginny about this, and telling her would obviously be risky. However, Riddle, at least after meeting Harry, immediately and eagerly revealed his memories. To speak or not to speak, that is the question. Chapter 18 Dumbledore. The Chamber of Secrets in Slytherin is indeed a real thing. After a brief moment of thought, Cyrus decided it wasn't the right time. The events in the locked room hadn't escalated yet, and the only victim was a cat. If he revealed that memory to Ginny now, and she were to confront Hagrid, he could easily expose himself. But not saying it also requires a bit of art. The best approach is still not to reveal everything. Really? Mr. Riddle, you know the location of the secret room? Ginny was overjoyed. No, that's not it. Actually, something similar happened 50 years ago. You must be wondering why I received a special contribution award, but the medal doesn't say why I received the award, right? Upon hearing this, Ginny nodded subconsciously, but remembering that Mr. Riddle was blind, she forcefully wrote in her diary. This is because I exposed the person who opened the secret room. At that time, a poor student had already died at the hands of the monster in the secret room. I discovered something was wrong and was determined not to cover it up. So I reported him to the principal at the time. Because a student had died, the principal wanted me to keep the news quiet. However, the monster in the secret room had already been driven away, and as for the person who opened the secret room 50 years have passed, and he may already be dead. Cyrus said it half-truthfully. The last sentence seems like a lie, but it's actually the truth. As for whether the Chamber of Secrets will be opened again, I don't think so. The Chamber of Secrets in Slytherin opened again and released a terrifying monster, just to deal with a cat. I admit, that cat was indeed annoying, but it didn't deserve to be treated like that. Perhaps it was a prank. I used your body to wander around the castle tonight and seemed to see a figure, but I couldn't see it clearly. Is that so? Ginny, having heard that the person who opened the secret room might be dead, didn't press for their identity. She now trusted Cyrus completely, but she was quite interested in the secret room. Mr. Riddle, could you take me to see that secret room from 50 years ago? Of course. Cyrus marked the location of the secret room where Hagrid used to keep Aradogs, based on his memory. To be honest, keeping an 8-eyed giant spider in the castle is no different from keeping a basilisk. The two magical creatures are almost equally dangerous. If Tom hadn't already killed someone, leading to Aragog's expulsion, Hagrid would have been in trouble sooner or later. After getting the answer, Ginny already had a plan in mind. That night, around midnight, Ginny sneaked out of her room, intending to take a look at the secret room. There was no one else in the common room by then. She carefully made her way through the area beneath the portrait of the fat lady. As she passed through a classroom on the 5th floor, she suddenly heard several familiar voices. Ginny immediately crouched down in the corner by the window. "Do you think I should tell them about the voice I heard?" "Don't say that," Ron said without thinking. Hearing things that others can't hear is not a good sign, even in the magical world. He worried that if Harry revealed the incident, he might actually be mistaken for the attacker. Harry sensed something in Ron's voice and asked, "You believe me, don't you?" "Of course I believe it," Ron said quickly, "but you have to admit it's bizarre." "I know this is strange," Harry said. "The whole thing is strange. What's with the writing on the walls? The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. What does it all mean?" "Oh, that reminds me of something," Ron said slowly. "It seems like someone once told me about the Chamber of Secrets at Hogwarts. It was probably Bill." "What's a squib?" Harry asked. Ginny heard Harry's strange question, and then Ron laughed. Actually, she wanted to laugh too. Almost every young wizard who hasn't started school yet worries about whether they're a squib. "That's right, it's not actually funny, but in Filch's case," Ron said, "a squib is someone born into a wizarding family who has no magical abilities whatsoever. A squib is the opposite of a muggle-born wizard, but squibs are rare. If Filch is trying to learn magic through a correspondence course using fast spells, then he's definitely a squib. That explains a lot, like why he hates students so much. Jealous. Besides, judging from their tone, it seems like they won't be fired." Ginny breathed a sigh of relief. Just then she heard Harry say, "Let's hurry up and go to bed, lest Snape comes looking for trouble with us again and frame us." So she immediately left from under the window and hid around the corner, only coming out again after Harry and the others had left. She didn't want anyone to know about the secret room yet, at least not until she was certain that tonight's events were related to it. "It seems to be over here." She hurried down the corridor, and after a while, she reached the secret room Cyrus had marked for her. It was indeed secluded, but there was nothing there. Just as Mr. Riddle had said, the monster inside the room had been driven away. All that remains here is a thick layer of dust and some old cobwebs. Ginny felt a mix of relief and disappointment. However, she quickly rallied. Since it wasn't the monster in the secret room that did it, the most important thing now was to catch the prankster, Draco Malfoy. This was Ginny's primary suspect. After what happened during the summer vacation, Ginny had long since come to regard Draco as the inherently evil Malfoy brat, not to mention the strange timing of his appearance tonight. She wanted to go back to her dorm immediately and tell Mr. Riddle her guess, but as soon as she turned around, she saw an unexpected figure. Headmaster Dumbledore? Ginny was almost frozen in place. "Good evening, Miss Weasley." Dumbledore stood at the corner of the stairs. He was already tall, but now he looked even taller. His blue eyes shone like jewels in the night. Page 12. "Principal, what are you doing here?" Ginny became nervous. Being caught by the principal for sneaking around at night was no joke. However, Dumbledore clearly misunderstood the reason for Ginny's nervousness. At this moment, he looked directly into Ginny's eyes, as if trying to see through her heart. However, his expression remained kind. "This is the question I should be asking you, Miss Weasley," he said. "After such a terrible attack, and so late at night, you should be in your Gryffindor room, not wandering outside the castle, don't you think?" Ginny quickly lowered her head, avoiding Dumbledore's gaze. "This is not okay." Dumbledore immediately added, "Of course, I won't punish you for this. I'm here because someone is trying to create panic by claiming that the Chamber of Secrets has been opened again. Coincidentally, 50 years ago, a student here reported another student and got a monster expelled from the school. I must admit, it was a dangerous monster." His words forced Ginny to look up in surprise once again. Upon hearing about Riddle's exploits, she immediately wanted to share them with Dumbledore, but she quickly remembered that it was a secret between her and Mr. Riddle, so she swallowed her words. Dumbledore noticed her hesitation and knew that Ginny probably had some secret in her heart. "All right, you should go back to sleep now." "Yes, sir." Ginny nodded and passed by Dumbledore. When she reached the top half of the stairs, she heard Dumbledore's voice coming from behind her again. "And many more. What's wrong?" Ginny turned her head and met Dumbledore's gaze. "Before you leave, I'd like to confirm something, Miss Weasley. Is there anything else you wish to say to me?" Those blue eyes seemed somewhat aggressive. A series of thoughts flashed through Ginny's mind, and after a moment, she slowly began to speak. "No, sir." Upon hearing this, Dumbledore nodded, seemingly pondering, and then said softly, "Well then, good night, Miss Weasley. On such a day, it's best not to wander around at night. Off work, off work. I sneak away from work every day to write some words, he. Chapter 19 Dumbledore, led astray by Ginny. "So, you've run into Dumbledore." In the memory space, Cyrus's expression wasn't good. He only learned about it the following evening. Ginny had fallen asleep immediately after returning to her dorm last night. "Yes, Headmaster Dumbledore mentioned you. Although he didn't say your name, I know it's you," Ginny said excitedly. But Cyrus' next words were like a bucket of cold water poured on her. "I might have been exposed." Cyrus let out a heavy breath, trying to calm himself down. He hadn't expected that after waiting for so long, this would be the final result. Ultimately, he and Riddle were not the same person, and their attitudes toward Ginny were different. A little coincidence was enough to make the outcome of things very different. But, perhaps there is still hope, he thought. If Dumbledore believed that everything was under his control, he wouldn't have been in such a hurry to act. Just like Quirrell last year, it would be perfectly appropriate to use him as a practice tool for his savior. There's still room for maneuver. Cyrus forced himself to calm down. In truth, he wasn't sure what Dumbledore was planning, but nearly 20 hours had passed since Ginny met him the night before, and he was still safe and sound in Ginny's hands, which meant things weren't hopeless yet. You've been exposed, but I've never told anyone about you, Mr. Riddle. Ginny exclaimed in surprise, almost dropping her pen. It's not your fault, but magic is always unpredictable. Dumbledore is a master of legilimency. When he looks into your eyes, he can roughly know what you're thinking. After calming down, Cyrus was in the mood to comfort Ginny. Generally speaking, wizards always say that legilimency is not mind reading, but for an unguarded mind, it is actually more terrifying than mind reading. Then, what should I do? Ginny was almost in tears. She didn't want Mr. Riddle to die because of her, nor did she want to lose such a close friend. Don't worry, if someone really asks you to hand me over, just hide me. I'll alter your memories and hide you with the real ones, so no one can find me, Cyrus comforted him. This is the last resort. Once it gets to this point, who knows when he'll be able to wait for someone else to open the diary again. And if the diary isn't destroyed, will Voldemort die? While Cyrus and Ginny were deep in thought, Dumbledore sat in his office, racking his brains over the small details of his meeting with Ginny Weasley the previous night. It might be somewhat shameful to admit, but he had indeed used legilimency on a first-year wizard. He desperately wanted to know why the other person had appeared in that place by such a coincidence. However, the information he received was quite unexpected. He stirred his memories in the pensieve, and the scenes from last night immediately surfaced. He saw himself aggressively and shamelessly using his powerful magic to forcefully enter Ginny's mind and read her thoughts at that moment. To that end, he deliberately asked a question to guide her thinking. Before you leave, I'd like to confirm, Miss Weasley, is there anything else you'd like to say to me? Ginny Weasley is clearly hiding something. At that moment, her voice echoed in her mind. Draco Malfoy is the heir to Slytherin. Draco Malfoy? Even he found it a bit absurd. If Salazar Slytherin really chose Draco Malfoy as his successor, he was truly blind. It's not that Dumbledore looked down on Draco Malfoy, quite the opposite. In fact, he considered Draco a promising talent. However, the Malfoy family wasn't exactly qualified as Slytherin, let alone as heirs to the Slytherin tradition. Ambition and honor? Yes, but not much. And he doesn't speak parsley. This is a very important point. At least Dumbledore believed that if Slytherin really did leave behind a secret chamber, perhaps only Parseltongue could open its door. However, he couldn't be certain whether a locked room actually existed. Dumbledore knew very well that Hagrid wasn't the murderer in the case 50 years ago. At that time, he didn't suspect Tom Riddle, but the truth of many things becomes clearer with the passage of time. Tom was most likely the murderer from 50 years ago. However, Dumbledore couldn't be sure what methods the killer used. Was it a deliberate act of elimination to create Horcruxes? Or was it really as rumored, that the Chamber of Secrets in Slytherin was open to eliminate those so-called unworthy of learning magic? Draco Malfoy, it's not impossible. Arthur seemed to be ransacking Malfoy's house during the summer holidays. Perhaps Lucius had him bring some Voldemort-era stuff into the school, Dumbledore speculated. In fact, he was already pretty much right. It was just that Ginny's thought had slightly misled him. And Draco, who should have returned to the dungeon with the group, appearing on the third floor at that time was actually more coincidental than Harry and his friends being there. As for why Ginny Weasley was in the classroom where Hagrid hid the eight-eyed spider, perhaps someone had told her the location of this is not a secret room. 50 years ago, it might have been his grandfather or grandmother. What exactly is this old thing from Voldemort's era? A key to the Chamber of Secrets? Or perhaps... He snapped out of his memories, looked at Fawkes who was on the verge of rebirth, and said cheerfully, "Get ready to be reborn, old friend, I might need your help." If the old object was as he suspected, then something he'd been working on for decades would finally be progressing. Of course, given Tom Riddle's madness, he might have made several such things, but in any case, it would be great to destroy one now. Fawkes lowered his head and plucked out one of his tail feathers, ignoring Dumbledore's words. "It seems I need to find some time to visit my old friend Horace Slughorn. I haven't seen him in a long time since he retired." Dumbledore paced to the window, watching the moonlight stream in. "But let's wait and see. If it really is Draco, I believe Lucius Malfoy will make a move. Our working is so tiring." Chapter 20 The Forbidden Book Zone and the Jewish Book of Abraham. Ginny has been very uneasy ever since Cyrus told Ginny that Dumbledore might have found out about her. Percy or Ron probably misunderstood, thinking she was worried that Ron and Harry might get expelled. Ron, on the other hand, thought she was worried about the cat. "But you don't really know Mrs. Lorry's. To be honest, we're much more comfortable without her." "This kind of thing doesn't happen often at Hogwarts," Ron reassured her. "They'll catch that madman soon and kick him out of here. I just hope he petrifies Filch before he gets expelled." But as soon as the murderer was mentioned, Ginny thought of what happened that night, her face turned pale, and she ran away with her head down. "I was just joking." Ron was at a loss for words. However, regardless of the circumstances, with the professors failing to catch the culprit and Filch's cat remaining petrified, the prank theory gradually lost its credibility. More and more people began to believe that Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets had been opened, and that the attacker was none other than Harry Potter. Ginny relayed these rumors to Cyrus. Hogwarts students are always jumping to conclusions. Even if the Chamber of Secrets really was opened, I doubt it would be Harry Potter, Cyrus reassured her. I know, I'm not worried about Harry, I'm just a little worried about you. Since Halloween, there have been no more attacks, and older students have almost stopped discussing it, but younger students still enjoy it immensely. After that night, as Dumbledore seemed to take no action, Ginny's anxiety gradually subsided. However, she had originally intended to investigate Malfoy, but now she had completely lost the will to do so. On the contrary, Harry, Malfoy, and their two companions seemed convinced that Malfoy was the true heir, and they gathered together all day long without any apparent reason, plotting something. Ginny vaguely heard words like potion, low art, and a month. On the contrary, Cyrus was fully aware of their every move. Hermione managed to get an autograph from the dimwit Lockhart and retrieved potions of power from the forbidden section, intending to brew Polyjuice potion. Because of this, the three of them occupied Myrtle's bathroom, making his actions much more difficult. Fortunately, Cyrus rarely went to the Chamber of Secrets. He spent more time practicing spells in the Room of Requirement or taking time to strangle Hagrid's rooster. Because of Dumbledore, Cyrus often felt a sense of urgency, unwilling to waste a single second, and desperately wanted to increase his strength to ensure that he would be able to escape even in the worst-case scenario face-to-face with Dumbledore. The basilisk was his ally, but the basilisk alone could not stop Dumbledore. Page 13. It could even be said that even if he thoroughly absorbed all of Tom Riddle's magical memories from his student days, he still wouldn't be able to escape from Dumbledore. I need more power. He set his sights on the forbidden book section. Hogwarts library has been accumulating slowly since the school's founding 1,000 years ago. As a result, the books are extremely diverse, and many magical books in the world exist in original form or in copy. Among them, most of the books identified as forbidden are either books with powerful magical abilities or extremely evil books. The sheer number of books is staggering. Even Dumbledore, who spent nearly a century at the school, wouldn't claim to have read them all. Moreover, many books are cursed simply by being opened, let alone actually read. The way to break the situation lies within. At night, after Ginny placed her diary beside her pillow and fell into a deep sleep, Cyrus possessed Ginny's body with his consciousness. She suddenly opened her eyes and sat up straight like a doll. Then, Cyrus got out of bed and quietly left the tower. Since Mrs. Norris was petrified, Hogwarts has become much quieter. Fewer people dare to venture out at night. Fred and George are quite brave, but without Mrs. Norris, they don't rely on the Marauders map as much anymore. Without Mrs. Lorry's, Filch was as if he had lost his eyes. He had no chance of catching the two of them. This gave Cyrus a great advantage now. It was impossible for anyone to know his whereabouts. Of course, getting into the restricted section isn't easy. It's impossible for a first-year wizard to open it with a single unlocking charm, like in the movies. If it were that simple, the restricted section would have been emptied by mischievous Gryffindors long ago. Cyrus arrived at the library entrance on the 4th floor and gently opened the library door with a lock-picking spell. So far so good. He slowly walked into the library, closed the door, walked through rows of bookshelves, and came to a staircase in the corner of the library. In the middle of the staircase, there was a rope separating the books upstairs from downstairs. It looked very simple, as if he could just bend down and pass through. But Cyrus dared not be so bold. This seemingly ordinary rope is actually a magical barrier separating the forbidden book section from the regular books. If one is not careful, it will quickly trigger an alarm. He picked up Ginny's wand and began to gradually break the spell on the rope. After only about 10 minutes, the knot in the middle of the rope came undone on its own, and the originally taut rope now looked as if it had been through 7 nights, limp and shriveled to one side. It's easier than I imagined. I never thought that after all these years, the protective magic of the Hogwarts Forbidden Library would remain unchanged. Cyrus had expected to experience some setbacks, but the outcome surprised him greatly. Having memories of Riddle, who was a regular at the restricted book section 50 years ago, Cyrus now feels as comfortable as if he's back home when he comes to the restricted book section. The 112 books, the Darkness of the Secrets, the Hermes Scriptures, Natural Magic. The Book of Abraham. Cyrus walked past a series of banned books, almost all of which contained names not mentioned in the original works, but one book still greatly intrigued him. The Book of Abraham the Judean. I remember it was a mysterious book that Nicholas Flamel obtained from a dream. He was able to create the Philosopher's Stone thanks to the revelations in this book. I never expected to find a copy here. Cyrus picked up the book, flipped through it briefly, and immediately became even more surprised. It's actually an original. My darlings, it's the beginning of the month, please give me some votes. Poor thing. Chapter 21 Profound Alchemy. Cyrus discovered the problem almost as soon as he picked up the book. Its material is neither paper nor parchment. The text and illustrations in the book are not drawn on, but rather seem to be branded on with metal. The book is very thin, with only 21 pages, but the page numbers in the corners are not numbered in order. Instead, a 7 is marked every 7 pages, for a total of 3. According to the general understanding in the magical world, 7 is indeed a magical number. In fact, Hogwarts has a course that specifically mentions this magical number, and Voldemort also had a great fondness for the number 7. However, in alchemy, 3 is also a magical number. He couldn't understand the contents of the book at all. The knowledge Voldemort possessed in his 5th year seemed rather superficial compared to more profound knowledge. Not to mention, even Nicholas Flamel, who had the revelation of dreams, took 28 years to decipher the book's mysteries. Cyrus closed the Book of Abraham, looked around again, and sure enough, found another book. Nicholas Flamel's manuscript, the Book of Hieroglyphs. In comparison, the book was quite thick. Cyrus casually flipped through a few pages, and an opened letter slipped out from inside. Albus Percival Wulflick Brian Dumbledore. Dear Albus. Having lived through a long period of time, more than 6 centuries, and facing death with our bodies broken and worn, neither Perino nor I felt any fear. We both wanted to believe that when the world learned of our deaths, it would not be able to help but feel sorry for our passing and greedy for our immense wealth, except for you, Albus. We both believe that death is just another adventure, and Perino and I have been too late for this adventure. Before I depart, I give you the 2 most important books of my life, in memory of you, my friend who is more than 500 years younger than me, but whose wisdom surpasses mine, and I leave the rest of my wealth to Beauxbatons. I hope you will not mind. Of course, I know very well that Albus Dumbledore has never been interested in these things. I dare not say that I have fully comprehended the mysteries of the Book of Abraham. This book, which I foresaw in a dream, contains only a few pages, yet it holds true wisdom and truth. I hope you will keep it safe, and it would be even better if you could decipher all its mysteries. However, we both know it's incredibly difficult. During our first meeting, and later our close collaboration in exploring the secrets of magic and alchemy, you've read this book countless times without making any progress. I'm very willing to believe that since it found me through prophecy, perhaps fate can lead it to where it's meant to be. Now, because of Voldemort, I have decided to give you the Philosopher's Stone. Perhaps this is a revelation. That being said, Perino and I actually left behind quite a few elixirs of immortality, so please don't worry about them. P.S. I believe we will meet again soon. Cyrus closed the letter and finally understood what was going on. Someone as terrified of death as Riddle would have wanted this book if he knew of its existence. But Riddle has no memory of it whatsoever. It was only last year that Dumbledore put it in the forbidden section. The envelope had already been opened, indicating that Dumbledore had read Nicholas Flamelius's letter and knew that the 2 books were actually a gift from Nicholas. However, he did not have the intention of keeping them for himself, but selflessly placed them in the restricted area, waiting for the revelation of fate that Nicholas spoke of. Could this revelation be about me? Cyrus couldn't help but think narcissistically. But no matter what, he was unwilling to let go of these 2 books. If a magic stone could truly be crafted, it would greatly aid his resurrection. Even if only a flawed one could be crafted, as long as it could replenish his life force, the damage to Ginny would be much less. With that in mind, Cyrus quickly flipped through the 2 books and also selected some other alchemical works in order to make connections and learn from them. Voldemort's alchemy skills were actually quite high. He not only earned his advanced wizarding certificate with excellent grades but also interned at Borgin's shop for a period after graduation. However, that was Tom Riddle after graduation, not the 5th grader Tom Riddle we know now. The book, Islamic Alchemy and the Tree of Life in Kabbalah, records a wizard named Hohenheim, another wizard in legend who possessed a magic stone. However, whether this is true or not is still in doubt. Cyrus quickly flipped through the pages. He's actually quite happy that he's in a state of memory, otherwise it would be impossible for him to memorize all the books in such a short time. Because of his current special state, the diary will be like another precious meditation tool. Every book he has read will be recorded in the form of images. He can simply record the contents of these books first and analyze them slowly when he gets back. Of course, the actual learning time will not be reduced, it will just be relatively safer. The ancient Egyptian alchemical text, the Emerald Book, also offers some insight. To create the miracle of something unique, one must understand that the things of the upper realm are the same as those of the lower realm, and the things of the lower realm are no different from those of the upper realm. And what is the only thing? Besides this copy of the Emerald Book, there was another book, the Book of Thoth, which had a very deep connection with the Emerald Book, and Cyrus opened it as well. At this point, he didn't seek a thorough understanding. In fact, one could say he just skimmed through it. He only looked at the general idea to see if he needed it, and then immediately decided whether to put it down or write it down. Gradually, Cyrus became completely absorbed in the experience, until the piercing crowing of a rooster outside the castle snapped him out of his reverie, and he realized that it was almost dawn. I need to get back quickly. I was planning to find some powerful dark magic books to see if I could improve my strength, but I ended up spending the whole night studying alchemy. Cyrus shook his head, but he was tireless and didn't feel any regret. He was just waiting to return the body to Ginny and then continue to slowly digest the knowledge in the memory space. Walking briskly down the corridors of Hogwarts, outside the castle, the sky was still dark, but the eastern sky was beginning to slowly turn white. By the way, we need to kill the rooster as soon as possible. Before this, Cyrus had already killed a rooster, but he dared not kill them all at once, otherwise it would be too strange. Please read on, add this to your favorites, and give me recommendation tickets and monthly passes. Since you've already made it this far, why not add it to your favorites so you don't get lost? Chapter 22 Quidditch. These past few nights, Cyrus would occasionally sneak into the forbidden book section using Ginny's body. Besides alchemy, he also read many other books, such as the Book of the Red Dragon, the Book of Solomon, the Book of Rogier, and the complete Book of Dark Spells. Some of these books were ones that Riddle had already read, while others were ones that he himself hadn't had time to read. After all, Riddle's time at Hogwarts was too short, limiting the number of books he could access. Therefore, he focused most of his energy on dark magic. However, it wasn't only dark magic books that possessed terrifying power. There are also some spells that aren't black magic, but because they are extremely dangerous, they are placed in the forbidden book section. For example, Cyrus is currently reading The Theory and Experiment of the Metamorphosis of Fantasy Magus, the Birth of the Five-Legged Monster. Although magical creatures have always been enslaved, the magical power within them is extremely strong. If I could achieve the transformation of the magical creature guts, it would greatly enhance my strength. Cyrus closed the book and sent his consciousness back into the depths of his memory. Ginny yawned sleepily, feeling as if her head was 10 times heavier than a quake. Good morning, Ginny, are you all right? Colin, who was holding a camera, spotted her immediately and came over to greet her. You look terrible, like you haven't slept for days. Click with that, he immediately snapped a picture of Ginny with his camera. A photo of the adorable little girl with thick dark circles under her eyes was printed. Colin, barely perceptible, was overjoyed. Honestly, I never imagined wizards could be sleep-deprived. You look like you're about to collapse. And those dark circles and bags under your eyes. The kid was chattering away, which made Ginny a little unhappy, and what's more, he actually dared to take unflattering photos of her. Shut up, Colin, give me the photos. What? No, I'm planning to send it home to my brother. He's really into Hogwarts. Colin grinned, showing his teeth, then said worriedly, why don't you go take a break? You look terrible. I'm worried you'll die in my camera. Ginny, you're finished, kid. Although she was furious, Ginny was too tired to argue with him, and just asked listlessly, what classes are there today? No classes today, I think you really need a break. Have you forgotten it's Quidditch? Gryffindor versus Slytherin, he said immediately. I'm planning to sneak off to the arena in a bit and take a picture of Harry winning. By the way, how's your relationship with Harry? Your brother and he are good friends, right? Page 14. Colin's mouth chattered on and on like a machine gun, but Ginny only caught the first 5 words, no class today. No classes. I'm going back to rest. Aren't you going to watch the game? Colin asked in surprise. He thought every wizard in the magical world liked Quidditch. Besides, today was a Gryffindor match. Quidditch. Ginny paused, wondering if she liked Quidditch. Of course she liked it. In fact, she was always envious whenever she watched her brothers play family Quidditch at home. However, they rarely included her. But on the other hand, she was incredibly sleepy right now. By the way, could you ask Mr. Riddle if he could help me record a Quidditch match? Okay, sleeping on the playground is about the same. What? It's nothing, you go ahead first, I'll go to the playground later. Ginny rushed back to her dormitory and took out her diary. Mr. Riddle, there's a Quidditch match today that I don't want to miss, but I'm just too tired. Could you write it down in your journal, like when we're talking face to face? Quidditch? Cyrus was immediately drawn to Ginny's words. If he remembered correctly, in the original story, it was after this match that the second person was attacked by the basilisk. Colin Creevy. That's the first-year student who kept bothering Harry. Cyrus knew it was time to take action again. Of course. I guarantee you an authentic Quidditch match. Great, I'll go to sleep now. Ginny fell asleep before she had finished writing. Cyrus, in Ginny's body, was actually quite tired. However, he had stocked up on some energy-boosting pills during the flu season, and these were much more effective than coffee. The price was that he had to watch the Quidditch match with a spiky head. Hi Ginny, you've caught another cold. Hermione greeted Ginny warmly on the playground. She and Ginny had a very good relationship, but Ginny Weasley always gave her the impression of being frail and sickly. She had just recovered from the flu not long ago, and now she had it again. I just didn't sleep while I stayed up late reading, Cyrus replied. Oh, it's nice to enjoy reading, but you should get more rest, Hermione said quickly, giving the carefree Ron a glare. You should learn from your sister. That's why she can cast spells on older students and break yours instead of getting herself into trouble. Are you crazy? It's because my wand is broken. Ron didn't expect to get slapped while he was just sitting there, and immediately cried out in grievance. Hermione didn't say anything more. In fact, she was just making a routine suggestion to encourage her to study, but it had never been very effective. Their attention returned to the field, where Gryffindor was at a disadvantage from the start. The situation isn't looking good for the Gryffindor team. You know, Malfoy donated several Nimbus 2001s to the Slytherin team, but the Gryffindor team's brooms are still the sweeping series, and they're not even the 7 sweepings, Ron said worriedly. Even Harry's Nimbus 2000 is a level below Malfoy's broom. Those black, smooth broom handles, like a cool and stylish sports car, caught Ron's eye. The weather was very stuffy, and after a while, it started to rain. The score is now 0-60, and Slytherin has scored 60 points. Cyrus doesn't know much about golf, but he can understand the basic rules. A quake is worth 10 points, a golden snitch is worth 150 points, and a wanderer is worth no points. These wanderers are usually used to hit people in order to hinder their movement. However, now, one of the wandering balls is clearly having a problem. I think I saw this plot last year, Ron said blankly. Someone tampered with that ball. Hermione exclaimed, jumping to her feet immediately. At this moment, the ball almost gave up attacking others and followed Harry as if it had eyes, forcing the twins, who were batters, to surround Harry and keep hitting it away. Hermione instinctively looked at Snape, but after remembering what happened last semester, she couldn't help but look at Lockhart instead. Handsome Lockhart? How can this be? Hermione did not notice anyone casting a spell. Chapter 23 The Medical Master Lockhart. Cyrus looked toward the professor's table, where all the professors, including Dumbledore, watched with trepidation. Interestingly, however, none of them made a move. Now, anyone could probably see that something was wrong with that wandering ball, but the professors remained unmoved, like a bunch of idiots. Aren't they going to do anything? Cyrus couldn't help but ask. Ron's expression wasn't good, but he still explained, of course they can't. You know, there are always unusual things that happen in a formal Quidditch match. If everyone interfered, the match couldn't go on. I think unless someone's life is in real danger, no one will intervene. But what about Harry and the others? Did no one suggest checking the blink ball? Of course not. What if the blink dagger is fine? Then they'll be disqualified. Before the match, Wood told Harry, either catch the golden snitch or die on the field. Ron's face turned pale. We have to think of something. I can't find out who's casting the spell. Hermione said anxiously. Cyrus knew who was behind it, but he had no intention of doing anything about it. The gaze lingers on another seat on the playground. As the major financial backer of the Slytherin team, Lucius Malfoy has naturally come to the scene, partly to watch his son's game, and partly to see if the Dark Lord's diary really has a way to open the Chamber of Secrets. The question is, will Lucius Malfoy act the same way he did in the original story this time? When Riddle was controlling Ginny, did he secretly contact Lucius? Did he help him find a suitable time to drive Dumbledore away? Cyrus immediately realized that his plan was probably not so easy to implement. At this moment, Lucius Malfoy was watching Draco's match with all his heart. Although he was usually extremely strict and unforgiving towards Draco, he actually loved his son no less than the Weasleys. But first, he must be Malfoy. It has to be Malfoy first. Cyrus murmured silently, already having made up his mind. But whether Riddle had contacted Lucius or not, at least for now, that was his intention. Bearing the Malfoy name, he dared not object to his orders. Of course, not now. Oh. Suddenly, a huge and enthusiastic cheer startled him awake. He saw the Gryffindors leap from their seats one by one, and Hermione and Ron, without hesitation, pulled him through the crowd and jumped onto the playground. Many others had followed suit, especially after Harry's almost tragic victory. He became a hero in all of Gryffindor. Cyrus only saw him lying on the ground, as if he was about to faint. To make matters worse, his arm was almost completely twisted and numb. Is he okay? It's hard to say. That crazy ball hit his right hand, and I think it was probably already broken at that point. Then he crashed into Malfoy, which terrified Malfoy, Ron quickly said. Later, he caught the golden snitch first, but his arm was injured even more badly. 3 people surrounded Harry. Just then, a bright and cheerful voice came from outside the crowded throng. Make way, let me see him. Lockhart pushed his way through the crowd, and with his signature smile, confidently declared, a broken hand? Leave it to me. I've seen this hundreds of times. Hermione quickly made room for him. But Harry didn't trust him that much, no, he was even afraid of him. Upon hearing Lockhart's voice, he was jolted awake from his unconsciousness and weakly protested, oh, no, I don't want you. The voice was both resistant and filled with fear. I don't know what he's talking about, Lockhart said loudly to the anxious Gryffindor students gathered around him. Don't worry, Harry, I'm just about to heal your arm. No, Harry said, it's fine as it is, thank you. At this point, war correspondent Colin also got involved, once again capturing Harry's embarrassing moment with his camera. So, it's really not unjust that this kid was petrified. Lie down, Harry, Lockhart reassured him. It's a simple spell that I've used countless times. Why can't I just go to the school hospital? Harry gritted his teeth, glancing at Cyrus. Even if it's just Ginny. He recalled how easily Ginny had broken Ron's curse. By comparison, she was far more reliable than Lockhart. In reality, Cyrus could easily cure Harry, but how could he petrify Colin, who was going to visit Harry in the hospital, if he didn't let the medical genius Lockhart show his skills? He really should go to the hospital, said Wood, covered in mud, unable to suppress a smile despite his injured seeker. That was a stunt, Harry, brilliant. I've never seen you do anything like that before. Through the dense mass of legs around him, Harry saw Fred and George Weasley desperately trying to push the out-of-control ball back into the box. The ball was still struggling fiercely. "Step back," Lockhart said, rolling up his emerald green sleeves. "No, Harry said weakly, but Lockhart was already spinning his wand. A second later, he pointed the wand at Harry's arm. A strange, extremely uncomfortable sensation, like lightning, shot from Harry's shoulder to his fingertips. It felt as if his arm was being ripped away. He didn't dare look, closing his eyes and turning his face to the side. But as the people around him gasped and Colin Creevey began frantically snapping photos again, he realized his worst fears had come true. His arm no longer hurt, but it didn't feel like an arm at all. Lockhart said hastily. "Yes, that's right, sometimes it happens. But the important thing is, he's not in pain anymore. Remember that. Well, Harry, go for a walk to the Hospitalo. Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger, would you like to come with him? Mrs. Pomfrey would hand give you another trim." Harry stood up, feeling his body strangely tilt to one side. He took a deep breath and looked down at his right side. The sight before him almost made him faint again. Page 15. What emerged from his sleeve looked like a thick, flesh-colored rubber glove. He tried to move his fingers, but there was no response. Lockhart didn't set Harry's bones properly. He removed them all. "Lockhart, just tell me, does it still hurt?" "Good news, it's Friday." "Bad news, what bad news could Friday bring?" "Waiting to get off work." Chapter 24. The Second Attack. Miss Pomfrey glared at him. "I'm glad you came to the school hospital, but I'm not happy that you didn't come to me directly." She lifted the pitiful, lifeless thing, which was as soft as Harry's underdeveloped arm. "I can set bones in a second, but getting them to grow back. Never again." Cyrus chimed in. "It can't get hard again. I mean the bone. What else could it be?" Ron didn't quite understand. "Of course he'll let it grow back, but it'll hurt a lot, so he'll have to spend the night here," Madame Pomfrey said sternly, tossing Harry a set of pajamas and giving Cyrus a sharp look. "What on earth are you thinking, you little girl?" The curtains around Harry's bed were drawn, and Ron helped him change into his pajamas while Hermione and Cyrus waited outside. It took Ron quite a bit of effort to tuck that rubbery, boneless arm into the sleeve. "How are you still protecting Lockhart now, Hermione?" Ron said loudly through the curtain as he pulled Harry's limp fingers out of his sleeve one by one. "If Harry wants the bones removed, he'll bring it up himself." "Everyone makes mistakes," Hermione said. "And your arm doesn't hurt anymore, right, Harry? It really doesn't hurt anymore." Even Cyrus looked at Hermione with an absurd expression. Needless to say, Harry, the primary victim, had a different expression. "Hermione, you should be more rational. Think about it. If Madame Pomfrey couldn't do anything, Harry's right hand would be ruined. Lockhart almost crippled him forever. He has no ability at all, and he shouldn't have done something he wasn't sure of in the first place." These words saddened Hermione, and then Madame Pomfrey walked through the curtain carrying a large bottle labeled Bonerite. The two of them followed. "This night has been tough," she said, pouring a large, steaming glass and handing it to Harry. "Growing bones is a very uncomfortable thing." Seeing Harry's upset expression, Ron decided to change the subject. "At least we won. Thanks to you for catching the golden snitch." Malfoy's expression, he looked like he wanted to kill someone. "I really want to know what he did to that walking ball," Hermione said angrily. They had already blamed Malfoy for everything related to the walking ball. "We can write this question on the list and ask him together after we drink Polyjuice Potion. I hope Polyjuice Potion tastes better than this stuff." Harry's voice trailed off. Hermione and Ron hadn't realized something was wrong when they saw Harry's gaze fixed on Cyrus. "A compound medicine." Cyrus aptly voiced his doubt. Now, they realize something is wrong. "Harry, you let it slip." Hermione screamed and covered his mouth with a pillow. Ron quickly stepped in front of Cyrus, frantically saying, "You misheard, Ginny. Without Polyjuice Potion, how could we possibly brew it? That's a potion even upperclassmen can't brew, not to mention the recipe is hidden in the Forbidden Library, and we'd have to steal it from Snape. It's impossible. Besides, we can't find a place where we can concentrate on brewing potions without being disturbed." "Ron, I have to remind you, you've practically told everyone everything." He used his left hand to pry open the pillow with difficulty. Ron immediately turned pale and pleaded, "Please don't tell Mom, please." He was practically about to kowtow to Cyrus. Hee. Hermione laughed awkwardly. "Of course I want tattle," Cyrus said, shaking his head. "It wouldn't do him any good, but..." "So, you're planning to use the Polyjuice Potion to become Slytherins and then find out if Malfoy is the one who opened the Chamber of Secrets?" The trio nodded immediately. Then, Hermione realized what was happening and exclaimed in surprise, "Wait, you know about Polyjuice Potion, and you even know what it's used for?" You should know that Ron had never even heard of any compound medicine. "I've seen it in a book," Cyrus said nonchalantly. Riddle had read the book Powerful Potions more than once back in the day. He changed the subject and continued, "If you don't mind, you can invite me along." "You too." Ron was about to refuse when a commotion came from outside the door. The Gryffindor team swarmed in, so he had to shut his mouth and desperately tried to wink at Cyrus. The team brought a lot of food and drinks, as if they were going to have a party right there in the school hospital, which angered Ms. Pomfrey. She immediately rushed out from the other side and kicked everyone out. "This child needs rest, he has 33 bones to grow. Get out, get out." At the entrance of the school hospital, Cyrus ran into Colin, who was also there to visit. The guy wanted to go in, but was pushed out by a group of teammates. The small guy craned his neck to look around in the crowd. Ron avoided him like the plague and immediately moved a distance away. "Don't look at Colin, Madame Pomfrey forbids us from visiting Harry," Cyrus kindly reminded him. "But you can, secretly." After saying that, he left immediately. Ginny was a bit too tired, and to avoid affecting her health, Cyrus decided to go and rest. There were still several hours until Hogwarts curfew. At night, Cyrus awoke in a dark, secret room. A giant basilisk surrounded him. Despite the terrifying magic in its eyes, it could not harm the one who controlled the basilisk. The second hunt is about to begin. He sat atop the basilisk's head and commanded it to close its eyes. This magical creature was actually quite different from a snake. It moved more by sight and hearing than by heat sensing. "Listen to my command, and I will guide you on your path." Cyrus spoke in a terrifying voice, like the whisper of an evil being. Hogwarts was quiet and eerie at night. Cyrus skillfully avoided Filch, who was still on patrol, and rode the giant snake toward the infirmary. Meanwhile, Colin, carrying a bunch of grapes he'd secretly left behind at the dinner party, planned to sneak a peek at Harry Potter, just as Cyrus had told him. Since it was his first time going out at night, Colin also brought his camera, hoping to capture something unique. From this perspective, he can be said to have gotten what he wanted. He hummed a song and walked briskly around the corner, but unexpectedly bumped into something huge, causing Colin to fall to the ground and even drop the grapes he was holding. His voice quickly trailed off as his gaze fell upon him. At that moment, a gigantic snake, its head alone larger than his own, was facing him with its eyes closed. And on the snake's body was none other than the familiar Ginny Weasley. "Ginny, you are the heir to Slytherin," he said, utterly absurd. "That's right, it's a pity that no third person will know about this," Cyrus said jokingly. As if realizing something, Colin immediately picked up his camera and aimed it at the basilisk and Ginny, attempting to photograph the culprit. "I can die myself, but at least." Crack. "Good night, little lion of Gryffindor. It's the weekend. Yay." Chapter 25. The question isn't who, but what. Harry was awakened by the voice in his head and the pain in his arm. The feeling was as if someone had stuffed thousands of sharp blades into the muscles of his arm, and as the bone fragments grew, they inevitably cut through his flesh. Now, the pain that Lockhart took away has returned, twice as intense. But more than the pain, he was concerned about the voice that kept echoing in his mind. So much time had passed that he had almost forgotten about it, and a monster rubbing his forehead with a sponge. "Get away." He waved frantically, but quickly recognized the monster as Dobby, the house elf who got him a warning from the Ministry of Magic. Dobby reminded Harry Potter time and time again. "Oh, sir, why don't you heed Dobby's warnings? Harry Potter missed the train, why doesn't he go home?" Dobby said sadly. "Now, Harry knows who's trying to harm him. Did you do this? You blocked the wall and wouldn't let us through. You almost got Ron and me fired," he said angrily. "You better get out of here before my bones heal, or I'll strangle you." Dobby's used to the threat of death. "He hears it 5 times a day at home," Dobby said nonchalantly, though he looked rather pitiful. This immediately calmed Harry's anger considerably. "Why are you wearing that thing, Dobby?" He looked at Dobby's clothes, or rather, a pillowcase that hadn't been washed in decades and was dirtier than a rag. "This, sir," Dobby said, tugging at the pillowcase. "This symbolizes the slave status of a house elf, sir. Dobby is only free when his master gives him clothes to wear. The people in the house are very careful not to give Dobby even a pair of socks, sir, because if they do, Dobby will be free and will be gone from their house forever." Upon hearing this, Harry immediately felt sympathy, but that sympathy vanished in an instant. Harry Potter must go home. Dobby thought his blink ball would definitely work. "Your wandering ball. What do you mean by this? Your wandering ball? Did you send that wandering ball to run me over and kill me?" "I didn't want to kill you, sir, I absolutely didn't want to kill you," Dobby said in horror. Dobby wants to save Harry Potter's life. Being badly injured and sent home is better than staying here, sir. Dobby just wants Harry Potter to be slightly injured and then sent home. "Oh, is that all?" Harry asked, angrily and sarcastically. "I guess you're not going to tell me why you want me to be sent home smashed to pieces, are you?" Ah, I wish Harry Potter knew what he meant to us lowly, enslaved little people in the wizarding world. Dobby hasn't forgotten the height of that man's power, the one whose name can't even be mentioned. "People treated us house elves like vermin, sir. Of course, they still treat Dobby that way now, sir," he admitted, wiping his face on the pillowcase again. "But all in all, since you defeated that man whose name you can't even mention, our lives have improved considerably. Harry Potter survived, the Dark Lord's magic was broken, it's a new beginning, sir. For those of us who thought the dark days would never end, Harry Potter is a beacon of hope, sir. Now, at Hogwarts, something terrible is about to happen, perhaps it already has, and Dobby can't let Harry Potter stay here, because history is about to repeat itself, the Chamber of Secrets will be opened once more." "So, there really is a secret room?" Harry asked quietly. Endor saying it was opened before? Tell me, Dobby. Oh, sir, please stop asking. Please stop pressing poor Dobby. The elf stammered, his eyes wide as bells in the darkness. Someone is plotting something here. Harry Potter must not stay here when it happens. Go home, Harry Potter. Go home. Harry Potter must not get involved, sir, it's too dangerous. Page 16. Who is that, Dobby? Who opened the secret room? Who opened it last time? Dobby can't say, sir, Dobby can't say, Dobby absolutely can't say. The elf shrieked. Go home, Harry Potter, go home. I'm not going anywhere, Harry said irritably. One of my best friends is Muggleborn, and if the Chamber of Secrets is opened, shall be the first one to get in. Harry Potter is willing to risk his life for his friends. Dobby groaned, both sad and happy. How noble. How brave. But he must save himself, he must. Harry Potter absolutely cannot. Dobby suddenly froze, his two bat-like ears twitching. Harry heard it too. Footsteps came from the hallway outside. Dobby has to go. The house elf gasped, terrified. A loud popping sound followed, and Harry's fist suddenly went limp, leaving only air inside. He slumped back onto the bed, his eyes fixed on the dark doorway of the hospital room, the footsteps growing ever closer. Immediately afterward, Dumbledore backed into the ward. He was wearing a long woolen dressing gown and a nightcap. He was carrying one end of a sculpture-like object in both hands. A second later, Professor McGonagall appeared, holding the object by its feet. Together they placed it on the bed. Go and call Madame Pomfrey, Dumbledore whispered. Professor McGonagall hurried past Harry's bedside and out. Harry lay motionless, pretending to be asleep. He heard someone speaking urgently, then Professor McGonagall rushed back in, followed closely by Madame Pomfrey, who was wearing a jacket over her pajamas. Harry heard a gasp. What's going on? Madame Pomfrey asked Dumbledore in a low voice as she bent down to examine the statue. Another attack, Dumbledore said. McGold found him on the stairs. He also had a bunch of grapes next to him, Professor McGonagall said. We guessed he was trying to sneak over here to see Potter. Harry's stomach clenched violently. He slowly and carefully lifted himself a few inches so he could see the statue on the bed. Moonlight shone on his stunned face. It was Colin Creevey. His eyes were wide open, and he held his camera out to his chest, petrified. Miss Pomfrey asked in a low voice. Yes, Professor McGonagall said, it sends chills down my spine just thinking about it. Who knows what might have happened if Albus hadn't happened to come downstairs to get some hot chocolate. The three men stared intently at Colin. Then Dumbledore leaned forward and took the camera from Colin's stiff fingers. Could he have taken pictures of the attackers? Professor McGonagall asked anxiously. Dumbledore did not answer. He pried open the back cover of the camera. My goodness! Ms. Pomfrey exclaimed. A hissing sound of heat escaped from the camera. Even Harry, 3 beds away, could smell the pungent odor of burning plastic. It's melted, Ms. Pomfrey said in surprise. It's completely melted. What does this mean, Albus? Professor McGonagall pressed. This means, Dumbledore said, that the Chamber of Secrets has indeed been opened again. Ms. Pomfrey covered her mouth with her hand. Professor McGonagall stared blankly at Dumbledore. But Albus, you must know, who? The problem isn't who, Dumbledore said, his gaze fixed on Colin, the problem is, how. Harry could see the expression on Professor McGonagall's face in the shadows and knew that she, like him, had not understood Dumbledore's words. Chapter 26 Rescue in the Opposite Direction. How did Ginny Weasley open the Chamber of Secrets? She couldn't possibly be Slytherin's heir. Dumbledore pondered this after returning to his office. While in the school infirmary, McGonagall thought he might know who opened the Chamber of Secrets. In fact, Dumbledore did know he had previously suspected Draco Malfoy due to Ginny's misleading remarks, but during this attack, someone had already revealed the true culprit's identity. As the principal, he had too many informants within the school. And this informant wasn't even human, but, is it a portrait? Last night, Cyrus had just petrified Colin when Dumbledore arrived. He figured that even if Dumbledore already knew Ginny's secret, it was impossible for him to be aware of his every move. Dumbledore said he just happened to come downstairs to get hot chocolate, but how many coincidences are there in this world? He quickly realized where the problem lay. The portraits in the castle couldn't simply be considered decorations. They had their own thoughts and served Dumbledore. When Dumbledore wanted to know some clues about the castle, he only needed to ask them, or they would proactively inform him, and Dumbledore would have everything he needed to know. But before this, Cyrus had overlooked this point, and it could even be said that Riddle had overlooked it as well. Tom Riddle killed Myrtle the first time he released the basilisk without even leaving the bathroom. He usually kept the basilisk moving within the pipes, so the portraits didn't see him. Cyrus's first attack also took place at the bathroom door, thus again escaping the portrait's watchful eyes. However, during his second attack, he allowed the basilisk to roam freely in the corridor, revealing his location. At least, the location of the secret room hasn't been exposed yet, Cyrus muttered to himself. Every time he went to the secret chamber, he would cast a disillusionment spell on himself just in case, and there were no paintings in the bathroom. Moreover, Cyrus wasn't too bothered that Dumbledore knew some of his information. Making him think he has everything under control will actually be to his advantage, Cyrus thought. Dumbledore would likely subjectively believe that Tom Riddle was the one who stirred up this storm. Under this premise, he would certainly want to see if the two prophesied figures, or rather, Harry Potter, the enemy Voldemort personally chose for himself, could shine once again. As for himself, as the principal, all he needs to do for now is ensure the safety of the students. What a pity. The prophecy is no longer relevant, because the soul within the diary no longer belongs to Tom Riddle, Cyrus laughed. This was the outcome Dumbledore could never have imagined. When he carefully followed Cyrus's plan and waited for Harry Potter to complete the test again, he discovered that the boss prepared for him this semester was gone. That was truly interesting. Cyrus got out of bed, and after petrifying Colin, he went back to sleep. This made Ginny look much better, though she was still a little pale, and her body temperature was a little lower than normal. This was a sign that Ginny's life force was fading, but instead of returning his body to Ginny, he went to the Gryffindor common room after washing up. Hermione was already sitting on the sofa reading a book. It was that book, Powerful Potions. You're up really early. It's rare that I've borrowed the book, Hermione said, looking up. Ron isn't up yet. Before she could finish speaking, a red-haired man hurriedly jumped out. Phew, all up. Sorry, it's a bit late, Ron said quickly. Hermione slammed her book shut and whispered, let's go. The three of them immediately went outside together. Where are you going? Percy suddenly appeared out of nowhere, looking at Ron with a suspicious expression. Why don't you go out for a walk? Ron retorted, not to be outdone. I just hope you don't go into the women's restroom, especially not with Ginny. Percy said sternly, clearly displeased with Ron's disrespectful attitude. Last time, he caught Ron wandering around the third-floor restroom. Ron retorted, his face flushed. What does this have to do with you? Besides, I don't think there's anything wrong with Ginny going to the women's restroom. This left Percy speechless. A dozen minutes later, in a cubicle in Myrtle's washroom, Cyrus saw the compound potion for the first time. It looks disgusting. It's not fully formed yet. The two-horned horn and the skin of the black African tree snake can only be stolen from Snape's office. Hermione said as she stirred the thick, greenish stuff which looked like shredded leaves mixed with black mud and tossed the two-eared grass into the cauldron. And we also need some hair or nails from a Slytherin student, which is easy to obtain. A short while later, Harry, whose bones had been healing all night, emerged from the school hospital. He wandered around for a while before finally remembering the restrooms when he ran into Percy, so he rushed over immediately. He wasn't surprised to see Ginny there. After all, he was the one who let slip the secret yesterday. So he couldn't wait to tell the story of what happened last night. Colin was petrified. He came to see me, Harry said, his face full of guilt. We already know, Hermione said. They had just met Professor McGonagall on their way here, and she had heard Professor Flitwick talking about it. Although Ron didn't particularly like Colin, he couldn't help feeling angry at this moment. We'd better get Malfoy to confess as soon as possible. He's been sullen ever since the Quidditch match, and he's taking it out on Colin. After a brief moment of anger, they rallied. After all, Colin could still be saved. Oh, and there's one more thing, Harry said, repeating Dobby's story. This further convinced them that Malfoy was the murderer. Lucius Malfoy must have opened the secret chamber when he was in school here, and now he's teaching dear Draco to do the same. It's quite obvious. But I really hope Dobby told you what kind of monster was locked inside. I just don't understand how it could sneak around the school without anyone noticing. Maybe it can make itself invisible, Hermione said, poking some leeches into the bottom of the cauldron. Or it can disguise itself, turn into armor or something. I've read about chameleon ghouls in books. Seeing this, Cyrus also lent a hand, pouring some dead grasshoppers onto the leeches. Then Harry went on to tell Dobby about how he had harmed him. So Dobby wouldn't let us on the train and broke your arm. Ron shook his head. You know what, Harry? If he had kept trying to save you, he would have killed you. First Lockhart, then Dobby. You're really having a run of bad luck, Cyrus said. Chapter 27 Invisibility Cloak. News of Colin Creeve's attack and his current hospital state only broke on Monday morning. As a result, all the young wizards in the school suddenly felt insecure and dared not act alone. During this time, everyone secretly exchanged amulets, talismans, and other protective items, keeping it a secret from the teachers. This practice quickly became popular throughout the school, and Neville Longbottom bought a stinking green onion, a sharp amethyst, and a rotting newt tail. As a result, the common room always had a lingering stench, which even Cyrus couldn't stand. Navi, you don't need these things. You're a pureblood, you won't be attacked. Cyrus fanned his nose, trying to let in some fresh air. But he attacked Filch first, as everyone knows. I was practically a dud, he said fearfully. Page 17. Cyrus couldn't stand the smell, so he simply returned his body to Ginny and went back to studying alchemy and spells in his diary. Well, hello, Mr. Riddle, is the Quidditch match over? Ginny asked sleepily. Upon hearing Ginny's question, Cyrus realized that he hadn't returned his body to Ginny these past few days. Fortunately, he had memorized all the scenes from the Quidditch match. Although his mind had wandered for a while, his eyes hadn't missed any details. It's been 2 days since it ended, Ginny. Today is Monday, Cyrus said seriously. It's Monday already. Ginny was taken aback, not expecting Mr. Riddle to use her body for so long this time. Has something happened, Mr. Riddle? Colin Creevey has been attacked. Cyrus tried to make his expression more serious. Colin. Ginny's eyes widened, looking extremely uneasy. She sat next to Colin Creevey in Charm's class, and the two were fairly good friends who could talk to each other. But now, Colin had been attacked. Yes, it's all my fault. When the cat was killed before, I thought it was a prank and didn't pay much attention. Besides, it was my suggestion that he sneak off to see Harry at night. If it weren't for that, he probably wouldn't have been killed, Cyrus said in a tone of utter responsibility. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened again. I want to find out who the murderer is, so I plan to infiltrate Slytherin with Harry and the others to see if we can find any clues. This isn't your fault, Mr. Riddle, Ginny exclaimed forcefully. Who knows how insane that Slytherin heir is? Even if it's not Colin, it will be someone else. His goal is to eliminate Muggles. He also told Ginny about the compound drug to prevent the truth from being revealed. I'm sorry, Ginny, I might have to borrow your body quite often during this period. It's all right, Mr. Riddle. I just wish we could find a successor to Slytherin sooner, Ginny said, shaking her head. Ginny completely understood Mr. Riddle's remorse at that moment, so she agreed to Cyrus's request without hesitation. Besides, she had almost forgotten about Quidditch. As a result, Ginny's conscious time decreased even further during the following period. In December, it began to snow heavily at Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall brought over a large stack of forms for those who planned to stay on campus to fill out applications. Malfoy is planning to stay at school for Christmas. Harry exclaimed in surprise. This is highly suspicious. But the Polyjuice potion isn't ready yet, Hermione said urgently. We have to steal it during potions class this Thursday, or we'll be too late. We'd better use a feint. Harry and Ron both looked grim. Instead of stealing potions, Harry preferred to confront Voldemort. He'll steal it, Cyrus volunteered. You guys create some chaos in class, and he'll sneak in. What? No, I can't let you get fired. Ron said defiantly. I'll go instead. Hermione quickly refused. I can go, because I have no criminal record. It would be hard for Snape not to notice that there's one less student in the class, wouldn't it? Cyrus countered. But Snape's office is right at the back of the classroom. How could you possibly sneak in during class? There's a way. Cyrus looked at Harry, who was determined to go to Snape's office, to borrow your invisibility cloak. I'd completely forgotten I had the invisibility cloak, Harry said with a start. He would just leave the invisibility cloak lying around after using it, as if it were a tattered trench coat rather than some Deathly Hallows artifact. That night, Cyrus obtained Harry's invisibility cloak, and he wandered around the castle wearing it. What makes the legendary Deathly Hallows so special? In his view, the magic of this invisibility cloak was no more powerful than a perfect illusion spell, and it was indeed rather unremarkable compared to the invincible Elder Wand and the Resurrection Stone that could revive the dead. If you can't escape Moody's demonic eye, how can you escape the eyes of death? Or perhaps, the legend is just a legend. Just as Dumbledore said, the three Peveril brothers were simply very powerful and dangerous wizards who successfully created these incredibly powerful artifacts. The story of the Deathly Hallows is just a kind of legend surrounding these inventions. This possibility is indeed more likely. Since Nicholas Flamel could create the Philosopher's Stone, which could turn stones into gold and grant immortality, it wouldn't be so hard to accept that the three brothers could create the Resurrection Stone, which could bring people back to life. The Elder Wand's power and its curse seem to be closely related. But regardless of whether the legend of the Deathly Hallows is true or false, the three artifacts do indeed have their own unique characteristics. Cyrus rubbed his cold cloak and slowly made his way to the 8th floor. I need a room where I can study magical artifacts. I need a room where I can study magical artifacts. I need a room where I can study magical artifacts. As he murmured those words to himself and turned around for the third time beneath the monstrous image, a door appeared on the blank wall. Cyrus removed his cloak, pushed open the door, and went inside. The door vanished instantly. This is a room somewhat similar to, but not exactly the same as, a potions classroom. Besides various cauldrons, there are many mechanical objects, or rather, objects that look like machines. In reality, they are all products of alchemy. In the magical world, alchemy and potions are not completely independent, but rather intersecting. Chapter 28 Refining failed. The initial goal of alchemy was to transform base metals into precious metals, especially gold. Later, different researches were developed, such as creating panaceas, finding the Philosopher's Stone, and creating homunculus. To this day, only Nicholas Flamel has achieved the goals of turning lead into gold and achieving immortality in this field. However, in its development, various magical props have appeared, such as the pensieve, the time converter, and the vanishing cabinet. Although these tools are completely unrelated to the three ultimate goals of alchemy, they still have very magical effects. Cyrus used a spell to unfold the invisibility cloak. He had been carefully reading many alchemy books these past few days, so it wasn't difficult to discover the unusual features of this cloak. First of all, the material was completely different from that of ordinary cloaks. Ordinary invisibility cloaks are made from the fur of invisibility beasts, which are silver and resemble ape-like magical creatures, but the cloak in Cyrus's hand felt much colder to the touch. The invisible beast is the only magical creature that can become invisible. Its power is represented by 0 in runes. If this cloak is not made of invisible beast fur, then what is it made of? Cyrus raised his wand, the tip of which emitted a faint glow that shone on the transparent cloak, instantly revealing its texture. The texture contains countless runes. Cyrus clearly saw Tuaz and Algiz, the former meaning immortality and the latter signifying protection. In ancient times, runes were commonly used on alchemical artifacts. These runes possessed immense magical power, though it could not be released through incantations. Inscribing them on magical artifacts, however, allowed their power to be unleashed even more effectively. However, another problem is that runes are obscure and difficult to understand. This cannot be simply summarized as a foreign language. In fact, even if most people understand the meaning of the text, they may not be able to resonate with it or bring out its magic. Nowadays, runic writing has become a discipline similar to translation, seemingly having no other use besides archaeology. There is indeed a powerful illusion spell hidden inside this cloak. The powerful spell and the immortal material, perhaps it is this combination that makes the magic of this cloak never disappear. Cyrus guessed that the Elder Wand's effect was similar. The Elder Wand is made of elderwood and thistral hair. Elderwood is rare, but it can be found if you really want to. However, despite Grigorovich's constant attempts to imitate the Elder Wand, he has never been able to create a wand that can rival it. Cyrus speculated that the secret to the Elder Wand's power might lie in its curse itself. Both Dumbledore and Harry believe that the Elder Wand's power would be destroyed once its original wielder died of natural causes. This was because the curse on the wand would be broken, and thus, the legendary wand would become just like any other ordinary wand. Then, Cyrus lowered his cloak. He couldn't possess the cloak for long. It was impossible to fully unravel its mysteries in just a few days. Researching how to create the Philosopher's Stone was far more important. Opening Nico's handbook, skipping over the dreams and revelations, Cyrus came across this passage. The Philosopher's Stone is the oldest, most mysterious, and most unknown of all things. In its nature, it is the most incomprehensible, yet also a blessing and a sacred gift from heaven. It is the mystery within mysteries. It is the power of morality and divinity, the limit and purpose of all things under heaven, the ultimate and inconceivable result of the actions of all sages. It is the perfect essence of all elements, an indestructible object that no element can harm or destroy. It is the fifth element. It is Mercury, a dual and living entity possessing its own spirit, capable of handling all imperfect and unstable metals. It is eternal radiance, a panacea for all diseases, the phoenix bestowing glory upon heaven, the most precious treasure of all riches, and a vital asset of all nature. The materials for crafting the Philosopher's Stone are mercury, sulfur, salt. It must be crafted using the 4 elements heat, cold, dryness, and moisture to break down the internal and external elements of the substance. Cyrus poured mercury into the crucible and then lit a fire. Flame represents heat and dryness, water represents cold and dampness. As he stirred the crucible, his magic flowed into the mercury. Then he poured in sulfur, salt blocks, and soil. Soil is hot and humid. The contents of the crucible began to boil, and the color gradually turned crimson. The magic stone described in the records was indeed crimson, but this lump was difficult to form. The flames burned continuously, the water in the crucible was boiled, and the cold and dampness were driven away, until finally, only a tiny bit of crimson powder remained in the crucible. Cyrus picked them up with his fingers but couldn't sense any life in them. Failed. He wasn't discouraged and continued to peruse Nicholas Flamel's notes, but even Nicholas Flamel himself didn't understand how he had succeeded. For centuries, he had tried to replicate that miracle, but he had never succeeded a second time. The recipe for the Philosopher's Stone can't be that simple, and Nico's manuscript probably won't be of much help, Cyrus thought. There must have been some unforeseen accident or coincidence during Nicholas Flamel's creation of the Philosopher's Stone, a coincidence that he himself was unaware of. In the magical world, sometimes even a breeze or a ray of sunlight can affect the outcome of alchemy or potion making. Sometimes, even sound is a crucial factor. For example, when practicing animagus, one needs dew that cannot see the sun, or the first thunderclap in a storm as inspiration. Cyrus felt a sense of urgency. He could indeed resurrect Ginny without using the Philosopher's Stone, but that would require absorbing all of Ginny's life force, which would inevitably kill her. However, he had already considered Ginny his friend, and he couldn't bring himself to harm her for his own resurrection. If all else fails, I'll have to absorb some life force before leaving. If he fails to forge the Philosopher's Stone by the end of the school year, he will have to leave Hogwarts in the same state as in the movies. Page 18. No, it might even be worse than the original story. In the original story, Ginny's condition was far too dangerous. She was practically on the verge of death. Perhaps I need to find a new host. Cyrus put away the crucible. Chapter 29: Stealing Potion Ingredients. On Thursday, Cyrus finally got to attend Harry's potions class. The potions classroom was dimly lit. It was located underground, and Snape would always close all the windows tightly whenever he came in. If it weren't for the torches in the classroom, you might not have been able to see anything at all. However, this cannot be blamed on Snape's dark side, although it is true most potions cannot withstand strong light, as strong light usually causes potions to fail. Cyrus, wearing an invisibility cloak, slowly followed behind Harry, walking in with the crowd. As Harry walked through the dense array of tables to his own cauldron, Cyrus continued onward, until he reached the corner of the podium, where a wooden door led to Snape's office. Snape walked with a brisk pace, his wizarding robes billowing like the wings of a giant bat. He entered the classroom, first scanning all the students with a sharp gaze, then lingering on Harry for a few seconds before letting out a mocking laugh and speaking. "Today we're going to concoct a swelling potion. I hope each of you has a sound mind to understand the steps in the textbook. The potion can't be too concentrated or too diluted, otherwise," he smiled coldly, his gaze lingering on the young Gryffindor wizards, especially Neville, Seamus, and Harry, "otherwise, if something goes wrong, whether I give you the anti-swelling potion or not will depend on my willingness." Harry's potion-making talent wasn't actually that bad, but the problem was that Neville and Seamus were right at the table to his right. With these two brilliant minds working together, every potions class, barring any mishap, would be newsworthy. Moreover, Neville's flustered state would inevitably affect Harry, and even if it didn't, Snape could still deduct points from Harry based on Neville's poor performance. "You're sitting so close together, why aren't you helping Neville? They show absolutely no unity or friendship. Gryffindor loses 10 points. You dare help Neville? Do you think your potion-making skills are that great? Gryffindor minus 10 points deducted." Snape's words drew much discontent. It was practically a direct statement that Gryffindor would not be healed, but no one dared to say anything. Only the Slytherin slugs, sensing the headmaster's favoritism, chuckled softly. Finally, Snape himself broke his silence. "Now, why aren't you starting?" Neville immediately started frantically operating the machine. "What should I add first?" His round face turned bright red, and his hands holding the materials trembled incessantly. "You should have ground the herbs into powder first, it says so in the book," Harry said in a low voice. But he immediately regretted it. If he hadn't spoken up, it might have been easier to cause a commotion. Snape immediately spoke sternly, though whispering. Then he walked over to Neville's table. Neville, who was already flustered and nervous, had his mind completely blank. Cyrus even wondered if he had forgotten what the English words herbs and crushed into powder meant. Now that Snape was picking a fight with Neville, Cyrus simply picked up his wand and fired a burst of fire into Crabbe's cauldron. Then Crabbe's potion exploded, spraying the entire class with its contents. Everyone screamed as they were hit by the splattering swelling potion. Malfoy was drenched in the face, his nose swelling up like a balloon. Crabbe, clutching his eyes, stumbled around, his eyes swollen to the size of his lunch plate. The classroom erupted into chaos, filled with pitiful screams. Snape roared, "Quiet, quiet." Cyrus almost thought he had been exposed. Looking up, he noticed Snape's malevolent gaze fixed on Harry and his group, clearly suspicious of them. Reassured, he walked towards Snape's office, casually plucking a few strands of hair from Malfoy's head as he passed. Malfoy screamed even more piercingly. "Students who got splashed with the medicine, come to me for some anti-swelling medication. I'll find out who did it." Cyrus didn't hear what happened next. He had already slipped into Snape's office. The horn of a two-horned beast, the skin of an African tree snake. He raised his wand, and the tip of the wand lit up. In the dim light, a whole wall of bottles and jars appeared before Cyrus' eyes. Snape really has a lot of good stuff. Cyrus didn't stand on ceremony, bringing out everything else he could find besides the two materials. Most of them were materials that could replenish a person's life energy. He wasn't worried at all about being discovered by Snape. Even if he did, what difference would it make? Not knowing who the real thief was, he could only report to Dumbledore. But Dumbledore already knew that that a spectre of Voldemort was causing trouble. Although he hadn't yet figured out whether it was Voldemort himself, his Horcruxes, or just an evil spell or tool that was controlling everything. Regardless, he chose to observe and instead chose to confront the seemingly fated enemy that Voldemort himself had personally selected. Since a miracle had occurred 11 years ago, and Harry Potter had defeated Voldemort last semester, no matter how weak Voldemort was at the time, it was impossible for a first-year wizard to defeat him. Yet, the result was Quirrell's death. Given this, Dumbledore believed that this time, Harry Potter might be able to thwart Voldemort's plot once again. Moreover, judging from Quirrell's miserable state last semester, Tom Riddle's possession alone consumes a person's life force. If he doesn't replenish his energy, Ginny Weasley's life will be in danger. Although Dumbledore wasn't in a hurry to stop himself, he also didn't want to see an innocent young wizard die. Cyrus took advantage of this to dare to take Snape's potion so brazenly. When he put away the potion and quietly slipped out of the office, Snape had already applied anti-swelling potion to all the students who had been injured by the swelling potion. At this moment, he was standing in front of Crabbe's cauldron, deep in thought. Humph, a mere flicker of fire. His gloomy gaze swept over all the young wizards, finally settling on Harry and the others. "A clever little trick. Using magic was your downfall. Harry Poot, why don't you take out your wand and let me check what spells you've cast?" Chapter 30 is not there. Snape's irritating gaze seemed to see right through Harry, which made Harry feel extremely disgusted. Asking for a magic wand? It seems Snape is planning to use the pre-flashback charm to see what magic Harry used. Cyrus thought about it, then laughed again. A good idea, but unfortunately you've chosen the wrong target, Snape. Cyrus walked out wearing his cloak, just as Snape snatched Harry's wand and cast the flashback charm. A spell's shadow shot out from the tip of the holly wand. It wasn't a red flame, but an expansion spell. Sir, this is the spell that Professor Flitwick taught us in the last class. Harry stubbornly met Snape's gaze. Snape silently stared at his green eyes behind his glasses, miraculously refraining from pursuing the matter further. Instead, he changed the subject. Is that so? It seems our Mr. Potter thinks that having the inflation charm eliminates the need to learn how to concoct an inflation potion. I didn't, sir. No, then why is your potion so diluted? Snape found a fault. Gryffindor, deduct 10 points. Gryffindor deducts 10 points. Harry dramatically mimicked Snape's gesture of deducting points from his grades in the bathroom. I don't know if Ginny saw it, but he was obviously just picking a fight on purpose. Not really, your potion was definitely too diluted, Hermione said matter-of-factly. But I didn't expect there to be such a spell, a flashback spell. We almost got exposed. Thankfully it was Ginny who stole the potion. The strange thing is, Snape seemed to have completely forgotten about it afterward, and didn't mention it at all during the second half of the class, Ron said curiously. And Harry, could you please stop staring at Snape so recklessly in the future? I'm always afraid you two will start fighting. Or kiss her. This was the half-sentence that Ron didn't say aloud. Wait, Ron, what did you just say? Cyrus's mind went blank, as if pricked by a needle. Harry was staring at Snape the whole time. That's right, so what? Harry said dismissively. He can deduct points from my score, but I'm not going to back down. Let him deduct points if he wants. I don't want him to think him a coward, that will only make him happier. You're wrong, Harry. If you don't make eye contact with him, Snape will definitely find a place to secretly drop the little pearl, Cyrus said jokingly. But that's not actually the point is the eye contact. Everyone knows that Snape was a master of occlumency. Even Voldemort could hardly see through his occlumency unless Voldemort picked up his wand and was determined to find out Snape's thoughts, in which case Snape would probably become an idiot, and occlumency was actually created to prevent legilimency. A master of occlumency would also be quite adept at mind control and thought manipulation. When Harry and Snape locked eyes, Snape probably already knew all their secrets. As for the flashback curse and that nasty attitude, it was all just Snape acting. He simply didn't want anyone to know, or rather, he didn't want to admit, that he was protecting James Potter's son. What annoyed Cyrus was that Snape probably already knew Ginny was involved. He now had another informant to watch out for while he was at Hogwarts. However, this was somewhat unavoidable, since he hadn't grown up in the wizarding world and wasn't particularly sensitive to magic. Cyrus was feeling a bit annoyed and just hoped nothing unexpected would happen. Steam rose continuously from the cramped toilet stall, and the viscous potion bubbled and gurgled, like a lump of scalding mud. Hermione painstakingly processed the potion ingredients, pouring in the powdered snakeskin and a small piece of horn. That should be it, probably in a little over a week. Let's go out first, my neck is almost stiff. I really don't know why you two are still crammed in here when you're not helping at all. She complained. Meanwhile, Snape silently returned to his classroom. A two-horned beast's horn and an African tree snake's skin intending to refine a compound potion? If you can actually make it, I'll have to praise you a few times. The corner of his mouth curled up slightly, a fleeting smile that looked like a twitch in his cheek. It's a pity Harry didn't inherit Lily's potion-making talent. Unsurprisingly, the Polyjuice potion will likely be brewed by that know-it-all. Harry and Ron aren't qualified to assist her. The first-year student, Ginny Weasley, though, does have some talent. However, Snape disapproved of Hermione's rigid and dogmatic ways. Lack of creativity. Hermione's potion skills were indeed far inferior to Snape's, as evidenced by the Half-Blood Prince episode. After Harry obtained Snape's old notebook, he immediately stole the spotlight from Hermione in potions class, becoming number 1. Perhaps they are both perfect scores, but Hermione gets a perfect score because her skill level is perfect, while Snape gets a perfect score because his maximum score is only 100. Page 19. He didn't intend to pursue the matter of Harry and his friends stealing potions to brew the Polyjuice potion. Now that Dumbledore had personally admitted the Chamber of Secrets had been opened, letting these kids run wild wasn't such a bad thing, except, how dare she steal my dragon blood? That cost 17 sieverts for an ounce. Snape gritted his teeth as he stared at a huge container on the wall cabinet. The crimson liquid inside had dwindled to a mere drop, meaning that at least 6 pints of dragon blood had been stolen by the thief. He lost 120 galleons just from the dragon blood. But what he stole wasn't just dragon blood. 3 drops of Phoenix Tears. I had to beg and plead with Dumbledore for them. All the venom of the rune snakes. I'm not so upset about that. After all, I have a whole nest of snakes that I can extract venom from at any time. But how dare you take my snakes with you? Snape felt as if his chest was about to explode. The boxes where he used to raise snakes were now empty, and even the few snake eggs that had just been bred had been taken away by Cyrus. A tuft of chimera mane. Snape pinched his philtrum to keep himself from fainting. As a creature classified as XXXXX dangerous, the Chimera has only been recorded as being killed by a wizard once, making magical materials from this magical beast extremely difficult to obtain and practically priceless. Then, he meticulously listed out each of the stolen materials. Till the end. A whole bottle of morning dew, that's cheap, you can collect it anywhere, he said, his chest heaving violently as if he had gone mad, but he laughed, his voice sounding like he was biting a piece of iron. But for this bottle of morning dew, I bent over and collected it leaf by leaf in the forbidden forest, almost breaking my spine. Snape fainted. I have a feeling Snape won't let this go easily. I just hope he doesn't find out we stole his things. By the way, you didn't take any extra, did you? Ron looked at Cyrus warily. Cyrus pulled a few snake eggs from his sleeve, roasted them on his wand, and then tilted his head in thought for a moment. No. Never mind all that, I'll treat you to roasted eggs. Ron cracked one open without hesitation, and the aroma of snake eggs immediately wafted out. Fragrant. Why do I have to go to work on Mondays? Chapter 31 Lockhart, what could a lousy potion maker possibly have? As soon as Snape woke up, he rushed to Dumbledore's office. Now, he can't get those magical materials back because he has no evidence. The Ministry of Magic has never considered legilimency as evidence because memories can be altered. But the loss of over 1,000 galleons still needs to find someone to compensate him. He absolutely cannot be the one to suffer this humiliation. When Snape arrived at the headmaster's office in a rage, he discovered that another annoying peacock was also there. Please wait a moment, Severus, Dumbledore said quietly. Good afternoon, Snape. Lockhart flashed what he thought was a charming smile, which immediately annoyed Snape even more. What brings you here? Did you find out that I'm planning to apply to the headmaster to start a dueling club, so you came here to be my assistant? Duel club? Lockhart's words briefly pulled Snape out of his rage, followed by a disdainful look, as if to say, you. But Lockhart was completely unaware. He probably thinks he's the perfect candidate. Dumbledore, the situation is very serious. People have been hurt. I think it is absolutely necessary to establish a dueling club and train everyone thoroughly in case they need to defend themselves one day. To use the methods I have used countless times to protect themselves, and I am also a member of the Defense Against the Dark Arts, so I don't think anyone is more suitable than me. He looked intently at Dumbledore, hoping to receive a positive response from him. Dumbledore agreed in a very short time. This greatly excited Lockhart. Believe me, you'll be so glad you made this decision. He had a "you've hit the jackpot" look on his face. Although I agreed to teach this course, the club doesn't count. This is just a small contribution I'm making to my alma mater, and it doesn't happen every time. Thank you so much, Dumbledore said with amusement. Now, let me think about your assistant. How about Felius? He was a dueling champion in his youth. Dumbledore strongly recommended him. Lockhart's face changed immediately upon hearing the words, duel champion, and he paced anxiously back and forth in his office. However, he quickly came up with a suitable excuse. Filius, while he was indeed very powerful when he was young, I doubt he can keep up with me now. To be honest, if wizard duels hadn't been cancelled in Britain, I might be the champion now. Upon hearing this, even Snape found it utterly ridiculous. Lockhart's gaze then shifted to Snape. He recalled Snape's behavior during his school days. It seemed he was often bullied by several Gryffindors. They were 4 years apart, and Lockhart wasn't entirely clear on Snape's school days. However, he vaguely remembered a student in Slytherin who disliked washing his hair and was often bullied by a few Gryffindors. If that's the case, then he must not be very capable. That's true. What skills could a grumpy potion maker possibly have? You can't use that dry frying technique in a duel. Thinking of this, Lockhart's eyes lit up, and he immediately used a reverse psychology tactic. Professor Snape, you are one of Thema. Never mind, I'm afraid my powerful magic might hurt you. I'd better think of someone else. You hurt me, because of the lack of thought. Snape was so angry he laughed, and his gaze toward Lockhart became extremely hostile. Coincidentally, I also know a little about duels. That's wonderful. Lockhart, fearing Snape would refuse, rushed forward and slapped Snape's shoulders hard. That's settled then, Dumbledore. Snape will be my assistant. Don't worry, I won't let the children's potions professor get hurt. Snape disgustedly brushed his hand off his shoulder, then ruthlessly rubbed the back of his hand against his cloak. Since you've reached an agreement, that's wonderful, Dumbledore said happily, preparing to see his guest out. So, Severus, what brings you here? Snape was reignited in his anger by Dumbledore's words, and he blurted it out before Lockhart even left the headmaster's office. I'm here to report a few petty thieves. They stole my potion ingredients. A thief? Lockhart, who had almost stepped out of the principal's office, immediately turned around and strode over. It seems my dueling assistant has run into a little trouble. But catching thieves is no joke. If you've read my books, you'll know I've done it countless times. Finding clues and catching the culprit is never a problem for me. He turned around enthusiastically, determined to take on the task himself. Leave it to me. I can catch the murderer as early as tomorrow. But Snape and Dumbledore ignored him. They communicated through eye contact. The school board will compensate you for your losses, Dumbledore said. Also, note, I'll keep an eye on her even without you telling me. Snape tossed his cloak aside, turned and left. What's wrong? Lockhart was still wondering why Snape had suddenly left when he hadn't come seeking help. Not wanting to miss any opportunity to show off, he quickly followed and started chattering in Snape's ear. Seriously, Snape, if I were in charge, I could definitely catch the culprit red-handed. I'm only helping you for free because we're colleagues, otherwise it would be a different price. Come on, take me to your office, I have an automatic tracking spell that can find the murderer instantly. Snape, recalling his ability to make Harry's hand bones disappear and then heal in reverse, immediately shuddered, fearing that his spell might destroy all of his other potions. And the thought of Harry's hand bones being removed made him even angrier. I've been protecting that kid without any shame, and this guy actually dared to hurt Lily's son? You're finished, kid. The Duel Club I'd be happy to be your assistant. Snape laughed cruelly. Translation, just wait to die. But Lockhart was already lost in his own dazzling illusion. Alright then. We'll have one before Christmas. I might need you to help me with a little demonstration. Don't worry, it won't hurt you. We won't use any high-damage magic, just defensive spells to disarm you and protect you from armor. Okay, that's a bit difficult. How about a disarming spell? Thank you to reader 1338459675374563328 for the 500-point reward. Thank you so much, boss. Also, please, my darlings, keep reading. It's really important to me, sob sob. Chapter 32 Snape, you better be. Cyrus felt he was being targeted. Ever since he stole Snape's tiny collection of treasures, Snape has had his eye on him. When he wandered around the school, the man would suddenly appear from time to time, his gloomy eyes scrutinizing him without restraint, as if he were interrogating a heinous criminal. Cyrus guessed that he was probably trying to use legilimency, but it had no effect on him. As for class time, it goes without saying that Snape practically had "I don't like you" written all over his face. Miss Weasley, could you please tell me what the different uses of dragon's blood are? During the last potions class before Christmas, Snape very deliberately called on Cyrus and asked him a question that pained him deeply. 12, sir. Cyrus stood up. He almost thought Snape was going to ask him, what do you get when you add narcissus root powder to wormwood infusion? Turns out, it was just about the uses of dragon's blood. But it was definitely something from the first-year textbook. The 12 uses of dragon blood were discovered and summarized by Headmaster Dumbledore. Dragon blood has hemostatic, analgesic, and therapeutic properties. It can be used to make various cleaning agents, spot-removing agents, and to treat warts. You're right, he was clearly very unhappy. Then, why don't you tell me again about the effects of the Phoenix Tears? But sir, we don't learn from the Phoenix, Cyrus retorted without backing down. But I think you might need to know about the uses of Phoenix Tears, Venom of the Nevin, Mane of the Chimera, so that you don't know what will save your life if you're poisoned, don't you think? He was practically stating that he already knew that you Ginny Weasley were that despicable thief. But Cyrus remained unmoved and even expressed his gratitude. Thank you for your concern, sir. If I were to actually obtain so many expensive medicinal herbs, I would certainly remember your advice today. Snape was even angrier. Now, tell me, what can morning dew be used for? Page 20. Who knows? Maybe it's for practicing on the animagus. Cyrus shrugged. Clearly, this was a very perfunctory answer, because Cyrus couldn't possibly have a pupa of the ghost-faced moth. Moreover, it wasn't even his own body. You better be, Snape said angrily. For almost the entire lesson, Cyrus faced Snape's provocations, but he managed to overcome them all. In the end, Snape deducted 5 points from Gryffindor's grade, citing that Cyrus hadn't even said get out of class was over yet and he was already restless in his seat. He doesn't like you. Luna's unique voice, as if her soul had been ripped out, came through. Cyrus turned his head and saw a girl with bulging eyes and strange attire. Obviously, Cyrus said. How could he possibly beg for the affections of a middle-aged teacher he had recently persecuted? Besides, it was common knowledge that Snape's only love interest was Lily. You look strange, but much better than before. Luna tossed her hair lightly and skipped away like an elf. Cyrus was amazed by the other's incredible intuition. He parted ways with his Ravenclaw classmates on the 8th floor, and as he walked through the lobby, he found a large crowd gathered at the notice board in the common room. What's going on here? They want to start a dueling club. Tonight is the first gathering. Fred and George, the two good older brothers, specifically stepped forward to explain to their sister, Ginny. I have a plan, Fred said excitedly, putting his arm around his sister's shoulder more enthusiastically than ever before. Remember the last time you cast a spell on Marcus at the stadium? What? Are you worried he'll retaliate against me? If he had any shame, he wouldn't have done that, Fred said. But whether he'll send other second- or third-year Slytherin students to deal with you is another question. But we both think you shouldn't be afraid, right? George and Fred looked at him with affirmation. Of course I'm not afraid. He can send Snape himself if he wants. Cyrus didn't take it to heart at all. That's right. If you were this confident in front of Harry, he would definitely fall in love with you. Cyrus just rolled his eyes, but neither of the brothers took it to heart. Fred continued, we see this as an opportunity. The Slytherin team has been giving us trouble these days. It's rare to have a chance for a fair fight. So what? What do you want me to do? Find the lower-year students in Slytherin. It would be even better if it were Draco Malfoy. George added. Don't forget his dad gave us a hard time during the summer. Give them a good beating. The two said in unison, their voices firm and resolute. If they're planning to cause trouble, then of course he'll do it. Cyrus nodded. Having probably heard their commotion, Percy emerged from the crowd, shielding Cyrus behind him like a thief, and looked warily at Fred and George. What are you two talking about with Ginny? It's nothing. The twins exchanged a glance, their lips curving upwards. We're just feeling sorry for the Slytherin students who are in trouble. Whatever you're up to, I advise you not to lead Ginny astray, Percy warned. Or he'll tell Mom. With that, Percy dragged Cyrus away from the two troublemakers. Fred and George exchanged bewildered glances, then simultaneously put on exaggerated, comical, and deeply hurt expressions. Good heavens. He actually thinks we're the ones who corrupt Ginny. Ginny doesn't need us to lead her astray. George chimed in. The implication is that Ginny is a genius in herself. She dared to cast a spell on a 7th grader in her first year. Who else could do that? Another implication is that they weren't the ones who corrupted Ginny, someone else was. They had already noticed that Ginny had been frequently sharing the toilets with Harry and the others lately. For people together it's not just exciting, it's downright thrilling. Ignore them, Percy said, patting Cyrus on the shoulder. You're different from them, Ginny. His tone was filled with immense anticipation. Almost all the professors have praised you, saying you've done exceptionally well. Hermione also told me you're very studious. That's a good thing, Percy said. He automatically ignored Snape, because Snape never praised anyone, let alone Gryffindor. If things continue like this, you can become a prefect in 5th grade, just like me, get all the OWL certificates, and after 7th grade, we can strive to become student council president, and then after graduation, enter the Ministry of Magic and seek a good position, Percy said excitedly. The position of student council president at Hogwarts carries considerable weight. As the only magic school in Britain, Percy became Barty Crouch's assistant almost immediately after graduation. While other factors played a role, there was no doubt that if you were aiming for a promising job at the Ministry of Magic, being the student council president would pave a smooth path for you. Perhaps you think all of this is too far off, but I think you should start planning early. First, I suggest you take all elective subjects in your 3rd year. I can't go into the specific reasons, but I hope you can do it. Although it will be a bit tiring, you know, many people actually look down on families like ours. Percy paused, swallowed his words, and then patted Cyrus hard on the back. I shouldn't have said this to you, but anyway, do your best, okay? Don't be like Fred and George, they're not good role models. And don't be like Ron, he's too playful and has no goals, he'll never know what he's doing. My darlings, following a novel closely is really important for your reading experience. Please don't let it sit unfinished for too long, or it'll easily die. Thank you so much, love you all. Chapter 33 Duel Club. At 8 p.m., Cyrus and Harry returned to the Great Hall together. The auditorium had completely transformed. The long dining tables had vanished, replaced by a gilded stage along one wall, illuminated by hundreds of floating candles. The ceiling had once again turned as black as velvet. Almost the entire school had arrived, packed tightly together, each holding their own wand and beaming with excitement. The 4 of them squeezed into the crowd, taking advantage of their small size. Hermione said with difficulty, I wonder who will teach us. I heard that Professor Flitwick was a dueling champion when he was young. Maybe it will be him. Whoever it is, as long as it's not Harry hadn't finished speaking when he saw 2 people he least wanted to see walk onto the stage. One was the radiant Lockhart in his crimson robes, and the other was Snape with a somber expression. Snape was a stark contrast to Lockhart, who wore his ever-present black robes. Harry's unfinished words turned into a mournful groan. Hermione was quite pleased. She still believed Lockhart was just as great as he was described in his books. As for his foolish behavior, it was all overlooked under Lockhart's dazzling appearance. It's hard to imagine Hermione acting so irrationally. Lockhart alone has completely captivated her. Indeed, even in the wizarding world, good looks are a power comparable to a potion. Otherwise, Tom Riddle wouldn't have been so successful. He's just a scumbag who uses his good looks to deceive young girls, rich women, married men, and so on. He even fooled female ghosts. Condemn. Must be condemned. What? This is what I look like now. That's fine. Come closer, come closer. Can everyone see me? Can everyone hear me? That's great. Lockhart felt the enthusiastic support of hundreds of female students and became even more excited, putting on a show with all his might. That's right, Professor Dumbledore has allowed me to start this little dueling club to train you all thoroughly in case you need to defend yourselves one day, using the methods I have used countless times. For details, please see my published works. Let me introduce my assistant, Professor Snape, Lockhart said, grinning broadly. He told me he knows a thing or two about dueling, and he generously agreed to give me a little demonstration before class. I told him I didn't want you little rascals to worry after I'm done demonstrating. He'll return your potions teacher to you unharmed, so don't be afraid. Wouldn't it be great if they fought to the death? Ron whispered in Harry's ear. Come on, Lockhart probably couldn't even withstand one move from Snape, Cyrus said, shaking his head. I've heard that Snape is the most powerful of the 4 heads of the house. If he could unleash his dark magic freely, Snape would indeed be more powerful than the other 3 heads of the house. His talent was something even Voldemort admired after all. He was a genius who had developed several types of magic during his school years. Moreover, according to Sirius Black, Snape knew more about curses and evil spells when he was 11 years old than most 7th-year students did. Harry completely agreed with Cyrus's statement because he saw Snape's upper lip curl up, revealing a terrifying look like a cat playfully toying with a mouse, and he didn't understand why Lockhart was still smiling. If Snape had looked at him like that, he would have already turned and run in the opposite direction as fast as he could. It's pathetic that some people are even fooled by their own lies, Cyrus whispered in Harry's ear. Ron looked at him in surprise. Aren't you shy now? Cyrus ignored him. Lockhart and Snape then turned to face each other and bowed. Lockhart made a series of hand gestures, while Snape merely shook his head impatiently. Then, they held their wands like arrows to their chests. The students fell silent, watching the scene with bated breath. They were like a group of onlookers watching 2 masters clash at the Forbidden City, afraid that even the slightest noise would disturb the 2 masters. As you can see, we hold our wands in the usual dueling stance, Lockhart said to the quiet crowd. On the count of 3, we will cast our first spell. Of course, neither of us will take the other's life. I wouldn't dare bet on that. Snape grinned, revealing his teeth. The 2 of them simultaneously raised their wands sharply over their shoulders. 1, 2, 3. Snape uttered the incantation with lightning speed. Accept your weapons. Suddenly, a blinding red light flashed, and Lockhart was knocked off his feet. He flew backward off the stage, crashed into the wall, and then slid down, curling up on the floor. He was almost completely stunned. Didn't we agree that you were just a potion maker? Why is it so strong? Malfoy and several other Slytherin students applauded and cheered. Hermione jumped up and down on tiptoe. Do you think he's all right? She screamed, covering her mouth with her fingers. Who cares? Harry and Ron said at the same time. Lockhart staggered to his feet, his hat falling off, his wavy curls standing on end. Seeing the suspicious looks from the young wizards, Lockhart realized he had to regain control and cover up his embarrassing mistake. So he rushed back to the stage, the lingering power of the spell making him dizzy and unsteady on his feet. Well, everyone sees that. It's a disarming spell, as you can see. I've lost my wanda, thank you, Miss Brown. He turned to Snape. Professor Snape, demonstrating this move to them is a brilliant idea. But please don't take offense, your intention to pull this off was too obvious. If I wanted to stop you, it would have been effortless. I think, to broaden their horizons, we should let them see it. Page 21. He's shameless. Cyrus's lips twitched. He dared to say that even though he was clearly inferior in skill, Snape must be regretting using Expelliarmus instead of Sword of Despair right now. Sure enough, Snape looked menacing. Lockhart probably noticed it too, and quickly said, "That concludes the demonstration. Now I will come to you and divide you into pairs. Professor Snape, if you would like to help me." They moved through the crowd, pairing people up. Lockhart paired Neville and Justin Finley, but Snape went up to Harry and the others first. "I think the dream team should be broken up," he said with a sneer. "Weasley, you could team up with Finnegan. Potter." Harry instinctively moved closer to Hermione. "I don't think so," Snape said, a cold smile on his face. "Malfoy, come here. Let's see what kind of person you can make of the famous Potter. Miss Granger, you can be paired with Miss Burst. As for you, Ginny Weasley." He curled his lips into a wicked smile. Chapter 34. The Golden Bell Falls. Cyrus saw Malfoy strutting over, followed by a burly woman, clearly the Miss Passard Snape had mentioned. He also saw Fred and George hiding in the crowd not far away, waving and cheering him on. Fred even mouthed that he shouldn't forget to teach the Slytherin students a lesson. "As for you, Ginny Weasley, I think there's someone would like to team up with you," Snape sneered. "Flint, your chance has come." He stepped aside, and then a man stronger than a chimpanzee walked out with a cruel smile. The hall fell silent instantly. Fred and George could no longer wave their arms, as if petrified by the basilisk. "He's finally gone mad." Ron couldn't hold back any longer and immediately shouted out his inner thoughts. Snape immediately glared back fiercely, but this time Ron didn't back down at all. Sending a first-year student to fight a sixth-year student, wasn't that insane? Not to mention Marcus Flint had been ambushed by Ginny before. This time he was clearly prepared. "Professor, I think this is completely unreasonable." Percy also stepped forward with a frown, blocking Sirius' path. "I can team up with Flint. He may be a good student, but that doesn't mean he's willing to obey all of a professor's unreasonable demands." "The students are right." Lockhart rubbed his hands together, speaking cautiously. He was hesitant to contradict Snape, but Snape's assignments were simply too outrageous. "We're holding clubs to teach young wizards how to fight back when facing danger, not. I think Flint is capable of playing the role of danger. What do you think?" Snape said with a sneer. "Or is it that Miss Weasley, who is skilled at sneak attacks, looks down on this defeated opponent?" The others wanted to say something, but Cyrus interrupted them. Cyrus nodded. "I think Professor Snape was right about one thing. At least he looks like a very dangerous, brainless troll. It's a shame that Slytherin is now admitting students like this." These words immediately offended a large group of Slytherins, and Malfoy, who was originally going to deal with Harry, wished he could cast a spell on Cyrus right now. The person most annoyed was, of course, Marcus Flint himself. Just you wait and see. He cruelly walked to the side, creating a suitable distance. The other students scattered, and even the young wizards who had already chosen their opponents didn't begin their own duels, instead watching the mismatched contest unfold. The Slytherins, in particular, crossed their arms, ready to watch the spectacle unfold. Snape also looked at Cyrus expectantly, eager to see the real Ginny Weasley. Last year, Dumbledore warned him to keep an eye on Quirrell, but Quirrell ended up as Voldemort's puppet. Who knows what Ginny Weasley really is? How could a first-year wizard possibly resist his legilimency? You shouldn't have agreed. Hermione tugged at Sirius' sleeve, and Ron and Harry were unwilling to leave either. They each held their wands, watching Marcus Flint warily for a possible sneak attack. Why don't we go? There's no requirement to join the club, Hermione suggested. It's nothing, what's there to be afraid of? Cyrus said nonchalantly. We're with you. Ron said, gripping the broken wand with the magic tape stuck to it tightly and taking a deep breath. Don't make things worse, but Harry can stay. Cyrus pushed Ron aside, turned to Harry, and said, you can use that trick Lockhart taught you. What? Harry was stunned. When did Lockhart, that good-for-nothing, ever teach him any secrets? Take your bones off. After saying that, Cyrus pushed Harry aside, drew his wand, and stood in front of Flint. Harry and his two companions wanted to follow, but Snape stopped them with a flick of his sleeve. I think your opponents are on the other side. The group turned to look, and Malfoy grinned maliciously. Let's see how many of your moves are broken. Okay, Lockhart's face was contorted with frustration. Hermione looked at him expectantly, hoping he could stop this farce, but how could he dare to defy Snape now? To your partners. Lockhart called out as he returned to the stage, bow. Cyrus immediately extended his right hand to the side and bowed gracefully, but Flint seemed to have no intention of bowing in return. This made Cyrus unhappy. You should bow. I'm not going to bow to a little kid like you, Marcus said dismissively. Slytherin burst into laughter, clearly pleased with Marcus's actions, which they probably considered an insult to Gryffindor. You disappoint me, Slytherin, so lacking in manners bow etiquette is necessary. Cyrus said, raising his wand-holding arm above his head, wrist down, the tip of the wand pressing down. Marcus, who was still laughing, suddenly felt his spine bend, as if someone had forcefully pressed down on his shoulder. Those who were laughing immediately shut their mouths and looked at Cyrus with trepidation. Even Harry and his friends felt a little frightened. They had probably never seen such a terrifying Ginny Weasley before. Enough. Cyrus bent Marcus's back almost to a 90-degree angle. If Snape hadn't interrupted with his spell, Marcus's face would probably have been pressed against the ground. Lockhart, fearing further complications, quickly shouted before the enraged Marcus could erupt. Raise your wands, get ready. I'll count to 3, then cast a spell to disarm them. Just disarm them, we don't want any accidents. 1, 2, 3. But Marcus made his move as soon as he counted to 2. He unleashed a vicious curse, but Cyrus dismissed it without even looking at it. He didn't give Marcus any more time to react, and mercilessly unleashed a spell. Marcus felt his ankle being pulled by a force, and then his body was instantly flipped over, leaving him suspended from the ornate black velvet ceiling. Everyone in the Great Hall stared in disbelief, and Snape was struck by some unpleasant memories. The golden bell falls to the ground. He pointed his wand, and Marcus immediately collapsed with a thud. Ginny Weasley, how did you know this spell? Finally off work, time to go home and play games. Chapter 35 The Third Battle with Marcus. Snape's eyes were dark and annoyed. Looking at Marcus hanging upside down, he felt as if he were seeing himself. Who taught you this magic, Ginny Weasley? He strode up to Cyrus, his thin frame wrapped in a black wizard's robe, and looked down at Cyrus. The spell Cyrus just used was naturally the upside-down bell spell invented by Snape. After this spell was accidentally revealed, it immediately became popular at Hogwarts, to the point that Snape was eventually humiliated by James Potter using magic he invented. But after all these years, not many people still remember this spell. However, it just so happens that Cyrus knows the spell. Snape initially suspected that Ginny Weasley was possessed by Voldemort like Quirrell, but Voldemort had no interest in such trivial tricks. Bill taught me, Cyrus said immediately. When in doubt, just tell Bill. He's probably in one of the pyramids in Egypt right now, and he only started school about 10 years later than Snape and the others. Back then, the spell might still have been circulating in schools. Bill didn't teach me such a useful spell, Ron said, extremely indignantly. Next time I'm going to write him a letter and give him a piece of my mind. William Arthur Weasley. Snape had naturally heard of this prodigy who had earned 12 OWL certificates. Since Cyrus said so, he had no way of verifying its authenticity and could only give up. Dean, shut up. Snape glared at Flint, that disgraceful wretch. His face was extremely ugly. It was clear that from this day forward, Marcus Flint would become a disgrace to all of Slytherin. Seeing this, Harry immediately became happy. As long as Snape was in trouble, that was enough to make him happy. Snape clearly noticed this and took his anger out on Harry. Looks like some people see someone else win and think they'll be lucky enough to win too. His eyes darted to Harry first, then his expressionless face turned to him. Harry Potter, why don't you go find your own opponent? Just because someone else succeeded by chance, does that mean you can too? Malfoy. Draco glanced at Marcus Flint with disdain, then confidently stepped forward. I'll take you on, Pot. Harry, of course, couldn't possibly refuse to fight. The other students also recovered from the previous battle and began to face their opponents, resulting in immediate chaos. Everyone was casting curses. The duel between Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw was relatively restrained, but the Gryffindors of Slytherin were just adding new grudges to old ones, so how could they possibly show mercy? Fred and George both targeted Slytherin's batter, and Wood was also secretly plotting against them. Some even wanted to take advantage of the chaos to attack Cyrus, hoping to teach this enemy who had disgraced Slytherin a lesson. Cyrus, of course, didn't hold back and hung them all from the roof. More than 10 minutes later, when Lockhart yelled at the students to stop, the ceiling of the auditorium was covered with a long row of figures, which looked like rows of green cured meat hanging from a distance. Snape was trembling all over, whether from the cold or from anger, it was hard to tell. In the end, he said nothing, but cast a wide-range universal dispel spell, releasing Malfoy, who was under the knot charm, Harry, who was under the dancing charm, and the bunch of dried snakes on the roof. Good heavens, Lockhart jumped around in the crowd, watching the aftermath of the duels. You stand up, Macmillan watch out, Miss Fawcett pinch hard, the bleeding will stop immediately, boot. He is filled with regret now, deep regret. His eyes have become unfocused, as if he has lost all hope. Oh no, I was wrong, I was really wrong. I shouldn't have agreed to Dumbledore's offer in the first place. If I hadn't agreed, I wouldn't have had to become the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. If I hadn't become the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, I wouldn't have ended up in such a sad place. If I hadn't ended up in such a sad place, I wouldn't have had to face such a huge bunch of troubles. Page 22. Having finally managed to quell the commotion, Lockhart stood in the center of the great hall, looking flustered. He glanced at Snape, saw a cold glint in Snape's dark eyes, and immediately looked away. I think I'd better teach you how to stop unfriendly magic. Please come up as a pair Longbottom and Finley, how about you two? Although he said it was voluntary, he deliberately chose two students who weren't particularly outstanding. At least that way, even if they caused trouble, he would be able to handle it. That's a bad idea, Professor Lockhart, Snape said, gliding lightly across the stage like a venomous bat. Longbottom can cause destruction with even the simplest spell. In that case, we'll just have to put Fenrir's remains in a matchbox and send them to the hospital. Neville's round face immediately turned red, not because Snape spoke ill of him, but because Snape had completely confused him with Seamus. At that moment, Cyrus felt Snape's gaze sweep over him first, and he immediately raised an eyebrow in response. He wanted to see if Snape dared to send him up to duel Malfoy. Snape's gaze swept over Cyrus and Harry, revealing that he actually hoped Harry would be the one to embarrass himself. However, remembering what Dumbledore had told him not long ago, he fixed his serpentine eyes on Cyrus. How are Ginny Weasley and Marcus Flint? What? Although Lockhart had planned to accept whatever Snape suggested, he was still startled when Snape uttered those two names. I think this is probably inappropriate. I hope you remember that Miss Weasley is probably only a first-year student, Lockhart said, looking troubled. Yes, quite excellent, Snape said, emphasizing each word, but I think we can be a little more lenient with the loser, can't we? He looked at Lockhart, his eyes filled with undisguised murderous intent, which made Lockhart tremble with fear. Very well then, Miss Weasley and Mr. Flint. Lockhart dared not disobey Snape, and quickly pulled Cyrus to his side. All right, Ginny, do this when Draco points his wand at you. He raised his wand and waved it left and right, trying to conjure up some complicated shapes, but accidentally dropped it on the ground. If you can't offer any good advice, then please step aside, sir. Cyrus was annoyed with him and shoved him aside. Ginny will win, right? Ron was very worried. Of course. Didn't you see how well Ginny showed off just now? And the professor even taught him a few moves. Hermione said confidently, tidying her messy hair. She still hadn't figured out Lockhart's true colors. If you mean dropping the wand on the ground, then yes. Ron was very unhappy. Moreover, he realized that Snape was the one with real skills, and perhaps he would teach Flint a powerful spell. It's all right, Ron. We have to trust Ginny. Harry patted Ron's shoulder firmly, still feeling a sense of unreality. For the first time, Snape had actually targeted someone in front of him. Ron's guess was correct. As Marcus Flint approached Snape, the gloomy bat immediately extended its claws and grabbed him, speaking in a half-threatening tone. I'm giving you one more chance, Flint. I don't want to hear any more excuses, Snape said coldly. Conversely, if Ginny Weasley were truly as he suspected, Flint would have no chance of winning. Yes, sir. I'll teach you a spell, Snape whispered in his ear. Marcus Flint swaggered onto the dueling platform. He looked at the petite Ginny standing not far away, feeling a mix of fear from his previous defeats and disdain for a first-year student. But no matter what, his nervousness at this moment was genuine. Slytherin has already made enough of a laughing stock. If he loses again, he'll either transfer schools or just die. It's Thursday already, I'm so looking forward to Friday, sob sob sob. Chapter 36 The Oddball Emerges. Marcus Flint and Cyrus stood together on the high stage. The stage looked a bit like a dining table set up, and Flint, while warily glancing at his opponent, blushed with shame. He, a 6th grade student, was about to fight a young wizard in front of nearly 1,000 eyes. And his opponent seemed so relaxed and at ease, completely disregarding him. He felt humiliated and ashamed, but in reality, apart from the Gryffindor students deliberately stirring things up, none of the other students felt that there was anything wrong with it. Just minutes before, a first-year student named Ginny Weasley had turned more than a dozen Slytherin students into dried snakes and hung them on the ceiling of the Great Hall. "This time I'm going to teach you a lesson," Flynn said, his voice sharp but his heart pounding. He was really not confident, and just watching Cyrus twirling the wand made him sweat a little. "I'm actually hoping you can do better, otherwise Slanterling's level will really disappoint me," Cyrus said nonchalantly. Someone like Flint, whose strength outweighs his intelligence, could be easily taught a lesson by Tom Riddle's first-year charms level. To be honest, he'd be more dangerous charging at him with his fists than with his wand. "Come on, I'll let you have a chance," Cyrus said generously. "You can cast a spell first, or you can launch a sneak attack." His arrogant attitude made Flint grit his teeth, but the Slytherin gorilla did not refuse. He simply gripped his wand tightly and breathed heavily. "Don't be nervous, Marcus. You were just careless before." He kept telling himself this. "She's just a first-year wizard, you can't possibly lose." Lockhart called begin again, but this time Flint didn't make the first move. He kept a wary eye on Cyrus, ready to defend at any moment, afraid that his spell would be knocked away by Cyrus, just like before. "What's wrong? Aren't you going to do anything?" Cyrus found Flint's timid and hesitant manner somewhat laughable. He was like a gorilla, but now he looked more like a turtle with its head tucked in. He took a step forward, and Flint immediately couldn't help but take a step back. This embarrassing sight made the Slytherin wizards want to curse him. "What are you doing, Flint? A shame. Teach her a lesson. You should drop out of school, you piece of trash." Malfoy shouted the loudest. It was as if they weren't the ones who were afraid of Ginny, as if they were the brave ones, and Marcus was the only cowardly loser. Marcus glared at him fiercely, and Malfoy immediately shrank back, not daring to say a word. Now, the gorilla is finally forced to do something. He raised his wand. Sylph was glad he remembered he was a wizard and hurled a stun spell. Cyrus knew it was a stun spell because Marcus had recited the incantation aloud. He hasn't mastered the secrets of silent spells yet. He can only cast those low-level, insidious spells with a little success. Cyrus made no attempt to defend himself. He simply tilted his head slightly to dodge the overly direct attack. A duel is not as simple as just standing there and casting spells. Cyrus even found the battle with Marcus extremely boring. He gave his opponent a few moves, or rather, his intention to counter Marcus's spellcasting was so obvious that Cyrus easily dodged them. This was too easy for him, but the audience below the stage were on tenterhooks. From their perspective, Ginny Weasley for some reason didn't retaliate, but could only dodge Marcus's attacks. Each time, Marcus's spell grazed Ginny's small body and slammed heavily against the wall. "Ginny, fight back!" Ron yelled in fright. "Beat her down, Flint!" The Slytherin wizards retorted. The students from every house were very nervous. 3 of them were worried about Ginny, while the Slytherin students were eagerly waiting for Flint to redeem herself. Even Marcus Flint himself thought he had the upper hand, and he fired out more and more spells, aggressively advancing while attacking, trying to put more pressure on Cyrus. Ginny Weasley, but that's it. He felt confident of victory. Only Snape could see Cyrus's ease and confidence, or rather, ease and confidence was an understatement. She didn't take Flint seriously, Snape thought. His gaze was very gloomy. For a first-year student, who has only attended half a semester, to defeat a 6th-year wizard is already an unbelievable feat. Not to mention the current difference in strength between the two is like heaven and earth. Without a doubt, Ginny Weasley is definitely up to something. "You're making me feel very bored, Mr. Flint." On stage, Cyrus grew tired of this childish battle and flicked his wrist, making a whooshing sound as his wand flew through the air. Flint's powerful spell was shattered by Cyrus right in front of him. The seemingly powerful spell was just a useless puff of smoke in Cyrus's eyes. Marcus was stunned. It was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. His previous indomitable spirit vanished instantly. Now, holding the wand, he felt fear under Cyrus's gaze. Cyrus slowly picked up his wand and suddenly unleashed a powerful spell. The light of the spell instantly illuminated the astonished faces of the young wizards surrounding the stage. They instinctively closed their eyes and couldn't help but take a step back. "Armor protection!" Marcus Flint shouted urgently. Boom! Then a muffled thud was heard, like a firecracker being covered and then exploding. The stage seemed to shake a few times. "What's wrong?" Ron asked timidly. Page 23. Harry, however, never looked away. Flint blocked the spell. On stage, Flint swayed as if he were drunk. His hands were numb, but he managed to block the spell. Flint breathed a sigh of relief. In any case, at least the curse could be blocked, right? However, he didn't know that this was merely the power Cyrus was using for the duel. Moreover, a qualified ironclad charm user should not only block attacks but also reflect the power of the spell. How many times can you block, Flint? Cyrus asked jokingly. Marcus looked at Ginny's adorable face, but swallowed hard in fear, as if he were looking at a ferocious beast instead of a cute little girl. He couldn't help but take a few steps back, only to hear another, even more terrifying voice behind him. Use the spell I taught you, Flint. Snape roared in his characteristic way. Flint shuddered and took another step toward Cyrus. He didn't become braver, rather, it was as if thorns had grown on his back, forcing him to move forward. A black dragon emerges from its cave. The tip of his wand exploded, and a black snake darted out of it, crashing heavily to the ground. It then raised itself, bared its fangs, and began to hiss. The young wizards who were nearby immediately jumped away in terror, their faces turning ashen. Marcus, seeing the spell Snape had taught him take effect, immediately looked at Cyrus with smug satisfaction. However, he couldn't see any fear on Cyrus's face. In fact, Cyrus was examining the little black snake he had summoned. Compared to the basilisk, it was as small as a black tongue, but it was also baring its teeth and didn't look scary at all. In fact, it was rather cute. What's wrong, Flint? Don't tell me you're going to scare me with this. Cyrus chuckled. He had excellent control over Parseltongue and wouldn't speak it unknowingly like Harry did. It's okay, the little ones are cute too. Flint felt humiliated, and although he had been humiliated enough during this period, he still couldn't swallow this insult. Seeing Cyrus's annoying appearance, he gritted his teeth and cast another spell on the snake. This time it's an expansion curse. The black snake swelled up instantly, as if its belly had been filled with air. Its head almost touched the ceiling, and with a powerful sweep of its tail, it sent Flint flying. The hall erupted into chaos as the young wizard screamed and scattered like rats in a pot, only to bump into each other. Lockhart's legs gave way, and he collapsed to the ground. Please keep reading, everyone. Reading rate is really important for a new book. If you like this book, please skip to the end of the page. Love you all. Chapter 37 Snake-like Voice. Thanks for the generous donation, I'll be working overtime to support the boss. The hall was filled with the screams of young wizards. Many witches fainted from fright, and even Snape turned pale. Of course, Snape wasn't afraid of a snake a billion times larger. The fact that it could be affected by the expansion charm proved that the snake itself wasn't a magical creature and didn't have much magical resistance. A single spell would be enough to kill it. But now that such a huge riot has occurred, what if the young wizards get hurt? He couldn't help but resent Flint, that useless fool, who taught him to use the inflation charm on summoned creatures. But at that moment, Flint had already been knocked unconscious by the giant snake he had conjured. Calm down. Snape had to add a spell to his voice so that it would reach the ears of every young wizard. This was probably the only time in his life he had ever spoken so loudly that Harry felt like his ears were filled with Snape's voice, which made him feel nauseous for a while. Ginny, run. Ron was in a panic. He, Percy, and the twins tried to rush up and pull Cyrus back, but the young wizards were all running away. Nearly 1,000 of them were crammed together, like an rip-tide carrying them further and further away. Hermione was completely flustered. She didn't know what to do, and her mind went blank until Harry called her back. Send me there, Hermione. What? Get me to Ginny's side. Harry shouted anxiously. But how do we do that? Use the levitation charm on my clothes. Harry quickly came up with an idea. Okay, I understand. If Hermione were a little calmer, she would have thought that instead of sending Harry over, it would be better to bring Ginny over directly. But right now, her mind wasn't working, and she could only passively follow orders. Fortunately, she hadn't forgotten the spell. Ugadal Vyasa. As Hermione's wand rose, Harry immediately felt his clothes being caught on something and lifted upwards with him. His field of vision suddenly widened, and he loved seeing Hermione's panicked face. Ron, who had been with them but had been separated from them, desperately trying to get closer to Ginny but being tripped by Draven, George and Fred being held by Lee and Wood, and Percy, who wasn't in good shape. Harry only saw his face struggling as he was swallowed up by the crowd. Harry quickly felt the world spinning around him, and then he was slammed onto the stage, landing between Ginny and the giant black snake. Harry. Broken. Cyrus and Snape both exclaimed in surprise. How did you get here, Harry? Cyrus asked calmly. Harry tried to speak, but he twisted his arm when he fell to the ground, and the pain made him gasp for breath. Don't move. Potter, Weasley, let me handle this. Snape took a step forward, his heart pounding, afraid that any small movement by Harry and Cyrus might anger the snake. He didn't dare to use a spell to kill it directly. Even if the snake was dead, it was still dangerous. Even if it only had a head, it could still bite through a person's body with its fangs. But Harry felt he didn't need to listen to Snape. He can talk to snakes. Without thinking twice, he took a step forward, his eyes fixed on the black snake. Cyrus watched Harry's small figure disappear into the distance and could tell that Harry was actually quite scared himself. But Ginny Weasley was his best friend's sister, so he was willing to risk his life to save her. Cyrus, of course, didn't need his help. Harry, you don't need. But Harry had already opened his mouth, letting out a hoarse, terrifying sound. The great hall fell silent instantly, far more effectively than the amplification spell Snape had used. The enormous black snake immediately quieted down, lowered its head and rested it against Harry's chest, looking so docile. "It's all right, Ginny." Harry breathed a sigh of relief, reached out and touched the black snake's head, then turned around. Only then did he realize something was wrong. All 1,000 people in the Great Hall were staring at him in horror. What happened? Harry looked puzzled. But before anyone could respond, Cyrus grabbed his wrist and pulled him off the stage. "What happened? Don't talk, let's go." Ron rushed over and grabbed Harry's other hand, with Hermione quickly following behind. As they passed, everyone quickly made way for them. They avoided Harry as if they had seen the snake itself. They remained silent the entire way, until they rushed from the first floor to the tower, and finally arrived at the now empty Gryffindor common room, where Ron finally spoke up and asked, "You speak Parsleyan. Why didn't you tell us? What am I?" Harry didn't understand, but he clearly realized something was wrong. "Parsleyan," Cyrus exclaimed, feigning surprise at the incredible fact that he was hearing this for the first time. "You can talk to snakes." "I know," Harry said. "I mean, this is the second time I've done it. Once at the zoo, I accidentally let a python out, and it attacked my cousin Dudley. It's a long story, but the python told me it had never been to Brazil, and I just let it out without thinking. I didn't mean to. At that time, I didn't know I was a wizard." "A giant python tells you it has never been to Brazil?" Ron asked in a weak voice. "What's wrong?" Harry said. "I bet a lot of people here could do that." "You're wrong, Harry," Cyrus shook his head. "Very few people can understand the language of snakes, very few, and very poorly." "What's so bad?" Harry asked. "But if I hadn't told that snake to be quiet, it might have attacked you." "Oh, so that's what you said to him." "What do you mean? You were there too, you heard me speak." "We don't understand." "I hear you speaking in Parsleyan, the language of snakes. You can say anything. The way you speak sounds like you're urging a snake on. It's creepy, you know," Cyrus said. He certainly possessed this skill, but unlike Harry, he had much more control over Parsleyan. "Of course, I know you would never harm me, but they won't think so." Harry stared at him, dumbfounded. "I'm speaking another language?" Booty didn't realize how could I be speaking another language without even knowing it. Ron shook his head. He and Hermione both looked somber, as if someone had died. Harry couldn't understand what could be so terrible. "Even so, so what? You believe me, that's enough. You know I'm planning to save you, aren't I?" he said to Cyrus. "So what if I can talk to snakes?" "It's very important," Hermione finally said in a low voice, "because the ability to talk to snakes is a famous skill of Salazar Slytherin. That's why the symbol of the Slytherin school is a snake." Harry's mouth dropped open. "That's right," Cyrus said. "Now, everyone in the school will think you're a descendant of Slytherin, but his great-great-great-great-grandson and all that. They'll think you're the one who opened the Chamber of Secrets." Page 24. "But I'm not," Harry said. He felt a panic he couldn't explain. "You'll find that this is hard to prove," Hermione said. "He lived about 1,000 years ago. Based on all we know, you are very likely his successor. Not to mention," Cyrus looked into Harry's eyes and pursed his lips, "not to mention, rumors never need your consent." Harry was immediately struck by a silent force. Thank you so much to reader 1338459675374563328 for the 10,500 Kidian coins reward. "This is the first time in my life I've received so many rewards. I'm so touched I could cry. I stayed up all night to add extra chapters for the boss." Chapter 38. Hermione, shall we take a bath together? The four of them were silent for a while. Harry was upset, and Cyrus slowly walked to the window. At that moment, it started to snow lightly outside. Cyrus was also lost in thought, and for a moment the only sound in the lounge was the crackling of firewood. Not long after, Harry and Ron went upstairs to rest. He was probably worried that the club members would be back soon. To be honest, after what happened, Harry didn't know what to do. Escaping seems to be the easiest option. Only Cyrus and Hermione remained in the common room. The little witch picked up a book and read for a while, then started to feel sleepy. "Shall we go and rest?" Hermione said to Cyrus. "But how about we take a bath first? It's a bit cold." "Cyrus? Okay. Hogwarts has many lavatories with showers. In fact, the dormitories have their own public bathhouses. However, unlike luxurious places like the prefectural bathhouses, the dormitory bathhouses are simply separate communal bathhouses for men and women. Since Cyrus was using Ginny's body, he could only enter the women's bathhouse. The bathhouse wasn't cold at all. Once the shower was turned on, warm water cascaded down. Hogwarts didn't have solar panels or water heaters, but magic could be used to heat the water. The bathroom was filled with steam. Cyrus sat with another small tablet, while Hermione carefully washed her frizzy hair. "Ginny, could you help me wipe my back? I can't reach it." "Of course," Cyrus said calmly. He's not a lolicon and has no interest in Hermione, who's just a flat-chested girl, for the time being. The next morning, Cyrus, looking much more refreshed than Ginny, came downstairs to find Harry sitting silently by the burning fireplace. Ron and Hermione were playing wizard chess. "What's wrong with you guys? Aren't you going to class?" "There's only herbalism class today, it's been cancelled." Ron turned his head. "It's snowing heavily, Professor Sprout is going to put socks and a scarf on the Mandrake." Then Hermione whispered in Cyrus's ear, "It's been tough for Harry, you know what happened yesterday, everyone's avoiding him." "I think I can help you explain," Cyrus said after thinking for a moment. But Harry had already stood up from the sofa. "No, thank you. I don't care what they think of me, as long as you believe in me, that's enough." "Where are you going?" Ron saw Cyrus and Harry walking out together. He remembered that Ginny's class was in the afternoon today. "Eat breakfast. I'm going to get some fresh air." Cyrus and Harry left the lounge together. Sure enough, a blizzard began to fall outside the castle. Thick, dark snow swirled in the sky, sealing off every window, making the castle much darker than usual during the day. "Don't worry too much, Harry. I'm sure they'll soon realize you wouldn't do such a thing. Everyone knows you're an honest person," Cyrus reassured him. "Thank you, Ginny." Harry forced a smile. He wasn't very hopeful. Just like what Ginny said yesterday, those people didn't care about the truth. They just needed something to talk about. After so much had happened, they needed an outlet for their emotions. It doesn't matter if it's him or not, and it would be better if it were him. Who can blame them when he's the famous Harry Potter? Associating such a renowned person with bad deeds always brings a unique sense of satisfaction. It's as if by doing so, they can appear more clear-headed than others. The two did not walk together, but quickly parted ways. Cyrus didn't go to the lobby for dinner, but instead went to the restroom on the third floor. The attacks had to continue. The attacks weren't for the sake of the attacks themselves, but to create panic so that the events at Hogwarts would attract attention. Only in this way could Cyrus find a way to temporarily expel Dumbledore from the school. Otherwise, even if he were resurrected, he wouldn't be a match for Dumbledore. Soon, he emerged alone from the washroom, where the basilisk was already moving through the pipes. Cyrus walked down the corridor, searching for his next target. It was snowing heavily outside. Thick, gray snowflakes drifted in the air, and the corridor was filled with wind. He quickly found a target, Justin Finley, a second-year Hufflepuff wizard from the Muggle world. He looked like he was heading to the kitchen to prepare some extra food, accompanied by a friend of his. Cyrus didn't recognize him, but that didn't matter. He cast an illusion spell on himself and then followed them. "Ernie, do you really think Harry Potter will be the heir to Slytherin?" Justin asked his companion as they walked. "To be honest, I only learned about Parseltongue yesterday. I'm pretty sure it's true, that's a power exclusive to dark wizards," Ernie said confidently. "And you saw it yourself, how terrifying he was when he was talking to that snake yesterday." "Maybe you're right." Justin nodded seriously. Cyrus had already walked up to them, and he took out his wand and waved it near Justin's temple. "The soul leaves the body." Justin's eyes immediately became unfocused, as if Cyrus had bewitched him. He stopped in his tracks. "What's wrong?" Ernie asked curiously. "It's nothing. I just remembered I have something to do and need to go back first. Could you get me a cup of hot pumpkin juice?" Justin said blankly under Cyrus's control. Ernie, unsuspecting, said, "Then you'd better be careful on the road. I remember you told him you were Muggle-born, right?" "I will be careful." Cyrus guided Justin away. Fortunately, because of the weather, there were very few people in the corridor today. It was too cold, and it was snowing. If the snow stopped, many more people would come out for a stroll. He led Justin in search of traces of the ghost in the castle, and soon they encountered the headless Nick wandering around in a dark corridor. Then, he lifted the Soul Reaper's curse from Justin's body. The bewildered wizard, still not understanding what was going on, looked around blankly. "How did I end up here? What are you doing here? Are you out of your mind? Didn't you walk here by yourself?" Nick tilted his head almost fell off and said with a puzzled look on his face. "Are you a Gryffindor ghost? What are you doing here?" "It's nothing, just something to ease your mind," Nick said melancholically. "Besides, I noticed the window here is open. I was going to close it for you, but then I realized I'm dead, a ghost." As he was speaking, he suddenly noticed an expression of extreme fear on Justin's face, and then he collapsed straight down as if his soul had left his body. "What? Am I a ghost? Is that scary?" Nick looked utterly bewildered. "I remember showing up every year when the young wizards first enrolled." He turned his head with a strange expression. Now he knew why Justin was so terrified. "My darlings, please keep reading. My follow-up reading rate is too low, and I haven't gotten a recommendation yet." Sob. "I wonder if I'll get a recommendation today." Chapter 39 Marauder's Map. I got fired from the company. Justin was petrified. Nick, who was nearly headless, was also petrified at the same time. A terrifying attacker, capable of harming even the already dead Nick, and worse, Harry once again, by sheer coincidence, appeared at the crime scene. And they got caught red-handed. Now, Professor McGonagall has taken him to Dumbledore's office. Cyrus squeezed into the crowd, biting into a piece of bread, pretending to be completely unaware of the riot. "You've come at the perfect time, Ginny." Ron saw him as if he had seen a savior. It was not hard to tell from the look in his and Hermione's eyes that they were hoping that Cyrus could provide some useful information. "Ginny, you went out with Harry, did you find anything?" Ron asked anxiously. "No, I went straight to the restaurant." Upon hearing this, Ron immediately showed a disappointed expression. Hermione then explained what Cyrus already knew perfectly well. "If we didn't know Harry, we might even think he was the murderer. Harry Potter is George, the heir to Slytherin, Fred said, shaking his head with a laugh as he looked at his brother. George looked just as absurd, but they found the whole thing quite amusing. The world's most evil wizard, Harry Potter, is a Gryffindor. Now we've defeated all the Slytherins, George said cheerfully. It's a pity that things aren't always so coincidental, otherwise we would have found out who the attacker was. George and Fred's words immediately made Cyrus wary. Marauder's Map. This Godview map, which can be described as a divine tool, is perfect for finding criminals. Page 25. However, to prevent the map from being discovered, the twins naturally couldn't take it out to look at it all the time. But what if? What if they happen to have a map when he plans to attack someone next? Cyrus couldn't guarantee that everything would unfold exactly as it did in the original story. Besides, Dumbledore was now suspicious of him, and a map would always come in handy if he planned to escape from Hogwarts. Even just confirming Dumbledore's location would provide him with a great deal of security. So he immediately went over to the twins and pulled them aside. "What are you doing, Ginny? I always had a feeling she had ill intentions." "I'm your sister, what bad intentions could I possibly have?" Cyrus said innocently. "I ask you, how did I behave last night? Did I give the Slytherins a good beating?" "That's true. You've really pleased your brothers." Fred and George immediately chimed in, reminiscing about their performance at the Slytherin Duel Club yesterday, saying gleefully, "I bet they won't be able to hold their heads up high for at least the whole year." "A whole year? I dare say, as long as Ginny is still studying at Hogwarts, they'll have a hard time. Since I've performed so well, could you do me a favor?" Cyrus had shown them the map of Yen, and now he was finally going to reveal his dagger. Gemini, however, is not fooled at all. "What does it have to do with us that you dealt with Slytherin?" Fred knew without a second thought that his sister was about to make an unreasonable request. "Ultimately, Flint, that gorilla, wanted to get back at you to avenge your curse." "That's right. Even going back a bit further, you only did it for Ron. So you should ask Ron for help," George said immediately. "But you were the one who told me to go all out against the Slytherin students before the dueling club started." And Cyrus glanced back at Ron furtively. "Do you really think Ron can be of any help?" The two brothers also subconsciously looked at the silly Ron, and for a moment they found that Cyrus's words were irrefutable. "You've convinced me. Especially the second half of the sentence." The two asked in unison, "All right, let's see what kind of help our dear sister needs. Do you remember when you saved me on the first day of school?" "You mean the secret passage?" Fred asked, feigning ignorance. "No." Cyrus raised his voice, but then lowered it again for fear of being overheard. "I mean your method of knowing where someone is even though you can't see them. Maybe you can use it to find the real killer. Looks like our sister has her eye on the secret to our success, George." "I'm not surprised at all, but no way," George said immediately. In fact, Cyrus's statement coincided with their initial idea, and they actually tried it. "It's impossible for Ginny to succeed. Nobody knows when the heir will launch an attack, and you can't keep staring at the map forever. We have to try," Cyrus said. "We've already had so many victims, and Harry has been framed. We can't let the killer get away with this. Give it to me, or I'll tell Dumbledore." Upon hearing this, Fred and George looked quite hurt. "Did you hear that? Our dear sister is blackmailing us." "I heard you, Fred. My ears are fine," George replied immediately, his face full of grief. "If you don't want the professor to know, take it out quickly." "No, we'd rather the professor know." Cyrus was surprised that even after all this, they still refused to produce the map. This puzzled him greatly. "Why? I'll return the map to you once I find the murderer." "No. That's too dangerous, Ginny. We don't want to hear that you've been petrified. Dumbledore said that this petrification spell can only be cast by someone who is proficient in dark magic, and you're only a first-year student." Despite their seemingly carefree nature, the twins actually care deeply about their younger sister. "I'm better than both of you," Cyrus said sternly. "And do you think I'm safe after defeating and humiliating those Slytherin students? If that successor really is from Slytherin, he must hate me terribly." "But you are a pureblood," Fred wavered. "I am, but there's no evidence that that person wouldn't target a pureblood, right? The words on the wall say those who oppose the heir, beware, not mudbloods, beware." Cyrus' words left the two of them speechless. "If I could know someone's location beforehand, perhaps I could know who was going to attack me, right? That makes sense." Okay, the two hesitated for a moment, but ultimately agreed that Cyrus was right. "It is easy to dodge an open spear but hard to guard against a hidden arrow. Give it to her. We've figured it out pretty well anyway." George nodded. Next, they led Cyrus outside the common room. The blizzard continued, and it was freezing outside. Almost no one was still out. However, just in case, the two of them found an empty classroom and locked the door from the inside. Then Fred dramatically pulled a square piece of paper out of his robe. "To be honest, I'm quite reluctant to part with it." "That's right, back then, we were only in first grade, young, carefree, and innocent." Cyrus immediately smiled. "Ah, more innocent than now. Back then we had a bit of a falling out with Filch. So he pulled us into his office and started threatening us with his usual tactics. And we couldn't help but spot one of his filing cabinet drawers, which was marked, confiscated items, high danger, Hey, what would you do in my shoes? Fred said. George threw another dung bomb to distract him, and I immediately opened the drawer and grabbed this one. It's not as bad as it sounds, you know, George said. We estimate that Filch never really figured out how to use it. But he probably guessed what it was, otherwise he wouldn't have confiscated it. Do you know how to use it? Oh, I know, Fred said with a smug smile. This little darling has taught us more than all the teachers in the school have. He drew his wand, tapped the parchment lightly, and said, I solemnly swear that I will not do anything good. In an instant, fine lines of ink, like a spider web, spread out from where the tip of George's wand had touched, connecting and crisscrossing, extending to every corner of the parchment. Then, words appeared at the top, in large green letters. Moon face, worm tail, big feet and forked head. Gentlemen who are dedicated to helping those who create magical pranks. Introducing Marauder's Map. This map depicts all the details of Hogwarts Castle and the grounds, but what is most unusual is that there are many small black dots moving on the map, each labeled with its name in very small font. Besides being able to mark everyone's location, you also marked many secret passages. The one we went to last time led to Hogsmeade, but we were worried you'd run off alone, so we lied and said it was blocked. But now, we have to admit your skills are truly impressive. Moon face, worm tail, big feet, forked paws, George exclaimed, patting the map's title. Thanks to them. Noble people, working tirelessly to help a new generation of disobedient students, Fred said solemnly. Yes, right, George chimed in cheerfully, don't forget to wipe it off after you're done. Otherwise, everyone else will see it, Fred warned. Just tap it again and say, prank over, and it will turn back into a blank sheet of paper. Well, Ginny, Fred said in a mocking tone, mimicking Percy, you better watch yourself. After taking the parchment, Cyrus immediately adopted the same solemn expression. Thank you. I'll return it to you when I'm done using it. Good news. I received a recommendation text message. Bad news. I got fired from my company. Please give me some votes to cheer me up. Chapter 40 Transformation into Draco. After obtaining the Marauder's Map, Cyrus couldn't help but study it. The invention, developed by a few students, had unexpectedly powerful effects. Cyrus couldn't help but marvel at how different students were during wartime. Look at what the students at Hogwarts are busy doing these days. The class monitor, who is supposed to be a role model, is actually in a relationship. And they even kissed in the women's restroom. I'm talking to you, Percy. Cyrus stood at the door of the third-floor restroom. He had only wanted to check on the progress of the compound potion, but now, seeing the man and woman who had appeared in the women's restroom, his eyes narrowed. Ginny? Percy's face flushed red, and he jerked his hands away from Penelope's arms as if he had been electrocuted. You, what are you doing here? Going to the toilet? You are the one. Cyrus took a step back, turned his head to look at the sign outside the toilet, and after confirming once again that this was the women's toilet, he casually looked at the two couples whose future was hopeless. Dating in the girls' restroom? I really don't understand you guys. Hogwarts doesn't forbid dating, so why are you being so secretive? As she spoke, she looked at Penelope again. Penelope Crivat. From Ravenclaw. Hello, Ginny. Penelope wasn't much better off than Percy, her face as red as if it had been painted with dye, and her lips were trembling as she spoke. Hello, Miss Crivat, Cyrus greeted her in return. He just wanted to keep the two lovers away from the third-floor restroom to avoid any accidents at a crucial moment. Listen to me, Ginny. Percy seemed to recover from her nervousness and immediately spoke. Could you please keep it a secret? Cyrus asked in return. The couple nodded immediately. You know what would happen if George and Fred found out? Percy shuddered at the mere thought of the scene.
Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.